Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Web Audio TV. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button.
251 The Temptation of the 100 Night Flower Honey. After much persuasion, her friends agreed to wait till tomorrow. Su Yuan lay down on the bed. He squinted his eyes and looked at his overlord. The spaghetti-strap nightgown outlined her perfect curves. Her petite body was beautiful. Her legs were long and slender. Every part of her body was exquisite. Move a little over there. Leave some space for me, said Yuan. She looked stern as if reiterating that she was the boss here. However, if Su Yuan didn't move willingly, she could not really push him to the side even if she used all her might. In the end, Su Yuan moved a little to make space for her beside him. What an unromantic guy. I wasted so much time dressing up for nothing. Yuan sighed. She didn't know if Su Yuan really disliked her, or if he just enjoyed making things difficult for her. Yuan thought about it for a while until she fell asleep resentfully. The next morning, as the sun filtered into the room, Su Yuan pushed her off the bed. She fell on the floor. Her beautiful face was in intimate contact with the floor at this point. What the? Yuan was in the middle of a beautiful dream. She dreamt that the unruly Su Yuan had transformed into a human and become her loyal sidekick. She was even in the middle of a wedding ceremony with him until she fell on the floor. Yuan rubbed her drowsy eyes and kicked Su Yuan. Your friends are already here. Hurry and wash up, said Su Yuan. The 100 Night Flower Honey was a very attractive benefit for women. Her friends usually woke up late. However, they had gathered in her territory right at dawn. They were very impatient to check the honey that Yuan had described. Yuan quickly changed her clothes. They can't even wait. Her analysis was indeed correct. When her three close friends heard that honey had a special effect, they had been too impatient to sleep. They were willing to visit Yuan's territory last night, but she had firmly refused. There was a limited amount of 100 Night Flower Honey. Yuan divided it into 4 equal portions. They got 500 G each. Yuan chose fair play and measured everything equally. They were like sisters, after all. It was a pity that Yuan couldn't bring back the beehive with her. The beeswax she found was also good stuff. She could only wait for the night devil bees to collect nectar painstakingly and produce a new batch of the 100 Night Flower Honey. This is really good stuff. Ever since you signed the contract with that dragon, you've been getting lucky, said Lin Yao enviously. They had great heroes as well. However, they hadn't reaped as many benefits as Yuan. Shi Linglong used her slender fingers to dip into the honey and licked it. An indescribable feeling spread through her body. It was as though a warm current flowed down her throat. The aroma was rich, but the honey wasn't very greasy. It was indeed a top-quality honey. They didn't know if it could truly restore their youths, but the attribute panel wouldn't lie about something like that. It definitely had beautifying effects, but they didn't yet know how the effects would manifest. It would be perfect if they could stay young forever. Su Yuan wasn't interested in the honey. He looked up at the cloudless blue sky. This world was getting more and more interesting. Yuan and her friends consumed a little of the honey when Zhao Qingrong revealed fascinating news. 2 days ago, her territory's underlings discovered a high-grade ore mine. This was useful. Yuan needed 2,000 tons of resources to upgrade her territory core to level 4, after all. That wasn't a small amount. Zhao Qingrong was proud of what she had found. Their resources had been depleting. She had found a big mine. Even if they divided it amongst themselves, each of them would benefit with almost a few hundred tons of resources. However, high returns were often accompanied by high risks. The monsters around the high-level mine were probably of level 60. Other lords would not dare to mine high-level ore veins, but they had the powerful demon dragon on their side. Thus, they decided to venture there. Su Yuan, what do you think? Yuan asked. What are you waiting for? I think you should hurry and do whatever you need to do, said Su Yuan. n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. He was obviously going to stay back. Yuan nodded. With the demonic dragon's blessing, they could probably handle the monsters in the mine. Besides, Su Yuan staying back in the territory was a good thing if the light types decided to attack. Yuan, Zhao Qingrong, Shi Linglong, and Lin Yao each led their mighty troops and marched. The 4 of them were pretty powerful. No one dared to challenge them. Everyone climbed up the tall hill. Zhao Qingrong led the way. The area filled with ores attracted everyone's attention. Numerous glittering ores reflected the light of the setting sun. It looked so beautiful. Yuan shared the vision with Su Yuan. High-grade gem mine. Level, mini. Reserves, 920 tons. Note, rare resource point. After occupying it, it can produce a small number of minerals every week. Everyone's spirits were lifted. They were eager to get started. Such a rare gem mine was hard to find. They couldn't be compared to ordinary resources like wood and iron. Most of them were of the mini level. However, the yield would be enough. There was no doubt about how precious this discovery was. With such rare resources, they could even build a hero altar and summon other heroes to their territory. Yuan and the others composed themselves. They wanted to leap for joy. They turned to look at the creatures guarding the gem mine. If they wanted to use the mine, they needed to get rid of the monsters first. All of them looked unique. The 2 goat horns on the creatures' heads were sharper than a spear. They had raised back and some membranes on their neck that looked like fins. There were sharper thorns on the fins. Their upper bodies were bare, and they were wearing skirts made of animal skin. Their muscles were particularly bulgy as though they crushed mountain rocks for breakfast. The goat-horned monsters held long-handled hammers. The front of the hammers was flat, and the other side was sharp and curved like a scythe. The most noticeable feature was their eyes. The eyes were blood red. They flickered with cruelty and murderous intent. 252 The Boiling Goat Monsters. Boiling Goat Monsters Nov, L, B //JNN. Level, 64. Potential, SSS. Skill, Level S. Body Strengthening. Strength increased by 50%. Stamina recovery speed increased by 50%. Abilities. Heavy Strike, A grade. Swing from the Giant Hammer. After charging up the power for 3 seconds, the next attack can inflict 200% damage. Demon's Blood, D grade. All attributes increased by 30%. Physique increased by 50%. Racial Talent, can devour gems to quickly recover from injuries. Bond Demons, when monsters are greater than 10 in number, strength will increase by 10%. If the monsters are greater than 20 in number, strength will increase by 20%. If the monsters are greater than 30 in number, strength will increase by 30%. When attacking, there will be a crushing effect, if activated. Note, always treated second to sheep. These creatures have taken their resentment and channeled it into the Iron Hammer. Be careful or you will be beaten to death. Good lord, another rare SSS class creature. So on side, there were thousands of these monsters. Why was there a need for such strong monsters to guard a small mine? Suan and the others couldn't help but sigh at the work it would take to obtain the resources. They decided to charge. Although the Boiling Goat monsters' level and attributes were high, they didn't have any instant death effect they could use. Even if the troops died here, they could be resurrected by Shu Yuan back in the territory. On the other hand, the Boiling Goat monsters could inflict heavy physical damage. At most, they would feel pain but wouldn't die permanently. Everyone, prepare for battle. The 9-headed Hydra, the red-eyed Black Dragon, the White Dragon Saint, and the numerous Night Devil Bees charged. Shi Linglong and the others were unwilling to fall behind and sent out their elite troops to assist. There was no doubt that they would win this fight. Su Yuan yawned and watched as Suan shared the vision. He wondered why the light types were being so quiet. They hadn't appeared since the last time. Su Yuan lay on the ground in boredom. The little butterfly fluttered around him dutifully. The flower fairy tried to recall more from her memories of the past. Attack. The White Dragon Saint gave his orders. The vanguard rushed down the hill to charge. The fully armored soldiers sent by Lin Yao followed closely. The last one was a wizened mage and an archer who wore a colorful crown and held a black scepter in his hand. The Boiling Goat monsters in the gem mine immediately noticed that something was strange. They suddenly became alert. The muscles in his arms tensed as they grabbed the long-handled hammer tightly. Their blood-red eyes emitted a terrifying chill. They looked at the approaching troops with murderous intent. Roar. The Boiling Goat monsters roared collectively at the sky. Ned lowly creatures? How dare you provoke us? You are seeking your own death. The leader of the Boiling Goat monster horde shouted. Kill them. Dozens of Boiling Goat monsters charged without hesitation. They wanted to crush these enemies that had suddenly appeared. Their hooves stomped on the rocks. The impact broke and scattered the rocks. Numerous Boiling Goat monsters charged at the same time. Dust billowed in their wake. The hill was not very steep. The White Dragon Saint stopped in his tracks halfway down. He spat out fire. The fully armored warriors raised their giant swords, and the power of the soul burst out. A dark blue light overflowed from the helmet. The mages in the back raised their scepters and silently chanted an incantation. The night elves raised their bows and notched their magic arrows. When the first dozen or so Boiling Goat monsters were near, the White Dragon Saint let out a ferocious roar. His power was stretched to the limit. He let out Dragon's Breath in full fury. Dragon's Breath releases Dragon's Breath, causing AoE damage to the target in the area. The warriors waved their giant swords. The blades cut through the air with a clang. It created an illusion in the air. The Boiling Goat monsters were not as strong as the enemy. They were closing in on the enemies. By the time the Dragon's Breath and the sword slash reached them, they couldn't manage to dodge. The sound of blades cutting through the flesh rang in the air. A Boiling Goat monster's arm was cut off. Blood gushed out. The giant swords veered back to their owners like boomerangs. The Boiling Goat monster that had lost an arm was in agony. It then felt another sharp pain in its back, quickly spreading to its chest. It lowered its head to see a sword trying to cut through his chest. The creature felt the strength leave its body and fell unconscious on the ground. At close range, the giant swords could inflict damage beyond any ordinary level. It was a dangerous weapon. At the same time, the other soldiers launched their attacks. The Boiling Goat monsters tried to dodge. However, one of them was caught in the Dragon's Breath and turned into ashes. Immediately after, 2 of the Boiling Goat monsters fell dead to the ground before they could even advance toward the enemy troops in the front row. Although the other Boiling Goat monsters tried their best to fight back, they fell one after the other. Everything happened too quickly. The remaining Boiling Goat monsters watched their companions fall. They stared at the giant swords flashing in the setting sun. Fresh blood stained the ground. The scene didn't scare the monsters away. Instead, it infuriated them further. Their red eyes looked even redder. They brandished their giant hammers and charged forward as if they were going to tear every enemy apart. The second wave of the Boiling Goat monsters charged forward and engaged with the Scorpion warriors in close combat. The long-handled iron hammers in their hands contained terrifying power. They swore to crush the enemies at any cost. The boiling goat monster swung its hammer at a scorpion warrior in front of it. The warrior felt the threat and blocked the attack in time with his sword. A loud clang rang out as the sword and the hammer clashed. Sparks flew. The boiling goat monster was shorter than the fully armored warrior, but the impact of its hammer made the warrior take 3 steps back. The warriors, unrivaled in close combat in other fights, had difficulty matching up to the ferocious boiling goat monsters. The difference widened the gap in strength between the two sides. However, the warriors were fearless despite the setback. No matter how the boiling goat monsters attacked, they held their ground. The battle turned intense. The white dragon saint was like a mad beast as he ruthlessly attacked and killed several boiling goat monsters in an instant. A dark light flashed across the sky. The mage's reinforcement was here. They cast a curse. The enemies would be weakened, and their attributes would decrease by 10%. The cooldown time for the spell was 5 minutes. 253 Hero Altar. The fierce boiling goat monsters felt the drain in energy and strength. The speed at which they swung their hammer was slower. Some of them even came to a standstill. The troops wasted no time and attacked. Only now did the boiling goat monsters notice the mages. However, the monsters' defense was still strong. Unfortunately, mages were few, while the monsters were many. The night devil bees attacked from the sky. They shot their stingers at the boiling goat monsters. The boiling goat monster, who was at a standstill with a warrior, swung its hammer. Numerous cracks appeared on the sword blocking the hammer, and it shattered into pieces. The boiling goat monster did not give up. It swung the hammer again and smashed the scorpion warrior. The warrior's chest was fatally injured due to the impact of the attack. The boiling goat monster noticed something was wrong. The chest had felt soft like cotton when the hammer had struck. This was one of the life-saving abilities of the scorpion warriors. They could turn as soft as cotton to lower the damage on impact. Charge. Yuan thought that the time was right for them to charge at full power. Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao quickly sent their respective heroes and troops to assist. They were also worried about Yuan. They knew that she rarely participated in battles. Yuan envied her friends. Their heroes were so obedient. They weren't at all like Su Yuan. Is your dragon being naughty with a funai? He didn't come to fight. He has been holed up in the territory with a funai all this while. He is definitely up to something, Zhao Qingrong said teasingly. Yuan was frustrated. He had refused to accompany them and had wanted to stay back with the little butterfly and a funai. Su Yuan, do you want to come and help? Asked Yuan through the shared communication. She hoped he would listen to her and save her the humiliation just this once. However, Su Yuan didn't care. It was just an Ormine. He didn't think he was needed to defeat a few useless monsters. Yuan cursed inwardly when she didn't receive a response from him. She took out her anger on the boiling goat monsters. You filthy, useless animals, shouted Yuan. Kill them all. The advancing troops raised their weapons and attacked. Like butchers, they slaughtered the monsters in front of them. The boiling goat monsters were torn limb from limb. At the same time, numerous poison needles fell from the sky like lightning. The needles pierced one of the boiling goat monsters, injecting its body with poison. The troops charged in full force. They didn't hold back. The boiling goat monsters had immense capability of inflicting physical damage, but now they were scurrying away in fear with nowhere to go. They could destroy mountains. They could even fight the warriors if they tried. However, they had no solution for the venomous stingers raining down on them from the sky. A warrior swung his sword in anger. Before the boiling goat monsters could react, the sword split its chest. It fell on the ground. The scorpion warriors stalled the advance of the boiling goat monsters. Finally, they had the upper hand in this fight. The mages cast their spells to restrict the movement of the boiling goat monsters. The night elves shot their arrows from the back. Yuan and the others advanced from all sides. With everyone charging from all directions, the monsters were slaughtered easily. Yuan killed the leader of the boiling goat monsters, putting an end to the fight. Congratulations, Lord Yuan. You have successfully eliminated the boiling goat monsters and gained victory in this mini-battle. You receive 200 EXP. Congratulations on receiving a hero altar blueprint as a reward. I can't take this, said Yuan. They had fought equally in this battle. She didn't feel it was fair for her to take the reward. Yuan thought she was already gaining too many resources because her friends had included her in their discovery of the Ormine. Besides, the blueprint was too precious for her to take. People usually paid a lot of money to get a blueprint like that. Don't be silly, said Zhao Qingrong. Take it. It's yours. We've gained a lot from you two in the past. It's only fair that you have this. Others felt the same. It was just a blueprint. It couldn't compare to their friendship. Moreover, the stronger Yuan became, the more they could bask in her glory. We are sisters? Just take it. We'll distribute the resources equally. That's right. Shi Linglong and Lin Yao agreed as well. In the end, Yuan accepted the blueprint gratefully. The four friends had displayed bravery and perfect teamwork in eliminating the enemies. They felt excited. The hammers in the hands of the dead boiling goat monsters dissipated. This was one of the rules of the Overlord plane. The weapons and equipment of the creatures lost power as they died. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. Yuan and the others didn't pay attention to this and happily stepped into the ore mine. The crystals and gems sparkled in the crevices of the mine. They looked beautiful as they reflected the light of the setting sun. They are so pretty. A system notification appeared. Do you wish to conquer this gem mine? The mine was first discovered by Zhao Qingrong, so only she could accept the prompt. Yuan and the others got 230 tons of resources from the mine. The gem was a necessary material to build the hero altar. Yuan was happy. Today was a good day. She was ready to go back and show off in front of Su Yuan. After the fight with the boiling goat monsters, Yuan realized that she was powerful. In the past, she had never accepted the fact that she could be strong, too. The four lords explored the gem mine. When they found no other resources, they did not linger. They returned to their respective territories in satisfaction. 254 mythical ruins. When they returned to their respective territories, it was already dark. My lord, your majesty, dinner is ready. Also, the search teams that went out today are back. Yuan sat on the chair proudly. She pretended to be unfazed as she whipped out the blueprint and waved it in front of Su Yuan. This thing has a price and a value, but it is not in the market. This is rare and I got it. We can summon heroes with it. Can we summon something as powerful as the Hydra or the other heroes we have? Asked Su Yuan. Yuan was at a loss. The red-eyed black dragon and the white dragon saint both were from the ancient dragon bloodline. The Hydra was also very powerful. In Su Yuan's eyes, the hero altar was any other unit that could be built in the territory without much significance. Most lords' initial heroes could not compare to the strength and power of the heroes Yuan had in her territory. Yuan realized she didn't really have anything of use to show off after all. At this time, the Dark Enchanter returned. As the leader of the Dark Alliance, she was always busy with the job that needed to be done to recruit more dark types. She was rarely there with them these days. Yuan's jealousy and hostility toward her had decreased. The flower fairy and the little butterfly weren't as glamorous and accomplished as the Dark Enchanter, so she had nothing to worry about. Your Majesty, it is very nice to see you again. The Dark Enchanter smiled amiably at Su Yuan. You too, my lord. Humph. If you have something to report, just do it already, said Yuan. The scouting team has discovered another mythical ruin. It's related to the dark types, so there must be things of value inside n/o/vel/b/n.c//om. The ruins also had levels, according to their value and danger inside them. There were the ordinary ruins, the high-level ruins, followed by mythical ruins and ancients. The mythical and ancient ruins were too powerful and contained things of great value. Even a level 1 mythical ruin had powerful creatures guarding the place. Well done, said Su Yuan. Ask the fallen angel if he knows about any grudges between the light types that might be of use to us. The flower fairy's eyes widened. So, the fallen angel was the legendary angel? The Dark Enchanter had dinner with them before she left to continue with the affairs of the Dark Alliance. Yuan began to prepare for the construction of the hero altar. The construction would be completed after they came back from exploring the mythical ruin. She would try to summon a hero at that time. Yuan felt that she couldn't always depend on the red-eyed black dragon, the white dragon saint, and the Hydra to help her. They were part of the Dark Alliance. So, they would have to focus on their own jobs in the future. If Su Yuan wasn't so lazy, she wouldn't have to worry. However, Yuan was afraid she would have to fight everything alone while exploring the ruins. Do you think we can really summon a hero with this? Asked Yuan. I'm not sure, said Su Yuan. Why don't we try summoning a hero after we are back from exploring the ruins? I'm not interested. Although he refused, Yuan decided that she would let him do the honors. Perhaps he could summon a hero as strong as himself? That night, Yuan called for a meeting and made plans to explore the mythical ruin. The mythical ruin was bound to be more dangerous than anything they had ever dealt with before. Yuan urged Su Yuan to come with them. The Hydra, the red-eyed black dragon, and the white dragon saint stayed back in the territory to guard the territory core. Scarlin led the night elves. Yuan invited her friends, Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao on this mission too. Lin Yao wore a new set of leather armor that accentuated her figure. Yuan hadn't noticed that Lin Yao was so voluptuous. The intimidating aura and her delicate face made an interesting contrast. Zhao Qingrong held a cross-shaped longsword in her hand. Her beautiful eyes looked sharp. She looked completely different from the immature Shi Linglong. Her fierce expression might have caused panic among those who didn't know her. Yuan looked at her friend all dressed and ready. She couldn't help but feel suspicious. All of them weren't so dressed up yesterday. Did they all dress up because Su Yuan is following us today? They agreed that everybody would listen to Yuan's orders once they entered the ruins. The mythical ruin was dangerous, so it was good to elect one leader to follow in times of panic. They all set off. Yuan jumped on Su Yuan's back. The others looked at her with envy. They all had their own mounts but not as cool as Yuan's. Only Yuan knew how painful it was to ride on a dragon's back. The hard scales hurt her behind. She would have to carry a cushion next time. The troops moved silently forward. The Dark Enchanter's map was accurate, so they weren't afraid of getting lost on the way. After following the directions for about 3 hours, they came upon a location where the wind got stronger. The wind blew the sand in their faces and made it harder to see. Wind and sand raged to prevent them from moving forward. It was no wonder there were no other people here. Nobody in their right mind would try to venture here. Scarlin sent a few night elves to scout the area. The further they advanced, the stronger the sandstorm became. They couldn't even open their eyes. Only Yuan remained unaffected. With Su Yuan's protection, the sandstorm didn't touch her. With Su Yuan around, no other creatures dared to approach them to make trouble. Everyone braved the sandstorm and continued to move forward. Yuan looked at the map in her hand. Su Yuan, we've arrived. Su Yuan flapped his wings and descended to the ground. The ruins are in the mountain range ahead. Yuan pointed in a direction. In the howling wind, the troops advanced toward the foot of the mountain range. The mountain range was at least 100 meters high and extended for hundreds of meters in width. It was spectacular. There was a visible dent in the front due to the strong wind. Everyone stood in the deep pit. The sandstorm was less strong here. Su Yuan looked at the mountain range. Is the ruin buried under that? He activated the true eye of the demon dragon. They had reached the right place. Linglong, Qingrong, Yao Yao, you all can send your troops to examine the area as well, said Su Yuan. He wanted to make sure that the area was safe before they advanced any further. Yuan pouted unhappily. She was supposed to be the one giving the orders? 255 entering the mythical ruin. Yuan felt a little jealous because he referred to them so informally. Meanwhile, Su Yuan's gaze was focused on the mountain range in front of him. The wind whistled around them. Yuan stood by him in silence. People usually couldn't overcome the temptation and impatience when they saw a mythical ruin, which was the reason they ended up dead. However, Yuan and Su Yuan weren't swayed by those emotions. They wanted to take every precaution to explore the ruins safely. Half an hour later, Shi Linglong and the others returned to report on what they had found. Only then did Su Yuan feel at ease. Yuan took out the key that the Dark Enchanter had given her. She inserted it into the lock. The massive mountain range shook and sent tremors everywhere when the key was turned. Rocks fell from the mountaintop. The key was buried within. Yuan was forced to retreat. Everyone, retreat for now, leave this valley, Su Yuan shouted. He felt that something was wrong. The mountain range shook and dislodged giant rocks from above. Boulders and dust rolled down like an avalanche. This was something that couldn't be solved with human capabilities. Su Yuan swooped down, grabbed Yuan, and flew up into the sky before she was buried underneath the rubble. The crater they had been standing on was buried by rocks and boulders that fell from above. Yuan looked carefully to make sure no one was crushed beneath it. She heaved a sigh of relief. The dust flew everywhere. It was difficult to see. After a long while, the place finally returned to its previous calm. What appeared in front of them blew their minds. The mountain range was like an enormous goddess that had shorn off its cloak to reveal its true form. There were 9 giant bronze doors. The archway in the middle was about 100 meters tall. Numerous runes were engraved on it. They shone with a faint bronze light. The door had a giant lifelike figure of a wizened wizard in a luxurious robe engraved on it. The engravings were so realistic and vivid that no mortal craftsman could have made something like that. It would probably take 100 years to get those details right. On the left and right of the main gate, there were 4 subgates. These secondary doors were also carved with mages of different shapes and sizes. They looked extraordinary. The whole scene blew their minds. Who could have built something this massive and spectacular? They were all curious to find out what kind of ruins existed within. Even Su Yuan was left speechless. The 9 bronze doors were too beautiful to look at. Yuan suddenly saw something familiar and pointed to the door on the right. The key is over there. Just as she was about to retrieve it, a notification appeared in everyone's minds. Mythical ruins discovered. The ruin might contain risks as well as opportunities. One might find a divine artifact or be cursed by a forbidden spell. Please explore with caution. Su Yuan activated the true eye of the demon dragon to check the ruin. Hero Mage Tower. Level, Mythical. Deputy Sect Threat Level, Danger gradually increases. Main Sect Threat Level, Extremely high. Note, mythical ruins cannot be upgraded. Fortunately, the Deputy Sect Threat Level was somewhat small. They walked to the bronze door on the far right. Even though it was the smallest door when compared to the others, it was still 30 meters tall. An average human felt as small as a dwarf when standing in front of it. An image of a fat mage with a big belly was engraved on the door. The mage had a kind face and gentle eyes. The bronze door rippled like water and gradually became translucent. The fat mage did not disappear. Instead, it seemed to become more vivid. Welcome, children. The engraving had a gentle voice. Yuan suddenly raised her head. Was the engraving alive? Before she could react, she saw the statue wave the staff in its hand. The next second, everyone felt a strong force surge toward them. Their vision blurred. When they came back to their senses, they found themselves in an unfamiliar environment. It was an arched hall of about 200 meters wide and 30 meters tall. 3 pitch-black passageways led to unknown places. The ceiling was carved with colorful patterns like something one would find in a luxurious palace. The surrounding walls seemed to be made of metal and shone with a faint light. A little far away, a magic lamp illuminated everything. Although the hall wasn't bright, they could still see the surroundings. The unfamiliar environment made everyone vigilant. Yuan turned and found that all her troops were with her. She let out a sigh of relief. All of them had been teleported in. You have entered the ruins and are free to explore. The notification appeared in everyone's mind, making them even more alert. Zhao Qingrong clasped the hilt of her sword tightly. Her eyes were sharp. Nov, L, B /JNN. Some kind of machinery veered and startled them. From the 3 black passageways, footsteps could be heard. Troops, retreat against the wall. Warriors, guard the front. Night devil bees, if anything attacks, you will try to disrupt their formation by stinging them. Protect the mages and the archers. Yuan gave orders to the troops. Su Yuan shook his head. He had no intention of attacking or defending their group. If anything attacked, it would be an opportunity for the troops to train. He cast an ability on Yuan and retreated. The little butterfly and flower fairy followed him and watched. As expected, another day of being used as a tool. Yuan murmured as she saw Yuan retreat. However, she had faith in him. Yuan usually knew what to do in any situation. If there was a strong enemy nearby, he wouldn't leave her to fight alone. That meant that anything present was weak enough for her and the troops to defeat on their own. The footsteps approached. Zhao Qingrong held her breath. The most fearful thing was the unknown. When they couldn't see the enemy clearly, they were bound to be scared. Under the illumination of the magic lamps, magic puppets appeared from the passages. They were 2.5 meters tall. Their bodies were made of greenish-gray metal, which looked very solid. They looked human-like, and their eyes emitted a white light. The magic puppets attacked at once. They were numerous in numbers. When the magic puppets detected their presence, their eyes turned red. Intruder alert? Kill them. The magic puppets spoke in a mechanical voice. Their hands were strange. The wrists split open and 2 sharp blades with serrated teeth appeared out of them. Those sharp blades were about half a meter long. The magic puppets had turned into killing machines. Chapter 256 Magic Puppet. Magic Puppet. Level, 55, Advanced Military Type, Defense increased by 15%. Potential, Rare A grade. Skills, Puppet Body, C grade, Razor Blade, D grade, Shield Break, D grade, Armor Break, D grade. Race Skill, Special Magic Construct, Strength increased by 50%. Binding, the puppets have the ability to cooperate in combat. Note, mages like to research and create magic puppets to protect their mage towers. Although the puppets didn't seem very strong, this was just the beginning. How powerful would the other creatures be? By normal standards, the magic puppets were considered powerful. The mythical troops that might appear later would be even more powerful. The mythical ruins were indeed terrifying. Night Devil Bees, stall the enemies. Yuan shouted. Warriors, attack them. The magic puppets approached them slowly. However, their sheer number posed a threat. The first to attack the magic puppets were the Night Devil Bees. The bees swooped down with their stingers. They attacked at the same time. 5 magic puppets exploded on impact. The magic puppets were sturdier than ordinary monsters. After the attack, the Night Devil Bees had to fly away to avoid the magic puppets. The magic puppets retaliated after they lost many of their companions. The magic puppets stood close to each other with their blades rising to the sky. The Night Devil Bees attacked again. The real fight began. The magic puppets rushed forward, and their blades hacked and slashed. The force was so potent that it could have cut through steel, too. The armor of the warriors was shredded. The metal flew everywhere. They still held their ground. The warriors brandished their swords and counterattacked. The puppets' bodies were made of metal. Their defense was incredible. No matter how ruthlessly the warriors attacked, there was no damage. After another round of attack, the magic puppets were finally pushed back. Shi Linglong's special troops were the real killing machines. The chains rattled and axes whistled. The attack power increased by 60% when her warriors threw their axes. The magic puppets didn't know how to dodge at all. The axes hit the targets and shredded them. Cracks appeared on the metal body of the puppets. The axe-wielding warriors swung the chain in their hands, and the power that erupted was transmitted to the axes through the chain. The magic puppets couldn't withstand such an attack. Their bodies shattered. They fell to the ground. Crystals fell out of the cracks in their chests. Yuan leaned down and picked up a crystal. A notification rang out. Obtained 1 gemstone. Yuan was surprised. She looked at the crystals on the ground. These gems drive the puppets. The magic puppets were no longer a threat. They turned into glittering mounds of gems. Destroy the puppets. Don't let them get away. There might be thousands of puppets here. We're going to be rich. Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao's eyes lit up. Danger indeed brought many rewards with it. There were still too many puppets in the front row, putting too much pressure. Even the elite warriors could not block their attacks. They were killed. Yuan revived them again. As long as they were not affected by the curse, they could be revived. However, Yuan and the others were still no good. Even when fighting with such weak magic puppets, they suffered a lot of losses. He needed to urge her to get stronger. Lin Yao commanded a giant lizard to fight the puppets. It bared its sharp teeth. The giant lizard wanted to tear the puppets apart. However, the puppets' metal bodies were too strong. The lizards couldn't inflict any effective damage. The size of the giant lizards did buy them some time. The warriors bearing battle axes swung their axes and attacked. Yuan ordered the night elves to fire their arrows. A volley of arrows rained down. As the magic puppet fell, the crystals fell from their cracked chests. This made everyone excited. These were rare resources. Killing the magic puppets would fetch them as many resources as a mini-resource mine might unearth. The thrill of killing the creatures and the falling crystals made everyone excited. This was a battle they wanted to win. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. As more and more magic puppets fell, their line of defense was completely torn apart. The giant lizards and the warriors were having a hard time blocking the attack of the magic puppets. However, since Yuan was there with them, it didn't pose a problem. Don't hold back. Destroy all the puppets. Yuan commanded the warriors and the lizards that had just been resurrected. The 4 lords also joined the battle and stabilized the crumbling defense line. The main strength of the magic puppets was their numbers and the pressure of their unanimous attack strategy. However, Yuan and the other lords weren't weak, either. Su Yuan, help me strengthen the troops, said Yuan. Su Yuan wanted Yuan and the troops to train, but he did not refuse to offer help. He cast the demonic dragon's blessing on all the troops. The giant lizards especially felt the surge in power. They grew sharper claws. They tore apart the magic puppets with one swipe. Although the mages could not use curses to kill their opponents, they could still use spells that affected the enemies. The mages did all they could. The warriors were ferocious. Their axes veered through the air in quick succession and tore through the magic puppets. The magic puppets were dealt a lot of damage, but their numbers were still great. Axe crush! Yuan shouted. The battle axes flew out of the hands of the warriors. It made a sharp, clanging sound. The battle axes then shattered with condensed energy. It was like a storm sweeping through everything in the surroundings. The battle axes stirred up a storm of death. The sound of metal clashing rang out in the air. Many magic puppets were impacted. Their sturdy line of defense was gradually thinning due to the sudden bombardment. Chapter 257 Extremely Rich. When the storm swept through, more than half the magic puppets were destroyed. Their combat power dropped drastically. The magic puppets were crippled. The lethality of the battle axes-bearing warriors was terrifying. However, that did not make a dent in the number of magic puppets. More rushed out from the rear to make up for the numbers lost. The battle continued. The Night Devil Bees launched another attack when the magic puppets' defense line was weakened. They were extremely agile. They swooped down and killed the magic puppets that reacted too slowly. The damage it caused was not any weaker than that of the battle axe warriors. The magic puppets were devoured under the onslaught. Gems tumbled to the ground. Yuan and the others felt energized whenever they saw the gems. They commanded the troops more eagerly to win the battle. The battle began to reach its climax. Scarlin looked at the passages from where the magic puppets were still rushing out to join the fray. Your Majesty, I request to participate in the fight. Su Yuan looked at the never-ending onslaught of magic puppets and nodded. He activated the demonic dragon's blessing and cast it on Scarlin. Scarlin transformed into the Night Elf King. He shot an arrow at lightning speed. The arrows charged toward the area where the magic puppets were dense in numbers. The 2 magic puppets were caught in a cold light. Their heads disintegrated and they flew backward. Nov. L. B /JNN. The Night Elf King's combat style was very violent. His magic arrows were sharp and powerful. Wherever the arrow passed, the magic puppets were crippled. Zhao Qingrong summoned her own champion. The hero she summoned emitted crimson energy. A blood-colored ball jumped rapidly in its hand. If that ball of blood was used to attack, it would suck out the blood of the enemies and increase damage by 50%. However, the enemies were all puppets. There was no blood that could be used, but the ball was still terrifying. The ball tore through the sky and smashed into the puppets. There was an explosion. Corrosive magic enveloped the area. Unlike the previous explosion of the warrior's weapon, this explosion was corrosive and spread sulfuric acid fumes. The fumes tore through the bodies of the puppets. The magic puppets were destroyed. The 2 top-tier heroes joined the battle, and the area became a battlefield. The number of magic puppets was decreasing. The battle lasted for nearly an hour, and the number of enemies pouring out of the passages gradually diminished until they disappeared without a trace. When the last magic puppet fell, Yuan wiped the sweat from her forehead. The intense fight had left her drained and low on stamina. However, when she looked at the floor, she was excited. The ground was covered with gems. The gems sparkled in the light of the magic lamps. Yuan was delighted. She had spent a lot of resources while building the hero altar. She wanted to make up for it. A notification appeared. Yuan, Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao were ecstatic. They gained 20,000 experience points. Also, the numerous gems on the floor made the Lord happy. Today's harvest was wonderful. Destroy the magic puppets and take out the gems. Yuan commanded. Based on what they had achieved so far, the benefits of exploring a ruin were not any less than discovering an ore mine. Yuan stared at the 3 passageways. No more magic puppets came out from there. She sent 2 scouts to explore the place. She also sent some scouts from her friend's troops. Her eyes lit up. Having more people on her side was indeed very useful. Yuan had more cannon fodder to act as scouts and distractions. After a while, the scouting team returned. They reported that it was safe to enter the passageways. My lord, I found the architectural layout of this ruin in the passageway. A night elf handed the scroll to Yuan. She glanced at Su Yuan. He nodded. Thus, she led her troop to investigate one of the passageways. Yuan opened the scroll. The edges of the scroll were yellow with age. There were various buildings marked on the layout. They continued forward. The deepest cave was marked on the scroll. It supposedly held numerous materials which were used to make the magic puppets. Yuan's heart pounded in excitement. A warehouse filled with materials. What will I find there? Unfortunately, most of the construction areas she had passed weren't marked on the scroll, which made her think of other unmarked places that might hold a lot of resources. An hour later, the magic puppets were all dismantled. The gems used as their energy source varied. The severely depleted puppets only had 2 gems inside them, while the still rich in energy had 4. In the end, they obtained around 1,000 tons of magic gems. Each lord took around 250 tons of gems. It was still a fortune. A mini gem mine only had 900 units of reserves. The harvest this time was more than they would have gotten from a mini gem mine. However, the danger was greater here. If they rushed in hastily, they might all end up dead. The risk involved in this ruin was evident from the onslaught of so many magic puppets. They couldn't take this lightly. After reorganizing the army, Yuan determined that there were no additional gains in the hall and led the troops toward the central passageway. The other two passages had already been investigated by the troops. Those two turned out to be storage areas for the magic puppets. After the magic puppets were destroyed, the other two passageways were empty. After passing through the long passage, they finally came upon the room where the magic puppets had been manufactured. The hall was 40 meters tall and over 500 meters wide. The puppets were piled up everywhere. The piles towered like mini mountains. The place smelled moldy. Most puppets had rusted away. They couldn't help feeling a bit sad at the dilapidated feeling the room emanated. They were even more disappointed at the ruined puppets. If the puppets were intact, the lords could have taken them away and formed an army of their own. Yuan led the troops and passed through the place while following the scroll. 258 Big Brother Yuan, please help. After passing through the long passageway, they entered the second floor. This was the smelting room, where all kinds of magic materials were smelted. Dozens of giant furnaces graced the wide room. There were 4 giant bellows placed under each furnace. These furnaces had long been extinguished, leaving a few rare ores scattered on the ground. The magic array on the wall had also dimmed. The most eye-catching thing was one of the furnaces, which was 30 meters tall. It was engraved with countless runes. The grandness left everyone in awe. Yuan realized that she knew close to nothing about this world. There was so much to discover. She cleared her head and turned to her fellow lords. She wanted to discuss with them whether they should send a troop to examine the area. There were definitely useful ores and gems in the room. Rumble. The open passage behind them suddenly closed. Even the gap between the doors had disappeared. They were locked in. The moment the passageway and the door disappeared, the furnaces came to life. They burned anew. The huge bellows under the furnaces blew air into them. Dozens of furnaces worked suddenly. The fire raised the temperature of the room and everything felt warm and stuffy. Yuan's calm face changed slightly as he encountered new danger. This wasn't very harmful to him, but others would die if they didn't act fast. Everyone, leave this place, shouted Yuan. Yuan heeded his words. She commanded the troops to rush to the exit. However, as they ran, the furnaces closed by released a spray of molten metal. The hot molten metal sizzled as it hit the ground and turned black. Lin Yao noticed a terrifying creature covered in flames that crawled out of one of the furnaces. This was only the beginning. Dozens of fiery fireballs crawled out of the ignited furnaces. Each of them exuded a powerful aura. The scorching heat was enough to melt everything. Quickly, retreat to the tunnel. As the troops ran, Yuan activated the true eye of the demon dragon and looked at the fiery creatures. Fire elemental life forms. Level 62. Potential, rare S-class. Skill, body of flame, A grade, a life form born from flames. Immune to all fire magic damage. The surface of the body is constantly burning in flames at a temperature that can melt steel. It can instantly explode and cover a 5-meter radius with flames. Abilities. Flaming Fireball, D grade, can condense a fireball to attack the enemy. Cooldown time, 30 seconds. Devour Flames, C grade, after being injured, it can devour flames to quickly recover. Incineration, C grade, causes the body temperature to increase by 5 times, lasts for 5 minutes. Cooldown time, 30 minutes. Race innate skill, immune to physical damage. Binding Flame, once killed by the enemy by fire, it can immediately devour the flames and be reborn. Note, pure fire elemental life forms. Their bodies constantly burn with flames. The temperature increased in the room. These elemental life forms were captured by the magic tower from the elemental plane to smelt magic materials. With so many fire elemental life forms here, there is bound to be a fire elemental lord somewhere nearby. Yuan was anxious. Her mouth was dry. The 30-meter tall furnace began to shake violently. Red molten metal splattered everywhere. It was as though a volcanic eruption was going to take place any time. A giant creature crawled out of the furnace. It was about 15 meters tall. It was encased in burning flames. The temperature increased and pressure built up. It felt like everyone was being crushed under some unseen impact. Zhao Qingrong opened the attribute panel of the creature. Fire Elemental Lord. Mythical level. Level 68. Potential. Skill. Abilities. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She didn't have the true eye of the demon dragon ability to fully see its attributes. Magic puppets could drop gems, but the fire elemental life forms could drop fire elemental cores. This was the charm of the ruins. You never knew what you encountered in such a place. They were terrified but also thrilled. This was their chance to obtain something precious. We have to deal with the fire elemental life forms first before dealing with the fire elemental lord. Under Shi Linglong's orders, the front row of the battle axes warriors attacks vigorously. Battle axes veered through the air. More than 30 warriors guarded the passage. There was also the cursed pharaoh and 2 heroes to support them. There was also a team of dark gargoyles in the front to assist them. Nov. L. B /JNN. The battle lasted for about an hour. A souk-shaking roar rang out. The fire elemental life forms retreated like a tide. After a while, the high temperature gradually subsided. The fire elemental life forms returned to the furnaces. Yuan let out a long breath of relief when she saw this. She did not feel joy at having defeated the enemy. Instead, she felt a little regretful. How many fire elemental cores had dropped? Elemental cores were a treasure they couldn't ignore. With Yuan present, they could resurrect the dead troops indefinitely. She wanted to collect the cores. She ordered 2 teams of giant lizards to search for the fire elemental cores that might have been dropped by the fiery creatures. She sent the battle axes warriors to the rear to join the fight, which was still ongoing. There were still some magic puppets to deal with. When they joined the fight, the enemies were defeated in droves. More gems scattered on the ground as the magic puppets died. Fortunately, they all had the demonic dragon's blessing cast upon them. So, there was no need to worry. The troops would surely win. There was no talk about going deeper. Everyone was tired from the recent fight. They were physically and mentally drained. It was not something that could be solved by casting buffs. Yuan, why don't you join and help them? Asked Yuan. When she didn't get a response, she tried again. Big brother Yuan, please help. 259 the deal. No matter how Yuan called for his help, Yuan stayed in the back row. He had no intention of making a move. What kind of joke is this? If I interfere, I won't get experience points. Besides, Yuan couldn't just pop up every time when they needed him. The 4 lords needed to learn to get stronger. Is it because you cannot deal with such chaos alone? Said Zhao Qingrong. She was teasing Yuan. Get lost. Yuan's face turned red. If you want to blabber uselessly, just go back to your territory. You asked him so nicely, too. It seems you know how to convince your hero to do stuff for you, said Shi Linglong with a smirk. Yuan's face darkened. He was a little embarrassed. Why are girls so bold nowadays? The battle continued. The speed and strength of the creatures declined. The magic puppets were finally dealt with. They had temporarily won against the creatures. The giant lizards collected the fire elemental cores. Everyone was so tired that they didn't even want to talk. Shi Linglong and the other lords were exhausted. The heroes were drained as well. They were also a little envious of Yuan. He had a beautiful lord like Yuan who constantly asked for his advice. He wasn't ordered around by his lord like they were. Yuan looked at the corpses of the magic puppets on the ground. There were numerous gems around them. Although they were all exhausted, the sight of the gems raised their spirits. They had obtained around 360 fire elemental cores from the fire elemental's life forms. These cores were very rare and useful. They could be used to strengthen equipment and weapons. The gems dropped by the magic puppets were also very precious. Even if they ended their exploration here, the harvest would be enough to sustain them for a while. Yuan's lips curled up into a smile. She opened the map to take a look. They only needed to pass through the building to reach the warehouse of Arcana Hall. This made her extremely excited. At any level, the mythical ruin provided them with a bountiful harvest. They could get rich. Yuan wondered what kind of treasure could be found in the main sect, which was the most dangerous of all. It was a pity that they did not have the strength to explore it now. However, considering the rewards they had obtained today, it wasn't a bad idea to end their exploration here for now. Even the safest area had a monster like the Fire Elemental Lord sealed in its depths. The other doors would have unimaginable dangers. They planned to continue exploring the area gradually. Right then, a sound rang out from the smelting room. I'm the Lord of the Fire Elemental Plane. I wish to speak with the Great Demon Dragon. It had been imprisoned by the mages for 100,000 years. The mages of the Magic Tower had fallen in the Battle of the Gods. Still, the Fire Elemental Lord was unable to escape. If your majesty, the Dark Demon Dragon, can help me escape, I can give a generous reward. Yuan raised his head. He knew about the situation from the true eye of the Demon Dragon. So, he remained attentive. n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. Yuan looked at the smelting room that was emitting flames. Yuan was surprised. Even something as terrifying as that was down to negotiating certain terms? A notification appeared in her mind. Triggered an emergency request from the Fire Elemental Lord. 100,000 years ago, a mage of the legendary level entered the Fire Elemental Plane and imprisoned the Fire Elemental Lord. He brought it back to the Magic Tower and sealed it in one of the furnaces. The Magic Tower fell, and the mages were killed in the Battle of the Gods. The Fire Elemental Lord waited to ask for help to free himself from his prison. Note, there is no fixed reward. The reward could be anything. Yuan's eyes lit up. So, this was an emergency. A Fire Elemental Lord trapped for 100,000 years could provide something wonderful. Yuan, hurry and help him. If you can grant someone freedom after 100,000 years, it's a kind thing to do, she said. Yuan made it seem like she was very sympathetic toward the creature's plight. In reality, she just coveted the reward. Yuan was speechless. It seemed he had underestimated Yuan. She was even more greedy than him. I can help you, said Yuan, but I need to know you are sincere about this. His voice traveled to the smelting room. They could hear chains rattling. A moment later, the dim light shone in the smelting room yet again, followed by a voice. Please let me approach. Don't attack. I will only negotiate with the Dark Demon Dragon and no one else. The Fire Elemental Lord approached from the passageway. The temperature began to increase again. Yuan activated the true eye of the Demon Dragon, but he didn't find anything unusual. He stared at the approaching Fire Elemental Lord. If it made the slightest move, Yuan would kill him. Yuan was curious. What will it offer in exchange for freedom? The Fire Elemental Lord walked out of the passage and looked at the human lords. Its gaze then locked onto Su Yuan. It had never thought it would seek help from the damned dark types in its life. However, 100,000 years was a long time. It couldn't bear the imprisonment anymore. The emptiness and loneliness attacked its sanity. It would do anything to be free. The seal of the magic tower was terrifying. Even after 100,000 years, it didn't show any sign of weakening. These humans leading the troops were the first people it had met in so long. It had planned to capture the humans and possess them. However, Su Yuan was stronger than all of them combined. Perhaps the Fire Elemental Lord could fight Su Yuan, but its power had been limited by the seal of the magic tower. The Fire Elemental Lord did not want to remain imprisoned for another 100,000 years. It missed its pain. It needed freedom, no matter the cost. When the Fire Elemental Lord reached them, they saw what it truly looked like. Yuan instinctively moved near Su Yuan's side. Its body seemed translucent but terrifying flames burned on it. Even from a little distance away, they could feel the intense heat. When the fire elemental life forms had died, their bodies had condensed into fire elemental cores. The creature that was in front of them might have an even more potent core. 260 The tempting condition. Your Majesty, I know you are powerful, said the Fire Elemental Lord. I beg you to go to the deepest part of this ruin, straight to the Arcana Hall. The key to releasing the seal is in the warehouse where the magic materials are stored. If you can help me find the key, I will give a generous reward, said the Fire Elemental Lord. It spoke in a special language that was different from the usual human language. Su Yuan could understand the language. Meanwhile, Yuan could only make out some keywords. She pieced it together to understand what the Fire Elemental Lord wanted. Your seal can only be opened with a key that is in the Arcana Hall, asked Yuan. The flames on the Fire Elemental Lord's body surged. How is it that the mages didn't destroy the key or take it with them, asked Su Yuan. You have so many underlings. Why haven't you sent them in search of the key already? The area forbids all elemental creatures, said the Fire Elemental Lord. Believe me, I have tried more times than you can imagine. The Fire Elemental Lord would never seek help from the humans and the dark types that it hated so much if there was any other way. Although we sympathize with your plight and are more than willing to help you, how do we know you won't attack us the moment you are free? Yuan asked. Yuan knew that Su Yuan was far too powerful for her to be afraid of the Fire Elemental Lord. However, she didn't want the creature to hurt her companions. Besides, she wanted the reward it promised. She was not NAVE enough to assume that the Fire Elemental Lord would abide by its promise after being trapped for 100,000 years. Nov. L.B//JNN. Under the gaze of the Elemental God, I swear I won't do something like that, said the Fire Elemental Lord solemnly. I vow to uphold my promise and reward you. If I try to harm you, my soul will turn to ashes and I will face death without the possibility of resurrection. The flames on its body surged, and the whole space was enveloped in a strange fluctuation of energy. Su Yuan examined the energy and found nothing wrong with it. He allowed it to envelop them. Yuan felt the strange power around her. This was a contract. A deal. If the Fire Elemental Lord betrayed them, he would die, and his soul would be destroyed. Yuan received a notification informing her of the contract that was in place. She was excited and curious about the reward now. Could I ask what kind of reward you promise? Asked Yuan. I know of many spells that are of benefit to you. I am sure you know how precious knowledge like that can be. I can teach you powerful A-grade spells. I obtained those spells from powerful mages in this magic tower ages ago, especially from the Sacred Fire Mage. The spells can help you change your class and become a mage. Lin Yao especially was very well versed in spells. She was excited about the reward. We can help you in exchange for 3 S-class spells and 300 fire elemental cores. Yuan was not easy to bargain with. She wanted to maximize the reward to all their benefits. Impossible? First, teaching the spell and imparting it to you will consume too much of my soul vitality. Also, I don't know any S-class spells. I can only teach you A-grade spells. But I can give you the 300 fire elemental cores. If you don't have so many spells, then we'll make it 500 fire elemental cores. Deal. Wait. I need 2 special treasures in exchange for my help. Deal. But this is the final condition. The Fire Elemental Lord did not dare refuse the Dark Demon Dragon. It realized that although Yuan was the Lord, the Dark Demon Dragon was the real authority in the group. The deal was made. 3 A-grade spells, 500 fire elemental cores, and 2 special treasures in exchange for freedom. Yuan was in a good mood. The rewards far exceeded her expectations. Moreover, they had wanted to go to the Arcana Hall in the first place. Su Yuan was powerful enough for it. The Fire Elemental Lord's request gave them a nice excuse to go through with it. Furthermore, there was no restriction for the team. It wasn't like they would be punished for failing. With Su Yuan with them, the Fire Elemental Lord wouldn't dare attack them. The Fire Elemental Lord was also glad that it finally had a glimmer of hope. Although hope had come with an awful lot of conditions, he felt that there was nothing more important than freedom. So, where exactly is the key located in the Arcana Hall? Asked Yuan. It is stored in the deepest part of the hall. It is the core that controls all of Arcana Hall. Magical creatures can't enter. There are magic puppets inside. They need to be eliminated first. The Arcana Hall core is a fist-sized crystal that was filled with potent magic. Once you remove the core, the hall will collapse in 10 minutes. You need to escape immediately. The Fire Elemental Lord's voice was very solemn. The collapse will not destroy the seal even if the key is buried under rubble. It is my last chance to regain freedom. Yuan took out the map and looked at it. Are there any special treasures in there? Not that I know of, said the Fire Elemental Lord. I occasionally sent the Fire Elemental life forms to explore the area, but they found nothing. When the mages left, they had taken almost everything important. The remaining few items were for the Fire Elemental Lord to do as it pleased. Yuan asked a couple of questions more to get all the details. Then she led her troops into the next passageway. She was excited to receive the promised rewards. Meanwhile, Lin Yao thought about becoming a sacred fire mage. The group stepped over the corpses of the magic puppets and made their way toward the deeper part of the ruin. They came to the warehouse where the magic puppets were stored. Everything was like a dilapidated and abandoned factory. Given enough time, everything seemed to die and decay. 261 mythical SS-class creature. They searched the surroundings but did not find anything of value. They didn't stay there for long and made their way to the next area. Everyone was vigilant. This area was the puppet manufacturing workshop. Although the Fire Elemental Lord had told them that all the puppets had been destroyed in the battle, they still remained on their guard. Yuan sent a team of giant lizards to scout the area first. After confirming that there was nothing to be afraid of, they let the heroes enter. The lords then followed, with Yuan at the rear. Hundreds of 5-meter-tall giant puppets were stacked neatly in the room. They had different appearances. Some were human-like, and others were anima-shaped. There was even a puppet that looked like a giant bird with huge wings on its back. No matter how different they looked, it was clear that they were created for only one purpose, to kill. Sharp blades were embedded in different parts of their bodies. Even though these magic puppets had been damaged by the passage of time, one could still imagine their former glory and power. Fortunately, this was only a secondary door. If these puppets could move, the place wouldn't be classified as a medium threat area. The main sect was the one that was highly dangerous. Did it have giant, mechanical warriors? Even thinking about it sent chills down their backs. Yuan made up her mind in that instant. She would not explore the main sect of the mythical ruin until she got stronger. The soldiers that were examining the puppets returned to report. No gems or cores can be found in the bodies of these puppets. They weren't any nearer to the key. Yuan gestured for the troops to continue forward. She walked further into the passageway and suddenly stopped in her tracks. Everything had gone silent where she stood. She couldn't sense the magic in the air. Yuan realized that this was the entrance to the Arcana Hall, which forbade any type of magic. She glanced at the map to make sure. She looked beyond and found special magic puppets. It was also the center of the hall where materials were stored. Nov. L. B /JNN. From what they knew, this area was guarded by the special magic puppets that would come to life the moment they crossed the threshold. Does the anti-magic barrier affect you? Asked Yuan. No, said Yuan. But it will weaken the ability I have cast on you. As expected. Yuan, Shi Linglong, and Zhao Qingrong blurted out disdainfully at the same time. The anti-magic zone was the enemy to all mages, specifically because they couldn't cast their magic spells. It would leave them exposed and defenseless. Lizards, go and investigate the area. Yuan commanded. If you encounter an enemy, try to lure it outside this barrier to us. Don't try to fight them alone. She turned to the rest of the troops. The rest of you, await my orders. The giant lizards disappeared into the dark hall. There was the sound of a fight. However, the giant lizards did not come back. There were no survivors. Yuan asked Yuan to resurrect them. The hall was dimly lit with a narrow entrance. It looked like a hungry monster opening up its mouth to swallow them all. Yuan frowned. She couldn't figure out how strong the enemy was. She had an idea. The anti-magic barrier only deactivated any magic that was cast, but she could still use the night devil bees. They should be able to fly in and out without a problem. The night devil bees were sent to scout the area ahead. The rest followed slowly after them. The narrow hall widened, and they soon arrived at the Arcana Hall. The room was around 50 meters tall. The walls were engraved with magical inscriptions. They were of a different language. It was hard to understand what they said. The area seemed to reflect a time of glory and luxury of the magic tower. At the back was the small storage room. That was the group's ultimate goal. Before anybody could rejoice, they noticed the magic puppets a few paces away. The shredded corpses of the giant lizards were still scattered around. The puppets were around 5 meters tall. Their bodies were made of metal. They glowed faintly, and they looked terrifying. Their arms were thick blades that might have weighed a ton. They even had tails with a sharp blade at the tip. The elbows and knees held small protruding blades that could shred everything in sight. Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon. Heavy blade warrior. Level, 61, strength increases by 15%. Potential, mythical SS class. Skill, puppet's body, SS grade, body forged from precious materials, strength increased by 90%, defense increased by 90%, magic resistance increased by 50%. Abilities. Violent Slash, A grade. After a short period of charging, it can unleash 500% of its strength to attack the enemy. Spiral Storm, A grade. Longsword in hand, its body will spin like a top, causing a powerful burst of damage. The rotation speed is 5 revolutions per second. Strength increases by 50% while spinning, speed increases by 30%, and additional armor-piercing damage is inflicted. Overload, B grade, consumes 20 times the energy per second, increases spiral storm rotation speed by 3 times. Violent Tail Stinger, B grade, sharpness increased by 90%, toughness increased by 90%, attacks launched after charging up can pierce through heavy armor. Race Talent, immune to curses, poisons, plagues, and mental control skills. Magic Puppet, after the body is broken, it can automatically repair itself. Note, a specially forged magic puppet with powerful physical damage abilities. Yuan had difficulty breathing. Her mouth went dry. There was small consolation that the heavy blade warriors could only inflict physical damage. They were already charging toward her group with small, mechanical steps. The thick blades that were their arms could probably split the walls. Yuan's mind whirred. She was trying to think of a strategy to stack. Without the help of magic, it was close to impossible to defeat these puppets. However, Yuan's demonic dragon's blessing, even in its weakened state, might give them a chance. Yuan made up her mind. Battle-axe warriors, attack. Others, make space for the warriors to fight. The battle-axe warriors, the giant lizards, and the night devil bees launched their attacks. 262 The terrifying heavy blade warriors. Zhao Qingrong's figure flitted at an impossible speed, leaving after-images in her wake. She reached the heavy blade warriors. Her blade clashed with theirs. She turned slightly and slashed with her saber. The blade of the heavy blade warrior was just inches away from her face. However, it was enough for her. She stumped her feet and a powerful force erupted. Her speed increased. A white light flashed. The next moment, a long gash appeared on a heavy blade warrior's thigh. Although it was a remarkable achievement, it was barely enough to slow down the creature. The heavy blade warriors were metal puppets. They had no emotions. They didn't get tired or scared. They just kept moving forward to attack and kill the enemy. Zhao Qingrong suddenly bent forward at this moment to dodge the blade that was aimed at her. She flitted forward again and slashed in all directions. She was like a whirlwind. She dodged and attacked, leaving many gashes on the metal body of the heavy blade warriors. The heavy blade warriors brandished their many blades and attacked Zhao Qingrong. However, she was like a dancer who never remained in one place. She flitted past, dodged, and attacked repeatedly. For a warrior like Zhao Qingrong, who focused on improving her combat, this was a dance to death. Sparks flew everywhere. Blades flashed. One of the heavy blade warriors lost its metal leg and stumbled forward. Zhao Qingrong flew away and stacked another puppet. The heavy blade warrior who was dealt a fresh onslaught lost its balance and fell to the ground with a loud thud. It struggled to get up. Zhao Qingrong stepped on its metal head, while her other foot came down on its shoulder with force. She brandished her saber and prepared to attack. As it hit the metal, a sharp sound rang out. Power surged. The huge head rolled a few meters away before coming to a halt. The heavy blade warriors fell one after the other at the hands of Zhao Qingrong. Everyone watched her in shock and awe. In an anti-magic zone like this, only a warrior like Zhao Qingrong was useful. She displayed her greatest strength. Her experience and skill were evident in the way she flitted from one puppet to another, defeating them entirely. The battle-axe warriors likewise displayed their strength. They were fearless. Although the magic puppet spun and decapitated some of them, they kept fighting valiantly. The night devil bees were the same. Some were slashed by the many knives of the magic puppets. However, they managed to sting some of them with venom as they fell. The intense fighting made the enemy retreat slightly. The giant lizards took advantage of the opportunity and charged. Their claws slashed through metal and shredded the heavy blade warriors. The night devil bees' attacks became even more intense. If the puppets slashed and killed one bee, the others swarmed and stung until the enemy fell. They had no fear because Yuan could always resurrect them. Some of the heavy blade warriors fought against the dark gargoyles, who were immune to 99% of physical damage. The puppets were at a disadvantage. The battle-axe warriors at the rear threw their battle-axes and dealt immense damage to the heavy blade warriors. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. The puppets were tall and burly. That was their advantage. However, it made them too slow and restricted their movement, allowing the others to attack it continuously. The non-stop attacks resulted in cracks in the metal bodies. Despite it, the heavy blade warriors kept charging. One managed to kill 2 battle-axe warriors at the same time. One battle-axe warrior threw its battle-axe, hoping to trigger the instant death ability. However, the heavy blade warriors were of higher rank, so the possibility of triggering it was very low. It threw the battle-axe thrice but still couldn't manage to trigger the instant death ability. The heavy blade warrior exploded anyway because of the impact of repeated attacks from the battle-axe. Its body shattered. If it were a normal soldier, it would be impossible for it to take 3 rounds of attacks from a battle-axe without dying, but these puppets weren't normal. This was one of the reasons why the mages had preferred metal puppets as their troops. Faced with an enemy that was difficult to subdue, the heavy blade warriors began mutating. They spread out their hands, and a few clasps extended from their wrists to buckle the heavy blade. The 2 blades joined, forming a straight line. Their waist began to contract. The lower part remained still, but their upper body spun with force. The blade had turned into a meat grinder. Moreover, the puppets could tilt their upper body while spinning so that it left no blind spots. The giant lizards happened to be within the opponent's attack range. They were shredded to pieces. Many magic puppets spun at the same time like giant tops and rushed toward the enemy. This was the spiral storm ability. It was very dangerous and highly effective. Everyone focused on this new kind of attack. They needed to figure out a way to counter it. Charging recklessly would only mean death. Fortunately, the heavy blade warriors had no lord to command them. Otherwise, the situation would turn dire. The four lords looked at each other. They needed to break the enemy's defense somehow. With a clear goal, the troops acted with exceptional decisiveness. They were here to kill the magic puppets and did not care about anything else. Hundreds of soldiers charged at the heavy blade warriors. Zhao Qingrong was still fighting alone. Without a spellcaster, no one could possibly stop the spinning creatures. Her strength might not be enough to deal with them. However, strength wasn't everything to her. Her experience and skill, combined with the strength she currently had, amplified her motivation to make up for her flaws. 263 A hard victory. Yuan was unwilling to be outdone. Night Elves, fire. Su Yuan looked at his beautiful overlord. Although he mostly used her as a tool to get experience, he trusted her. She always gave him the freedom to make his decisions and even asked for his advice. This kind of lord was difficult to find. If anything got dangerous, Su Yuan decided to act immediately. Although she was far from achieving her goal, Yuan didn't hesitate. She had to make sure her troops were all right. If need be, she would order them to retreat immediately. The current battle had turned tides. It had become extremely difficult. The remaining heavy blade warriors had gone all in and activated the spiral storm. Under such a terrifying attack, the troops could only resort to guerrilla warfare. Time passed. The troops were now mentally and physically exhausted. The puppets spun. Their speed increased by 3 times. The giant lizards that were near the puppets were shredded to bits. Yuan, Shi Linglong, and the others were shocked. In the past, with Su Yuan's demonic dragon blessing, the troops had been able to win every fight. Everyone felt that everything would be alright as long as they had Su Yuan's support. However, their belief was shattered this time. Everyone was on high alert. They could not act rashly. They realized that they couldn't rely on Su Yuan's demonic dragon blessing every time. Yuan tried to calm herself and began to discuss strategies with her friends. Su Yuan was happy to see this. He had wanted this all along. Although he was strong, he didn't want Yuan to rely on him entirely. He wasn't invincible, after all. There were beings like the Lord of the Sky and the Light Princess who could challenge him. Therefore, he needed Yuan to get stronger and upgrade her territory to be on par with such powerful enemies. He couldn't always protect her. The battle continued. After continuously fighting for 2 days and nights, the number of heavy blade warriors finally reduced. Yuan and the others couldn't remember the last time they had enjoyed some peace and quiet. The fight drained everyone. No matter how many times the troops died, Su Yuan resurrected them, and they joined the fray again. Yuan looked at the decreasing number of heavy blade warriors and felt a sense of accomplishment. The past 2 days had been hell, but they were now close to victory. Destroy that last puppet and put an end to this battle, shouted Yuan. The main force charged forward. They recognized the pattern of the heavy blade warriors. When 3 puppets were destroyed, they activated the spiral storm. Then, they activated the overload ability, which increased their rotation speed by 3 times. When that happened, their blades whistled as they spun where they stood. The troop charged forward without hesitation, using their bodies to forcefully slow down the opponent's rotation. The battle-axe warriors behind them took this opportunity to focus their fire on the enemy. In the end, a heavy blade warrior's head flew high into the air and fell on the ground with a thud. Its boy toppled on the ground with such impact that sparks flew everywhere. The blades fell and the body no longer moved. Everyone watched in silence for a few seconds. Yuan then smiled. Despite being so exhausted, she felt happy. They had won. Everybody felt ecstatic. They had fought long and hard and finally achieved victory. They had learned a lot from this fight. Furthermore, they still needed to find the key. Yuan looked at the inscriptions on the wall behind the corpses of the heavy blade warriors. Her heart quickened. The storage warehouse? That is where the Arcana Hall core was located. It was time to reap the rewards. The warehouse itself must have a lot of precious treasures like dragon eggs or divine artifacts. Yuan took deep breaths to calm herself. It was said that being closest to success also meant that one was close to failure too. She disagreed. She was not in a hurry. She looked closely at the magical inscriptions on the wall, and then at the corpses of the heavy blade warriors around her. The temptation of the rewards was strong. However, the battle had been intense and they had suffered heavy losses. If it hadn't been for Su Yuan, they would have been long dead. Even the combined troops of the 4 lords weren't enough to defeat the heavy blade warriors. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. All in all, it was worth it. Su Yuan, how did I do? Asked Yuan. Looking at the dead puppets and the many gems scattered around the floor, her mood improved. So. Qingrong performed well in this battle, said Su Yuan truthfully. In the anti-magic zone, everyone felt crippled because they couldn't use magic, especially Lin Yao. Zhao Qingrong, on the other hand, had done well because she was good in direct combat. D**mn, cursed Yuan inwardly. Hearing him praise Zhao Qingrong pricked her heart. Zhao Qingrong chuckled and put away her saber. Did you hear that? It seems my performance was better this time. She liked teasing Yuan. Get lost or I will spank you. Yuan felt better after bickering with her friend. The troops were dismantling the puppets and collecting the gems. The puppets contributed around 1,200 gems. When Yuan added it to the gems she had found from the magic puppets before, she had a total of 14,000 gems in her hands. One step closer to reaching the 20,000 resources which were one of the requirements to upgrade her territory core. The ruins are indeed bountiful. It's a pity I couldn't find a dragon egg here. I would have paid anything for it. Shi Linglong looked at Su Yuan with envy. She wanted a dragon too. However, these weren't even the final rewards. The real reward was still waiting for them. Yuan looked around Arcana Hall. At the back was another area used to store magical materials. Everyone felt excited as if they were about to open the dragon's treasure vault, but they were all exhausted. Yuan ordered them to take a break before exploring the area. After that, she called Shi Linglong and Zhao Qingrong who were standing guard outside. 264 found nothing. She discussed it with her friends. There was a possibility of finding something precious in the warehouse. The mages couldn't have taken every single thing with them, after all. Yuan wanted to explore the area. If any danger arose, Su Yuan was there with them anyway. She gestured to the giant lizards and sent them ahead to scout the area. The 10-meter-tall door of the warehouse was left ajar, and the giant lizards slowly pushed it wholly open. Thick dust blew into their faces. When the dust settled, they could see what was in front of them. The space was messy. People seemed to have left in a hurry. All the supplies were scattered on the ground. Storage racks had fallen onto the ground. With the passage of time, most had either rusted or turned to dust. Only the ones engraved with magic runes were still intact. Despite it, everyone could see that the warehouse had once housed many materials and resources. Other than the storage racks, the room was vastly empty. There were no treasures or dragon eggs to be seen anywhere. It was obvious that the mages had left in a hurry and left nothing useful behind. Yuan was a little disappointed. Qingrong, lead some of your troops to search the entire area. Investigate every corner. Remember, the aim is to find the Arcana Hall core and an escape route for us. If you encounter any enemies, don't fight them alone. Retreat immediately. Zhao Qingrong nodded. She took a group of battle-axe warriors and went on her way. Yuan and the others waited quietly at the door. After a little while, a battle-axe warrior returned to report. We found the Arcana Hall core. It looks like a crystal. The battle-axe warrior led the way for Yuan and the others to follow. After walking for a while, they reached the central area. In a somewhat open space engraved with numerous magical runes, there was a white altar with bluish light surging around it. This altar held the core. The magic spread from it in every direction. The energy was overpowering. It felt like standing in the center of a volcano that was going to erupt. A blue crystal ball engraved with a mysterious pattern floated above the altar. Blue light surged and spread from the altar and poured into the crystal core. A transparent force field surrounded the altar. Inside this barrier, overwhelming magic surged around the crystal ball. Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon. She was curious and excited to find out about his crystal core. Azure Magic Crystal. Level, SSS class. Characteristic, this is the Arcana Hall core, which controls all magic within it. It is the source of magic in the hall. Note, the magic tower used to be a treasure in itself, created from precious magical materials. Once the Azure Magic Crystal is lifted from the altar, the whole area will collapse. Yuan was excited. She extended a hand toward the transparent barrier to see if she could get through. Her hand passed without any obstruction. She was not in a hurry to pick up the crystal core. She turned and looked at the others. Search the hall. Search every corner. After fighting for so long, Yuan refused to believe that there was nothing else in this area. She was bound to find something useful. Nov. L. B /JNN. Half an hour later, the entire warehouse was turned upside down, but apart from a few gems scattered on the ground, there was nothing to be found. Yuan felt even more upset because they hadn't found a passage to the outside to secure their escape route. When asking the Fire Elemental Lord about the Arcana Hall, it had emphasized that they must secure their escape route before they touched the crystal core. The Fire Elemental Lord promised to give them their reward and send them on their way after that. The warehouse was empty except for the crystal core. There was nothing else to be found. What should we do? Yuan asked Su Yuan. She knew that he must have thought of a way out of there. It's the magic tower. It will definitely have some magic that seals any kind of escape passage, he said. Su Yuan turned to the little butterfly fluttering around him and muttered something. The butterfly flew to the altar and touched the crystal core. They heard something whirring in the walls. A part of the wall fell off, revealing a passageway. Yuan gestured to a team of troops to go ahead and check the passage. The hidden area was divided into countless small spaces. The rooms were still empty. The magic runes shone faintly. So, this is the area where precious materials are stored. Shi Linglong glanced at the gems scattered around. However, any precious materials that had been here before were long gone. Everyone, go and search. Don't miss any of those gems. A team entered the area and searched carefully. It was disappointing that the area had no special treasures. They only managed to get a few gems. Su Yuan was bored. He couldn't take it anymore. He knocked down the wall to his side. Boom! A secret door appeared on the wall of the corridor. A huge metal puppet was standing at the entrance. Yuan and the others turned to look. There are more heavy blade warriors. They were even more in numbers than before. This was not done. They had suffered too much in the past 2 days while fighting them. Be on your guard. The troops were vigilant and ready for a battle. Several night elves stood in front of Yuan. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the magic puppet. They waited for it to make a move. Zhao Qingrong stood at the forefront. Her gaze was as sharp as her blade. Her muscles were taut and ready to unleash an attack at any moment. Silence enveloped everything. Only their breathing was audible. What are you afraid of? They haven't activated it yet, said Su Yuan impatiently. Yuan was flabbergasted. How could he put everyone in danger this way? The magic puppets did not move. If not for the fact that their aura was palpable, they would have thought the puppets were abandoned and useless. Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon. Heavy Blade Warrior. Level, 62. Potential, mythical level, not activated. Status, in hibernation can be injected with spiritual power to activate the puppet. After binding it, one can command the magic puppet to fight. Note, a magic puppet created using a special method. After activation, it can fight for you. 265 obtaining a mythical level puppet. Yuan was euphoric. This was the real reward? There were a total of 80 puppets. If they divided it equally, Yuan could get 20 of them. They had experienced firsthand how powerful these puppets were. If they could own them, then they would have their own killing machines. The magic puppets were freakishly strong. Even the dark gargoyles and the giant lizards who were 99% immune to physical damage had a hard time fighting them. Yuan was happy. She could have leaped for joy. She took a deep breath to compose herself. She gestured for the giant lizards to approach the puppets to check. The giant lizard fearfully made its way toward the puppet. If the magic puppets came to life, it would be shredded to bits like before. The troops stayed alert. However, the puppets did not move. Yuan sent a battle-axe warrior to check once again. The puppets remained inert. The four lords were ecstatic. They had their own magic puppets. They could infuse the puppets with their spiritual energy and bind them to do their bidding. The four lords stepped forward. They examined the puppets. Each puppet was 5 meters tall with heavy blades as their hands. The lords were excited to use them. Before, they had had to fight them. It had been a nightmare, but now, they could own the puppets. Yuan was excited to strategize and use these puppets. He saw a thumb-sized hole in the puppet's head. She extended her hand and pressed her thumb in the hole. She heard a mechanical whir and felt a painful prick on her thumb. Blood seemed out. Yuan felt a little of her spiritual energy drain from her body. A faint glowing symbol appeared on the head of the heavy blade warrior. At the same time, a notification appeared in her mind. According to what she saw, these magic puppets were built with utmost precision to serve the mages. When activated, the puppets could bestow their skills to the owner. The four lords were overjoyed. They placed their thumbs on the hold of the puppets like Yuan and activated the puppets one by one. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. A system notification informed them that the activation was successful. If Su Yuan's demonic dragon's blessing was applied to these heavy blade warriors, they would be invincible. The magic puppets belonged to them now. Not even their creators could change the rules. The heavy blade warriors could only be destroyed from now on. They couldn't be captured or dismantled to be used by others. If someone tried, the magic imprint would break, and the puppet would go into self-destructive mode. Yuan could feel a part of her consciousness seep into the puppet's body. She could control it. Su Yuan, can they be resurrected? Su Yuan looked at Yuan as if she was a fool. No, they aren't alive. They have no life force, so they can't be resurrected, he said. They can be repaired and used if the magic imprint isn't destroyed. It's better than nothing, thought Yuan. The heavy blade warrior knelt and stabbed the blades into the ground. Sparks flew everywhere. The sudden movement startled the troops. The battle-axe warriors almost let loose their axes to destroy the puppets. Stand down, shouted Yuan. Thankfully, she had stopped them. Otherwise, the puppets would have been destroyed. Yuan made one of the puppets walk to the side of the other. It felt so easy to control them. She didn't have to command them. She just needed to will it, and they moved on their own. Yuan sighed with satisfaction. These magic puppets were spectacular. The mages had outdone themselves while creating them. Yuan's happiness only lasted for a while. It was soon replaced by shock. The puppet stopped moving. She thought something was wrong with it. However, upon further inspection, she realized that these puppets hadn't been used for a long time. They were rusty. Yuan ordered the troops to place some of the gems in the chest cavity of the puppets. She counted the number of gems that were needed to kickstart the puppets again. Each heavy blade warrior required 300 gems to restart. They had stopped moving before because they were in a state of disrepair and the gems inside them were depleted of energy. 300 gems for each puppet. Yuan's eyebrow twitched. She opened her attribute panel. She only had a total of 11,500 gems now. The gems obtained from the various fighting had depleted so quickly after being spent on the puppets. She had thought she would be rich, but it seemed that the gems weren't going to last at this rate. She used the gems to replenish the energy of the puppets. They began to move with renewed energy. The white gold luster that emanated from the puppets' bodies became more apparent. The puppets were so huge that even the mighty battle-axe warriors looked tiny in comparison. Yuan was satisfied. Having the heavy blade warriors on her side made her feel rich and powerful. Troops, continue the search. Let's see if there is anything else that has been left behind. However, they found nothing. 2 hours later, Yuan walked to the altar holding the azure magic crystal. 266 How strong is Su Yuan? Yuan gazed at the crystal core, which emanated a bluish light. Her face was solemn. This crystal was the key to breaking the seal and freeing the fire elemental lord. It was also the key to their rewards. Yuan gestured to the giant lizard to take down the crystal core. To everyone's surprise, the giant lizard couldn't get within 5 meters of the altar. It couldn't get through the force field at all. Yuan frowned. She commanded a battle axe warrior to try. The outcome was the same. Perhaps it required someone of stronger mana? The crystal had been stored here for so many years. The power was so great that it created a force field that nobody could pass through. She glanced at Su Yuan. He was the only one who could lift the crystal. Su Yuan, please help. Su Yuan approached the crystal. The blue light repelled him. A gray light emanated from Su Yuan and poured into the crystal. The gray energy devoured the blue one slowly. Yuan was startled. She thought the crystal was trying to devour Su Yuan's soul. After a while, the blue light became fainter as it was overpowered by Su Yuan's aura. The crystal floated on the altar, moving slightly toward him. Yuan felt like she could finally breathe. Everyone was surprised. Su Yuan slowly let go of the crystal. It did not fall on the ground but remained floating. It floated toward Su Yuan. It gently collided with him. The gray had devoured it whole. Yuan was stunned. The crystal had turned entirely gray. Did Su Yuan want to take the crystal for himself? The gray was gradually turning black like ink spreading on a sheet of paper. The crystal now absorbed the dark energy rapidly. No one knew how much energy was needed to forge an SSS-grade crystal that controlled the whole Arcana Hall of the Magic Tower. Nov. L. B/JNN. If the mages who built the Arcana Hall saw Su Yuan taking control of the crystal, they would surely be furious. However, the central crystal was now a dead object. No matter how much energy it had possessed before, it was useless now. The mages who created the Arcane Hall would never have thought that a dark demon dragon would take control of the crystal and devour it whole. The boundless bluish energy of the crystal was quickly consumed by the dark energy. Yuan was excited but also worried. If the energy of the crystal was devoured in this manner, what would happen to the Arcana Hall? Would Su Yuan be able to control the whole Arcana Hall? While Yuan's mind was filled with questions, the magic barrier around the altar dissipated. When the last of the bluish energy disappeared, the crystal turned black. Su Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon on the crystal. Its attributes had changed. Crystal of Gloom, bound to Su Yuan, can be shared with Yuan. Level, SSS. Characteristic, Soul Phylactery, can be used to revive troops without any loss. Skill, Magic Enhancement, increases the caster's magic damage by 100%. Abilities. Energy Storage, able to store 5,000 points of mana in the space in the center of the crystal. Can be used directly. Mana Imprisonment, able to store mana within a 300-meter radius in the center of the crystal. During this time, mana can be freely used. Lasts for 10 minutes. Cooldown, 1 day. Note, it has a strong magic tolerance, even if it is used to cast forbidden spells. Su Yuan didn't show much of a reaction, but Yuan almost jumped for joy. The abilities of the crystal were amazing. Energy Storage and Mana Imprisonment were both top-tier abilities. The amount of mana was always an important factor in measuring the combat power of a spellcaster. With the support of the Crystal of Gloom, combat strength could soar to new heights. Yuan was in a good mood. She was prepared to treat Su Yuan to a nice meal and a few kisses when they returned to their territory. A crisp sound interrupted Yuan's thoughts. Everyone turned. A deep crack appeared on the altar that had held the crystal before. Every cell in Yuan's body warned her of danger. Once the crystal left the altar, the area would collapse within 10 minutes. The Fire Elemental Lord's words lingered in her ears. She felt goosebumps appear on her skin. If they continued to delay, they would all die. 267 Fulfilling the contract. Everyone, evacuate immediately and head to the furnaces. Su Yuan ordered and urged Yuan to jump on his back. The troops ran from the Arcana Hall. The sound of explosions rang out. The magical inscriptions along the wall glowed and cracked. There were no enemies this time. Su Yuan and Yuan flew to the room with the furnaces. Yuan felt uneasy. The furnaces sensed their arrival and treated them as intruders. They burst into flames once again. The fire elemental life forms crawled out of the furnaces. The largest furnace spewed flames. A giant crawled out of it. Chains marked with bluish ruins held the creature. No matter how much the creature struggled, it couldn't break free. A roar shook the place. The terrifying aura scared everyone. It was the Fire Elemental Lord. Its power was indescribable. The crystal, shouted the Fire Elemental Lord in surprise. The chains rattled fiercely. Molten metal spewed out like magma, and the temperature of the air began to rise rapidly. We completed the mission and obtained the crystal. It's time for you to fulfill your promise, said Yuan. Yuan wasn't afraid that the creature would break its promise. She had Su Yuan by her side. The Fire Elemental Lord looked satisfied. Human, you have won my trust and my friendship. Its imprisonment was at an end. It felt ecstatic. The crystal is sealed by powerful magic. It's impossible to obtain it using ordinary methods. Yuan wondered if she could get the crystal back after the seal was broken. Don't worry. Breaking the seal doesn't require me to destroy the crystal ball, said the Fire Elemental Lord. Yuan didn't dare to get too close. The scorching temperature could easily melt rocks. No one could withstand the heat. The crystal slowly floated up toward the furnace. After a while, flames surged and sputtered. It enveloped the crystal. The flames turned the crystal fiery red, and light burst forth. The light illuminated everything around. Nov. L. B/JNN. The chains began to rattle and crack. They broke into pieces and freed the creature. The chains simply melted in the heat after the seal was broken. They disappeared without a trace. The surrounding temperature kept rising. Yuan felt the heat. It turned her mouth dry. 2 huge arms climbed out of the furnace. A giant creature crawled out. It had 2 horns on its head. Its body was encased in flames. It stood on top of the furnace. The dome above exploded. Dozens of furnaces also exploded and fire spewed out. It was as if the infernal flame demon from the legends had descended into the world. Countless years of imprisonment, and now, finally freedom, shouted the fire elemental lord. Yuan stared at the creature in fear and awe. Something powerful like this had to bow its head to Yuan. The fire elemental lord looked at Yuan. Its eyes were like rubies that glowed as they reflected the fire burning around it. "Thank you," it said. "Thank you, Dark Demon Dragon, for your help. It's because of you that I have my freedom." The fire elemental lord waved its hand. Numerous fire elemental cores fell on the ground. "These are condensed from fire. My underlings are born with these cores as their life force. Now, it is yours." The shattered space split open and 2 balls of light appeared. As the balls hit the floor, one revealed a black staff, and the other, a black robe hat, was engraved with runes. Magical staff, main hand. Level, S. Characteristic, increases spell damage by 30%. Skill, magic enhancement, can be used 5 times a day, increases the strength of troops within a 100-meter radius by 30%, lasts for 10 minutes. Note, a magic staff with special magic power. It is a useful thing to have. Every lord covets it. Mage robe. Level, SS. Characteristic, increases the wearer's casting damage by 30%. Skill, magic shield, can be cast 5 times a day. When attacked, it can automatically release a magic shield with a powerful defense. Lasts for 10 minutes. It will shatter if there is an overload. Note, mage robe. It can automatically defend against attacks, making it a highly sought-after precious item. Both treasures were given to Lin Yao. She was ecstatic. An extremely powerful and rare profession. It's an ancient profession obtained by despicable mages from other ruins. It possesses the most power. After I help her change her profession, I will give her an A-grade spell that is compatible with the power in your body, as per our contract. I can temporarily control the magic arrays. I will help you break through the barrier, said the fire elemental lord. The flames on its body surged. The sea of fire enveloped the entire furnace. The temperature rose to an extreme. The surrounding fire elemental life forms also joined in. The terrifying flames severely distorted the surrounding light. Everything was a blur at this point. They could only see endless flames all around. 268 Lin Yao's new profession. The flames were everywhere, but they did not harm the troops. The flames enveloped Lin Yao completely. She didn't feel the heat of the flames around her because they turned into energy and flowed into her body. Every cell in her body devoured this energy. She could feel her strength and power soar. Numerous images flashed in her mind. The blurry figure of the mage stood in the holy fire, facing the army of hundreds and thousands of demons. She waved her staff, and a terrifying sandstorm swept across the sky. Numerous troops at the front were destroyed. 1 person against 1,000? Another image showed her a towering city. The mages shone with yellowish light. The sand bubbled up and swept down and drowned the entire city. As the terrifying images flashed past in her mind, they taught Lin Yao how to control her magic. She learned the secret to controlling the yellow sand. The boundless energy that the fire elemental lord offered her triggered the power hidden deep within her. Lin Yao's mind absorbed everything she saw. She gained immense knowledge about the essence of magic. She heard a notification appear in her mind. Your profession has been changed to that of a rare sacred fire mage. Profession compatibility, 98%. Talent, Flame Dominator. Note, please maintain sufficient energy. If you lack energy, you will fail to advance. Lin Yao took a few deep breaths to calm herself. She couldn't control her excitement. She closed her eyes and let her body devour the energy to awaken the magic. The fire elemental lord had accumulated an enormous amount of energy over countless years. The mages had imprisoned it here to smelt magic materials and create magic puppets. Every day, it accumulated a portion of its strength. However, when the magic tower fell, it had no other way in which it could spend that energy and strength, so it kept accumulating. The speed at which Lin Yao's body absorbed the energy was astonishing. She was like a sea vortex that pulled everything in. The flames obeyed and rushed to her. Lin Yao didn't know how much time had passed. It felt like an instant, but also longer than a century from all that she had seen. She felt the increase in her magic and strength. Her body gradually began to calm down. Additional characteristic obtained, fire resistance. All fire elemental damage received is reduced by 50%. Lin Yao, Overlord. Intermediate hero, magic damage increased by 30%. Territory, level 3. Military structure. Lord talent, fire resistance, special talent. All fire elemental damage received is reduced by 50%. Special treasure, magical staff, mage robe. Su Yuan saw that Yuan was envious. Don't worry. I will find a better class for you. Besides, a sacred fire mage is not a suitable profession for you. The sacred fire mages weren't very strong. Many other mythical professions were 100 times stronger than sacred fire mages. Who would have thought that they would gain so much from exploring the ruins? The fire elemental lord sensed the change in Lin Yao's aura and slowly reduced the flames. The crystal floated down and returned to Suan. A red gem that was twice the size of the other fire elemental cores broke through the void and fell in front of Suan. "Take this," said the fire elemental lord. "Whenever you need help, hold it and shout my name, Ragnaros. I will be there to help you at all costs." Suan held the red gem in her hand and looked at the fire elemental lord with gratitude. She couldn't help wondering how powerful she could be if she could recruit the fire elemental lord into her troops. It was a pity the creature wasn't willing to submit to humans. However, this was better than nothing. Perhaps she could make more deals with the fire elemental lord in the future. There were many benefits to making an acquaintance with someone from a different plane. For example, it opened up a possibility for cross-plane trade. Should I ask Su Yuan to talk to it about that? Suan wondered who was stronger of the two of them. N/O/vel/B/in.C//om. Boom! They heard an explosion. It startled everyone. They turned to look at the passageway to the main hall. Countless cracks spread out on the wall like a spider web, and the dark blue magic runes exploded. The passage was going to collapse. The fire elemental lord also sensed it and waved his hand. Countless flames surged and crackled. The heat melted everything, even the walls. Then the flames condensed into a dimensional portal. "This portal will directly lead you outside. You need to leave. This place is going to collapse," said the fire elemental lord. The troops made their way to the portal. Su Yuan was the last. He stepped on the portal and turned back. "Ragnaros, I hope I can see you again." The fiery creature nodded. The flames gathered and sputtered. The walls and the passage were gone. Only raging flames were visible. The last thing Su Yuan saw was the fire elemental lord becoming one with the flames and disappearing from sight. The world wasn't as simple as being divided into the dark and the light. There were so many creatures, planes, and identities yet to be discovered. They were all deposited outside the door into the main hall. They stood in front of the small gate with the pot-bellied mage's statue as though nothing remarkable had ever happened here. However, they knew that if they stepped into that door, they would be greeted by scorching flames that would burn them alive. Suan, Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao made a list of the things they had gained in their recent encounter. Lin Yao had obtained a powerful legendary class, the Sacred Fire Mage. The four friends were happy about each other's achievements. They knew that one person's benefit was a good thing for all of them. Chapter 269 The Powerful Sacred Fire Mage. Suan had Su Yuan by her side. So, she wasn't disappointed. She knew that she could become stronger too. Secondly, they had received the Heavy Blade Warriors. The physical damage that these puppets inflicted was unimaginable. The four lords were stronger now because they had these puppets. The puppets were valuable, especially if they had to go to war. The third gain was the crystal. The SSS-class Crystal of Gloom had 3 powerful abilities that would surely come in handy. Additionally, they had gained gems and cores in this expedition. They were very valuable too. Suan was especially happy because she needed a lot of gems for the construction of the hero altar. The fire elemental cores were the real deal. They could enhance and strengthen equipment and weapons. Enemies are attacking. Everyone froze. The four lords turned around to look. From a distance, figures riding on wolves were making their way to them. They looked disgusting, like rags left in dirty water. The wolves looked ragged and rotten. The wolves opened their mouths and saliva dripped on the floor. The stench was unimaginable. On the back of the wolves were yellow sand orcs, who gripped the reins and rode them furiously. They were the orc mount wolf riders. At the center of the pack was a whitish wolf that was taller. Lin Yao was in the middle of the tornado. She narrowed her eyes. She felt in control of the fire and 2252, the sand. It felt as though the fire was just an extension of her body, and bigger than the rest. The leader of the orcs rode on it. It was covered in scars. One of its eyes was gruesome. It was probably shot by an arrow. They roared and charged toward the group. The orc leader raised its hand and made a throat-slitting gesture. The other orcs cheered. The orc leader snorted and eyed the heavy blade warriors. Its eyes were filled with greed. The tremors had attracted their attention, and they had ridden to the ruins to check. When they reached the mountain range, they saw a huge bronze door instead of the mountain wall. Without the key, they couldn't enter. Until now, when they saw Suan open the doors, they waited. Now, everything would be theirs? With a howl, the orc leader charged. The orc mount wolf riders looked terrifying. Suan turned to Lin Yao. "Lin Yao, it's your turn to shine." Lin Yao nodded and raised her staff. The power boiled like magma. A fiery red light rose, and the sand was blown up into a storm. It revolved around Lin Yao. The sand and fire merged into a tornado. The orc leader's eyes widened at the sight. It was astonishing to see a human in the middle of a tornado. The sand merged with the flames and illuminated everything. The orc leader was terrified. An unspeakable fear gripped its heart. A mage. The human overlord was a mage? "Kill her," roared the orc leader. The riders followed the order and charged. Lin Yao was in the middle of the tornado. She narrowed her eyes. She felt in control of the fire and the sand. It felt as though the fire was just an extension of her body. Hundreds of orc mount wolf riders rushed forward. Their faces showed only bloodlust. Lin Yao raised her hand and looked at the orc leader. She extended her right hand, which was encased in flames. The ground erupted. Flames raged like waves and surged in all directions. It was a disaster. The wolf riders looked at the rising sea of fire in fear. The towering wall of flames was enough to burn mountains and cities. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. The orc riders tried to run, but the wall of sand and fire descended on them. The sand and firestorm then raised anew and fell with a force. When everything returned to silence, the riders were all burned and buried under the sand. Lin Yao let out a long sigh. Although A-grade magic skills were powerful, they consumed too much energy. It not only depleted her mana but also exhausted her magic reserve. Debuff, Mana Overdraft. All attributes will be reduced by 50% for 2 hours. Yuan and the others had been very envious of Lin Yao's new ability. However, when she explained the drawbacks of using such a power, they felt that it wasn't really that great after all. Lin Yao took a few full breaths and steadied herself. The Orc Lord had retreated. It was in despair. Its elite troops had been burned and buried? Is this really a human? It wondered if there was any other way to fight the humans. It couldn't withstand another wave of that attack even if it had 1,000 elites under its command. The Orc leader's resolve was shaken. It led the surviving riders and fled the place in fear. Chapter 270 The Pleasure of Getting a Troop for Free. The Orc leader swore that it would never fight a mage again. Chase them, shouted Yuan. The magic arrows shot out by the night elves chased after them at high speed. Yuan took out the crystal. The black light covered the bodies of the wolf riders. In an instant, the corpses released energy into the air. The corpses seemed to shrivel up and decay after the crystal absorbed the energy. It was only at this moment that the blood-colored energy that was dissipating in the surroundings began to swarm into the crystal hub. Fresh blood condensed out of thin air and wrapped around the orcs and their mounts. The orcs gradually merged with the wolves as they became inseparable. The magic power in the crystal was released and infused into the corpses that were now transforming. The crystal ball absorbed all mana within a 300-meter radius. Duration, 10 minutes. This was too unrealistic. How did Yuan create such a crystal? Wondered Yuan in surprise. The mages of the magic tower might be rolling in their graves. Lin Yao finally recovered. She looked at the crystal in Yuan's hands. Don't worry. You are still a very powerful sacred fire mage. You still can't do it without mana. Yuan proudly raised the crystal and smiled at her. The energy released by the crystal was strong. It went on for about 10 minutes. Only when the mana imprisonment effect disappeared did Yuan retract the crystal ball. The orcs suddenly moved. The wolves let out a roar. The orcs and their wolf mounts stood up together. Rotten cavalry successfully recruited. The Rotten cavalry had evolved into a B-class hero troop because they devoured a huge amount of magic energy. Yuan looked at the new troop and her eyes shone with delight. The crystal worked? She thought of countless possibilities she could use the crystal for. The orc leader had been affected too. The white wolf was now all covered in red bandages. The orc leader looked even more ferocious now. Yuan decided to try this ability more in the future. She opened their attribute panel. Hog. Hero unit. Level, 50. Potential, B-class. Skill, Rotten body, D grade. Immune to poison, plague, curses. Strength increased by 50%. Can devour the bodies of non-undead creatures to recover after being injured. Abilities. Conjoined symbiosis, becomes one with the mount. Inseparable. Mad bite, B grade. When biting an enemy, 200% strength can be unleashed, causing armor penetration damage. Corrosive saliva, C grade. Saliva contains poison and viruses. It can corrode thick armor and infect enemies, causing death. Extreme charge, B grade. When attacking, instantly increases charging speed by 300% for 30 seconds. Hero talent. When commanding a cavalry unit, the running speed of all cavalry increases by 20%. Race talent. As long as either of the mount or the orc survives, they can recover from their injuries. Note, troop born from corpses. They weren't very strong, but they had been recruited without any trouble. There was a possibility of mass production in the future. Yuan was happy to get them. This crystal was 100 times stronger than a sacred fire mage. Hog, the orc leader, commanded his wolf mount to approach Yuan and bow down in reverence. Your Majesty, I, Hog, and my underlings greet you. Although Yuan was the lord, Hog still submitted to Yuan. This meant that he was their lord, not her. Nov, L, B /JNN. D *MN. I am supposed to be the lord, muttered Yuan. Yuan looked at Hog. In the future, obey the human lord. Hog turned around with his troop and bowed to Yuan. Esteemed lord, we are at your command. Yuan looked at the Rotten cavalry. The potential of the cavalry wasn't any lesser than that of S-class troops. This was a real and valuable gain. They had all risked their lives to obtain such strong mythical level troops. You will be in charge of commanding the cavalry in the future. Thank you for your trust in me, my lord. I will defend you and his majesty with my life. After sorting out the scene, Yuan looked at the dunes in wonder. The ruins had astonishing wealth. She decided to visit it again in the future. The dunes collapsed and sent dust flying everywhere as the huge bronze doors were buried again. Without a detailed map, no one could find the doors. Only Yuan and her friends knew about his ruin. It's too dangerous to explore the other sects now. When we're stronger, we can explore this place together once again, said Yuan. She had marked the place on the system map. Shi Linglong and the others had no objections. Sooner or later, they would open all 9 bronze doors. Everyone had gained something from the encounter. Now, all of them had to return to their respective territories and convert their gains into strength. They needed to head back fast. The light types might have taken advantage of the fact that Yuan and the Dark Demon Dragon were away and might have tried to destroy their territory core. Yuan wondered how the enemies would react when they realized that the heavy blade warriors were under her command. Lord and His Majesty have returned. The troops which had remained back rejoiced. This was the longest that Su Yuan and Yuan had been away from their territory. They were the heart of the territory. With them gone, the territory had felt lacking. In the past, when one was going out to explore, the other had stayed back. The troops had felt secure. However, Yuan and Su Yuan had left for quite a while this time. Their rulers had finally returned home. 271 changes in the planting area. Welcome back, my lord. The troops rejoiced and greeted them amiably. The joy on their faces was apparent. Their delight was genuine. Hog looked curiously at the territory in front of him. The troops looked genuinely happy to see their lord. It filled him with hope. Hog glanced at the Dark Demon Dragon, who was also the focus of everyone's attention. The troops had been trying to make things comfortable for the newly arrived. The new troops that Yuan had taken under her wing were assimilating nicely. It looked like the territory had a special charm that made everyone feel at ease. My lord, your territory seems different. Yuan turned to Hog and smiled. Every territory has its own charm. I hope you like living here. There were no upcoming fights and battles. It was time for rest. There were empty rooms in the dark castle. Yuan had those cleaned. She had 2 rooms assigned to Hog and his troops so that they could be comfortable. Hog looked very relaxed. He smiled amicably. The stables and the winery were also complete. There were no horses or other mounts right now, so the stables were largely empty. The winery currently lacked wine and raw materials to make some. The food workshop was also currently empty because of a lack of research and talented people to run it. They all needed to be filled. Yuan was happy to see the new developments. The troops hadn't abandoned work just because Su Yuan and Yuan weren't home. They continued with whatever they were doing. As a result, the territory had developed. After checking the attributes of the new buildings, Yuan turned her attention to other things. Advanced buildings required a hero to be stationed in order to activate the research and development function. The more the territory developed, the more dependent it would be on heroes. Yuan thought about upgrading the territory. The population of the territory had been stationary for a week. It was very difficult to raise the population in such a short time. Su Yuan had already guessed that increasing the population of the territory would be a problem. Every territory faced the same problem. Dragon Drool Grass. Level 3. Range 100 acres. Characteristic: requires a certain amount of water for irrigation. Matures once a month. Note: a special resource treasure. Yuan checked the agricultural section the moment she got some time to herself. Any kind of farming would be done here in the future. For now, there was only the dragon drool grass growing in a portion of the land. They had grown while she was away. The land was lush with the dragon drool grass. Yuan looked at the grass in a daze. The night devil bees flying around them for some nectar made her feel happy. This gave her lifeless territory a little more vitality. Hog had an idea. He didn't want to disturb the lord, so he made his way to the west of the plantation area by himself. The terrain was relatively flat. He wanted to plant some dragon fruits. He felt that it would be a good thing to have some fruits that Lord Yuan could sell as food and the profits could be split among them. They were suddenly hit by the driest month. The lords needed water to sustain themselves. The price for treasures that provided holy spring water increased greatly. Holy spring water, C-grade resource treasure. Cost: 500 units of iron ore or 480 gold coins. The holy spring water was priced differently. However, no matter what one paid with, the range of the resource to be paid with was always around 400 to 600 units. The lords were still adapting to this change. Most of them knew what was precious and what was worthless, depending on where their territory was located. Fortunately, not many lords needed holy spring water as they could get water by other means. So, the price was fairly reasonable. Otherwise, the price would have been even higher. Su Yuan didn't think too much about it and chose the lowest payment method, 4.5 million units of wood. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. He only had a few resources left to spend. They still had a long way to go to upgrade their territory to level 4. He didn't remember when he had felt this poor. Su Yuan sent the little butterfly and the flower fairy with the holy spring water treasures to the planting area. The area where they placed the treasure began to gurgle. A water column erupted and soaked the soil. The soil that had hardened because of lack of water softened into mud. The flower fairy felt immensely happy when she saw the fresh water flowing into the planting area and soaking everything. A while later, a green seedling poked out of the soil. It grew upward at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was like watching a life being born onto the earth. Even Su Yuan felt relaxed as he watched the new seedlings take root. He didn't linger there long and turned to leave. The seedlings filled everyone with hope. They would mature in a month. These were the reward for their exploration and strife. I am going to hand over the management of this planting area to you for now, said Su Yuan. If you need more manpower, you can go and request troops from Lord Yuan. Thank you, Your Majesty, said Hog. I will make sure the farming goes smoothly. Yuan was busy checking on the gains from their recent expedition. Fire Elemental Core. Level S. Characteristic: magic item. It can enchant items or equipment to cause fire damage. Note: an item that can only be found in the fire elemental life forms. Yuan wondered if the fire elemental cores could be used on the night elves' bows to enchant it. If that worked, it would be magnificent to have flaming arrows flying through the air at the enemy. The third elven prince's eyes shone as Yuan suggested it to him. My lord, we could give it a try. Scarlin might not know how to enchant weapons with his hands, but he could definitely try it with materials that could do it. After getting permission from Yuan, he took some fire elemental cores to try. 272 sudden enemy attack. Scarlin placed the fire elemental core on the magic bow and observed it carefully for a moment. Then, he took out a translucent glass bottle that contained a large amount of green liquid from the storage cabinet beside him. He used 2 drops on the fire elemental core. It fizzed like acid and emitted a pungent smell. Scarlin quickly put down the glass bottle. He then took out a glass bottle with yellow liquid from the storage cabinet. He used 2 drops on the fire elemental core like before. The fire elemental core melted. The liquid flowed slowly and covered the entire bow. The magic bow was dyed red. The red slowly spread and covered the bow wholly. There was one particular area on the bow that flared bright red. Scarlin was calm as he repeated the process. After consuming around 10 fire elemental cores, the bow turned bright red. Flames surged around its edge. Strengthened magic bow, A grade. Sharpness of magic arrows increased by 90%. Strength increased by 50% when attacking. Fire damage increased by 50%. Possibility of triggering flame blast, which can instantly tear apart the opponent's armor and set the opponent on fire. The flame blast ability was particularly significant. Each bow required a total of 10 fire elemental cores to be strengthened. Yuan had at least 500 of them. Yuan was in awe. If she had known that the fire elemental cores were these useful, she would have asked for 5,000 of them. She decided to make an acquaintance with the fire elemental lord if she ever met him again. Yuan felt that she had lost an enormous opportunity. A sudden sound came from outside. It sounded like a beat roaring. Yuan turned to look through the open window. A huge shadow flew across the sky. A horn blew somewhere. It was an enemy attack. Yuan, who was behind Yuan, stared at the scene outside with sharp eyes. Is this the attack from the light types? The beast was the venom vulture. It was a powerful hunter of the desert. It loved attacking humans and their territories. Yuan wanted to find out just how powerful these creatures were. Yuan squinted at the sky. She saw the true face of the venom vulture. These terrifying monsters had a wingspan of more than 10 meters, and their gray heads were bald without any feathers. They had disgusting blue pustules. Each pustule was full of poison. The huge beak on its mouth was like a butcher's iron hook. It could easily pierce through the thick armor of a warrior. Its sharp claws flickered with a cold blue light. Those claws were tainted with poison, too. Even if those attacked didn't die on the spot, they would be corroded by the poison. Venom Vulture. Level, 58. Potential, A grade. Numerous venom vultures swept down from the sky. There were a total of 700 to 800 of those creatures covering the sky. The night devil bees had risen into the air the moment the enemies appeared. They collided with the creatures. Yuan didn't move. He didn't want to reveal his strength until he figured out the Lord of the Sky's weakness. If not, he might not be able to catch him off guard. The red-eyed black dragon and the white dragon saint charged into the fight. However, this attack was so sudden that no one was prepared. Even with the 2 dragons joining the fray, the battle was intense. The venom vulture's claws and beaks were sharp. If they used it on the troops, the injury would be fatal. Furthermore, these creatures were extremely agile. It increased the difficulty of the troops dealing with them. The red-eyed black dragon and the white dragon saint also had to protect the residents of the territory. This crippled their fight. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. The night devil bees were lesser than the venom vultures. However, they did their best to keep the vultures away from the territory and prevented them from causing too much damage. The residents fled in all directions. The screams and cries made everything more chaotic. This was a blow to Yuan. She realized that there was still a weakness in the defense of her territory. The sky was an opening for enemies to attack. If she survived this fight, she would arm the territory to the teeth and improve the defenses. The red-eyed black dragon swung his enormous claws at one of the vultures. The sharp claws pierced through its head, and it crashed down on the territory. Yuan thought that the venom vultures had intended to attack the territory directly. It seemed now that that was only a distraction. The venom vultures tried to get past the barrier made by the night devil bees. When they couldn't, they flew to the planting area. Why would the venom vultures be interested in a farming area, thought Yuan. Unless their target was the night devil queen bess. Yuan had no intention of helping. These creatures were just vultures. If Yuan couldn't deal with something simple like this, then she would learn a lesson for the better. Maybe she would stop being so arrogant and would actually work on becoming stronger. Yuan wanted Yuan to be strong enough to handle any crisis that came her way. If he wasn't present in the territory in the future, how would she tackle such problems? He couldn't have her rely on him for everything. Yuan's eyes glittered with determination. Her territory was the most important thing to her, aside from Yuan. Scarlin, prepare the archers, said Yuan. A volley of magic arrows shot into the sky in the blink of an eye. The night elves and their skill as archers were valuable when dealing with aerial enemies. More arrows flew into the air. The flaming arrows turned the sky red as they exploded. The residents of the territory looked up in fear. The flames might burn their farm? However, the despair turned into amazement as the farm was left untouched by the explosion. Fire magic arrows, inflicts fire magic damage, consumes 50 magic points per second. The farm suffered no damage, but the vultures weren't that lucky. They became the fuel for the arrows to burn endlessly. The venom vultures wanted to flee, but they were horrified to see that there was no opening. The flames engulfed them from every side. No matter how hard they flapped their wings, they couldn't escape. Other than a few venom vultures which had fled the moment the arrows started coming in, the others were trapped and burned. Countless venom vultures fell from the sky as they burned to their deaths. Their bodies created huge pits where they fell on the ground. The troops advanced to these falling vultures to take care of the ones that were still alive. However, when they arrived at the scene, they saw that none of the vultures had survived. The fire magic arrows were terrifying. The flames in the sky gradually dissipated. The sudden attack of the vultures made Yuan uneasy. 273 losses. After the battle ended, the residents of the territory were all in disbelief. They had witnessed the fire magic arrows firsthand. Gods above? It worked? It must be the power of the great dark demon dragon. What did I just see? The night elves' arrows just killed thousands of monsters. The residents of the territory knew that this had something to do with the dark demon dragon. The lord was powerful, but she was nothing when compared to the dark demon dragon. The pride and admiration they felt for the dark demon dragon were overwhelming. Scarlin, who was holding his bow in his hand, took a deep breath. His heart overflowed with emotion. If he went to the mythical ruins once again, he would definitely use these arrows on the magic puppets. The fire elemental cores were simply too extraordinary. Yuan looked at the corpses of the venom vultures around her. Hide these corpses. Although the venom vultures were poisonous and inedible, they could still be sold in exchange for resources. She was a little happy when she thought about that, but she remained on alert. The wild creatures had attacked out of the blue. It made Yuan angry. Weren't they just trying to take advantage of a harmless territory? Fortunately, she had already made the night devil bees guard the area. Otherwise, their losses would have been great. Yuan was a little afraid. If they hadn't returned to the territory on time from their expedition, the territory would have been in trouble, even with the red-eyed black dragon and the white dragon saint present. They would have probably suffered heavy losses. The 100 night flower honey produced by the night devil bees was a treasure. If something went wrong and the night devil bees were harmed, it would be a huge blow to her. She had 3 close friends who relied on her for the honey. She needed to fortify her territory's defense, especially against air attacks. Yuan decided to create more towers where the night elves could stay on guard. While Yuan pondered on the possibilities, the bodies of the venom vultures were rounded up. The little butterfly approached Yuan to report on the situation. My lord, 20 residential buildings were damaged. 5 of those have completely burned down. 45 people were injured. Thankfully, no deaths were recorded. On the bright side, we obtained 786 venom vulture corpses. Yuan nodded. She turned to Yuan. Yuan, we need to consider some arrow towers in our territory from where the night elves can defend the area when needed. Their defense was strong for land attacks. However, air attacks were a serious problem. Yuan had no objection to her suggestion. Once the hero altar was complete, Yuan resolved to build more towers. Meanwhile, she thought of finding a blacksmith so that she could place an order for more crossbows. The territory's foundation was still weak. It had been upgraded to level 3, but it was far too empty to be on par to its level. There was no choice but to fill it slowly. Yuan did not dwell much on it. If there was an attack that threatened the territory, he could handle it. He looked at the venom vultures and frowned. These creatures could easily hunt bison and lions. Their wingspan was huge and impenetrable by ordinary arrows. However, they couldn't be eaten as food even when dead because of their poisonous nature. It was such a waste. Yuan checked the interface for materials on the market. The price of meat had dropped to 1 to 15 units of resources. Other types of food cost around 1 to 10 units of resources. It was a pity the venom vultures couldn't be sold. Otherwise, they would have been rich. Yuan opened the bounty section. There were bounties against some types of troops. Some bounties were issued by mage lords of the dark types for rare troop types. The price went up to almost 10,000 units. Yuan checked those bounties again in surprise. They had 786 venom vultures. They could be sold for 10 million units of resources? How could the lords be so willing to spend so much money on some creature? The corpses did not fetch much of anything usually. The rare ones were worth only around 1,000 units of resources. He showed the interface to Yuan. She wasn't in a hurry to sell the corpses. What level are the venom vultures in general? She asked the flower fairy. Rare A-class at most. The A-class wasn't considered very strong. With that amount of resources, they could buy or recruit stronger troops. Without hesitation, Yuan allowed Yuan to sell the corpses in exchange for resources. However, she urged him to sell them in batches to different lords. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. The fewer enemies, the better. Yuan was in a good mood as the number of resources in the territory increased. The smog from the fire was swept away. Ever since she became a lord, it was a constant battle to upgrade and maintain the territory. She was in charge of everything. Sometimes it became overwhelming. Yuan wasn't much help most of the time. Although the attack from the venom vultures had made her unhappy, the outcome was good. Yuan returned to the Dark Castle. The important thing for her was to recruit more troops. She needed to increase the population of the territory for the upgrade. She had used up about 20,000 units of resources. Yuan sighed. However, it was worth it. Her troops were stronger, especially the ones she had recruited. There were 2 troops she hadn't counted yet. The 30 Rotten Cavalry, which was led by Hog, and there were the Heavy Blade Warriors. N/O/Vel/B/Jn.C//OM. The lowest level of troop types she had were of A class. They were also strong enough to withstand ordinary attacks. Most lords had B or C class troop types. Rare A class and S class were difficult to obtain. Only top-tier lords had them. Most lords fought to the death to get stronger troop types. It was almost impossible to get an S-class troop. 274 special troops recruited by the crystal. Yuan had troops that any lord would covet and would do anything to own. Right now, the troops were lined up in an orderly manner in front of her. After expending resources to recruit such troop types, Yuan's lips curled into a satisfied smile. She could finally enjoy the life of a lord. She opened the market interface. She searched for rare dark type troops. The price was set from the highest to the lowest. Yuan shook her head in dismay. The most expensive troop type was worth 200,000 units of resources. The cheapest was 100,000 units. The price was too great, but the attributes were lacking. Yuan gave up on the idea of buying another troop. The recent attack had shown Yuan a gaping hole in her defenses. Even if there were no gaps in her defenses, having troops that were good in long-range combat was always beneficial. She took out the crystal ball. Night Flame Archer. Level, 56. Potential, Rare SS class. Range, 220 meters, plus 66 meters. Skill, Body of the Night, D rank, immune to poison, curses, plague, strength increased by 50%. Abilities. Congeal fire into arrow, A class. Consumes energy to congeal fire into longbows and arrows. No need to replenish. Recovers automatically after damage N/O/Vel/B/Jn.C//OM. Storing power attack, A grade. After charging, an arrow with 300% power can be released. It also has piercing damage. Rapid shooting, B grade. Consecutively shoots 30 arrows within 10 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. Race talent, increase accuracy by 40%. Dark Archer, more than 50 archers, 30% increase in range, 30% increase in strength. Note, when standing in the darkness, their flaming arrows will be endless. Yuan nodded with satisfaction. She was satisfied with the attributes. She now had a total of 150 Night Flame Archers. That was enough to defend against sudden attacks for now. Yuan looked at the Rotten Cavalry. She opened the attribute panel. He continued to summon the evolved troops from the crystal. Above the Death Knight pyramid, white light surged. The pyramid formed by the bones of the horses began to change. The bone horse trembled, and its head suddenly flared with a blue soul fire. The white bone horse slowly stood up, raised its head, and stumped its hooves on the ground. Its movement was no different from an ordinary horse. After stretching its muscles and bones, the white bone horse turned around and walked to the front of the Death Knight pyramid, lying down on the ground. It seemed to be waiting for its rider to get on its back. Bones flew out and bandaged arms crawled out from the pyramid. A knight holding a bone axe climbed out and rode on the back of the white bone horse. The white raised its front hooves in the air. It slammed its hooves on the ground with a thud. Other Death Knights appeared in the same way until the summoning was completed. Rotten Axe Death Knight. Level 58. Potential, Rare A class. Skill, Dead Body, A grade, immune to poison, curses, plague, strength increased by 50%, charge speed increased by 30%. Abilities. Berserk Charge, A grade. Increases to maximum speed in 3 seconds. Increases collision power by 200%. Giant Axe Slash, B grade. When swinging the giant axe while charging, it can increase strength by 50%, causing heavy damage. Treading on sand, B grade. Charging on the sand, speed increased by 30%, impact increased by 50%. Race talent, when more people die, strength increases by 50%, and recovery speed increases by 50%. Charge, when the charging distance reaches 100 meters, the charging force increases by 300%. Note, they are spears that can tear apart the enemy's line of defense. No one is willing to face the charging cavalry. Yuan's eyes sparkled in delight. She had seen troops like these in some of the ruins before. They were powerful. Moreover, with Su Yuan's demonic dragon's blessing, they would be invincible. Compared to the 2 new troop types, the solidifying sand archers were of a lower level. The long-range troops were the most important right now. If enemies broke through and attacked them from behind, the territory would be at a disadvantage. The combat troops could be used to form a defensive line around them. When the enemy charged, they would realize that they had no luck defeating their prey. That would be exciting. Unfortunately, the energy of the crystal is at an end. Otherwise, while Yuan was thinking, the troops had already gathered. Looking at the powerful troops, Yuan felt ecstatic. Su Yuan, can you charge the crystal again? You can't charge it to its fullest unless another fire elemental lord spends 100,000 years and accumulates more energy on it. Su Yuan rolled his eyes at her. However, what he said was true. Even if he possessed fire attributes, he couldn't accumulate the energy into the crystal right now. It would take around 10,000 years. Alright. The energy spent was worth it, though. Yuan looked at the crystal in her hand and tried to think of a way to get the Fire Elemental Lord to charge the crystal if they met in the future. She was looking forward to meeting the creature again. Yuan was brought back to reality with the arrival of one of the Night Elves. The team that was sent to track down the last of the Venom Vultures had returned. We couldn't find any cracks in the void from where the Venom Vultures appeared. The Night Elf's voice was solemn. Numerous light bears suddenly appeared out of nowhere and blocked our way. We couldn't chase the vultures and had to find another way to return to the territory. Light bears. Yuan opened his sleepy eyes. As expected, Yuan was right about the Night Devil Queen Bee being the target of the light types. If they lost the Night Devil Queen Bee, the Night Devil Bees wouldn't be able to regenerate. Yuan rarely made a move. So, it was up to Yuan and the others to counterattack. We suspect that there's an entrance to the underground area nearby. Those Venom Vultures might have gone there. The Night Elf in charge of scouting voiced out his thoughts. Yuan's eyes lit up. A hidden entrance. The underground area was often associated with wealth and adventure. It was right up his alley. 275 The hero summoned by Yuan. Legend had it that there were numerous gold and gemstones in the underground area which was left vastly unexplored. These were often associated with danger, too. The Nagas, Torrens, Evil Eyes, and Black Dragons were some of the creatures found underground. They were all evil and powerful. Let Scarlin lead a team to search the vicinity for the light bears. If there's any danger, evacuate immediately. He didn't have time to explore the underground area right now, but he wanted confirmation regarding the location. There was no lack of places to obtain treasure for now. They could always go back and explore the mythical ruins. The Night Elf placed his fist to his chest and nodded. Yuan massaged her temples. She felt a headache incoming. There were still 8 bronze doors to be explored in the mythical ruin. The food workshop and the winery lacked staff. They needed to recruit more heroes for those tasks. All of that would require many resources. The problem with the territory's defense had to be resolved as soon as possible. They could not afford to wait around for another attack from the Venom Vultures. Yuan thought it would probably take a month to sort everything out. She shook her head helplessly. She needed to focus on the newly summoned troops for now. Yuan calmed herself with difficulty and rushed the process of the construction of the hero altar and other buildings. She needed more buildings and the population of the territory needed to increase to upgrade the core. After spending a vast number of resources, the hero altar was finally completed. Hero altar. Special, one-time use building. Area, 10 square kilometers, used to summon a special hero. Based on the strength of the summoner, there is a 70% chance of summoning the lowest level of heroes. The hero can level up with the summoner. Note, please pray sincerely before summoning to avoid summoning the lowest level hero, even though prayers might not be of any use. Yuan looked at the attributes of the hero altar. She was somewhat speechless. The altar is not bad. After the territory upgrades, we seriously need to renovate this place, said Yuan. He felt that his place was a little small for him. He was living in a hovel worse than the hero altar. As an initial hero, he couldn't tolerate this. Why don't you complete the recruitment of heroes? Yuan was uncertain. She didn't want to end up with a low-level hero. She thought that if she let Yuan do the summoning, she might receive a higher-level hero. You're not waiting for me to summon a low-level hero so that I embarrass myself, are you? Asked Yuan suspiciously. He had also used the true eye of the demon dragon to check the attributes of the hero altar. The summoning depended on luck. There was a high probability of summoning a low-level hero. No, of course not, said Yuan. I am not doing it to laugh at you. I am not interested. Summon the heroes yourself. Yuan had no interest in summoning a hero. He had enough to deal with already. He constantly worried about a way to get Yuan to get stronger. Just, help me, said Yuan. Please. The flower fairy and the little butterfly stood a little at the side and watched everything. They really felt that the Lord was thick-headed. Yuan sighed. All right then. He didn't want Yuan to cause trouble. If he kept refusing, who knows what kind of trouble she would be planning to cause. Yuan walked to the hero altar. He placed the last gem onto it. He then chanted an incantation. A thick, pitch-black fog rose and spread out rapidly. The dark energy became thicker and thicker until the air was as black as ink. Yuan and the others stared at the scene that was unfolding before them. The dark energy was too strong. They watched in shock. When the whole territory was covered in darkness, a pillar of light rose from the hero altar and pierced the sky. What is that? n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. Take a picture. The nearby lords saw the pillar of light and were appalled. Meanwhile, the hero altar began to shake. A female hero with demonic horns on her head and a charming face appeared. I, Eliza, greet your majesty with reverence. The hero walked to Yuan and knelt in respect. Her black tail swayed from side to side. Yuan activated the true eye of the demon dragon. Name, Eliza. Race, succubus, pure. Level, 1. Potential, SSS class. Strength, 7, affects physical damage. Spirit, 10, affects spell damage. Agility, 6, affects attack speed, evasion, and movement speed. Constitution, 5, affects mana recovery, stamina recovery, maximum HP, physical defense, magic defense, etc. Eye of Charm LV1 can charm low-level enemy creatures for a short duration of about 2 minutes, causing the enemy creatures to attack allies. Charm time increases according to skill level, can charm SSS level heroes after advancing. Whip, unlocked at level 30. Demon Phantom, unlocked at level 60. Final Thorn of Hatred, unlocked at level 70. Note, Succubus that wanders in the dark. All skills have an enhanced effect on male heroes or creatures, and a weak effect on female heroes or creatures. This succubus attributes were remarkable. The key ability was the Eye of Charm. Her skill depended on her level. Yuan saw Su Yuan stare at Eliza in intrigue. She wanted to slap herself for making Su Yuan summon a hero. She felt like a fool. Yuan felt like she had just created trouble for herself and summoned a competitor. Moreover, she had heard about the succubus. They were exemplary at seducing men. Su Yuan wasn't a man, but he was still a male dragon. 276 The jealous Yuan. Yuan had misunderstood Su Yuan. He was only looking at the hero's attributes carefully. However, Eliza was a succubus after all. There was no mistaking her voluptuous body and her seductive body. You can stay by the Lord's side at all times, said Su Yuan. His only goal was to let the hero help Yuan. Greetings, my lord. Although Eliza was unwilling, she couldn't disobey him. She got up and walked to Yuan's side. Putting aside the fact that the hero was a succubus, Eliza was indeed very strong. Having her by Yuan's side would be beneficial. Hello, said Yuan. I can find suitable armor and a room for you later. As the population steadily increased, the Dark Castle was becoming more cramped. Yuan realized that she needed to upgrade the territory as soon as possible. Moreover, after she upgraded and expanded the territory, she could place Eliza in a place a little far away from Su Yuan. I want to help His Majesty sleep. Don't worry, he'll sleep with me tonight. Yuan blurted out. She absolutely couldn't let Eliza come between them. Yuan took Eliza to search for armor that could fit her. She found one that covered most of Eliza's body. The hero somehow looked even more alluring in that. The male night elves couldn't take their eyes off Eliza. They pretended to look away, but they were already ensnared by Eliza's charm. After talking with Yuan, Eliza got the gist of everything that happened so far. She was even more curious about Su Yuan now. The Hydra, the red-eyed black dragon, the third elven prince, the white dragon saint, and the dark magister were all powerful heroes. All of them revered and respected Su Yuan. Eliza had thought that being of the SSS class, she must be one of the rarest and strongest heroes in the territory. She hadn't expected to be just average. The people in the territory were all ridiculously strong. When Yuan and Eliza were done with the armor fitting and tour of the territory, they met Su Yuan once again. Eliza, come with me, said Su Yuan. When she heard Su Yuan call out her name, Eliza felt ecstatic. Her eyes glittered. Her tail swayed happily. All others who were standing around were stunned. They didn't expect the dark demon dragon to be so direct. The male heroes in the territory were all envious. Yuan was shocked more than the others. Where is taking her? She wished she could slap Su Yuan and make him sober up. Why did it have to be a succubus? Yuan was regretful. If she had known this would happen, she would have summoned a zombie-like hero like Hog or a giant lizard. She was okay with anything except a beautiful succubus. Su Yuan didn't know what was going on in everyone's mind. He made his way toward the Dark Castle. Eliza was excited. She quickly followed him. Yuan had no intention of letting them meet in private. She followed behind the two. In the castle, Su Yuan lay down on the soft bed. Eliza was massaging his scales. Yuan looked at them both as she tried to make sense of the scene before her. The moonlight filtered through the window. Su Yuan closed his eyes. He was absorbing experience points in the dark. Eliza massaged his dragon scales with a disappointed face. She was excited about the dark demon dragon being her first. She had been willing enough. However, this wasn't what she had expected. Why did he ask me to come with him then, thought Eliza. She didn't dare to ask that aloud. Nov, L, B / JNN. Do you remember the past of the dark types and the light types? Asked Su Yuan. Only then did Yuan realize why Su Yuan had asked Eliza to follow him. He wanted to know about the past from someone who might remember it. She felt embarrassed. How could she have doubted him? I have no memory of the past, said Eliza. When she was summoned, all her memories were wiped away. She couldn't even remember what she had done yesterday, let alone hundreds of years ago. The rules of the Overlord plane were very effective. Only the Flower Fairy remembered some of the things that had come to pass in the hero plane. Logically, it seemed that any hero summoned to the Overlord plane, no matter how strong, had their memories wiped out. Su Yuan only wanted to know what had happened in the hero plane before he transmigrated into the body of the dark demon dragon. The rules were strict. The Overlord plane held secrets that still needed to be unearthed. Perhaps erasing the memories of the heroes was a shot at providing equal standing for competition. No matter how strong a hero was, they had to start at the same place to achieve greatness. Su Yuan wondered if he could understand and bend the laws of the Overlord plane once he reached level 100. For now, it seemed that overthinking wasn't going to provide any solutions. He needed to think of a way to upgrade the territory. Stay with the Overlord for the next few days and quickly level up, said Su Yuan. Understood. Yuan waited till Eliza left. She went to take a shower and decided on a pair of sexy pajamas to tempt Su Yuan. Although Su Yuan didn't have any inappropriate motives, Yuan could still sense how amazed he was at Eliza. Suwon felt conflicted. The flower fairy was a female hero, but she had never posed a threat to Suwon. The flower fairy was a small creature and wouldn't think of ensnaring Su Yuan with her charm. However, Eliza was different. She was a succubus, which meant that much of her power had the sole purpose of seducing male heroes. Suwon felt like she had to do better, so Su Yuan followed her wholeheartedly. Su Yuan closed his eyes. He was unaware of Suwon's thoughts. At this moment, he was deep in thought. He wondered where the void creatures came from. Were their memories also wiped out before they entered the Overlord plane? From what he knew so far, every creature had an origin energy. This was their essence. Whether it was a light-type hero, dark-type hero, void creature, or a human, they all had an origin energy within them that never changed. Although void creatures were treated as monsters that could be slain to level up, they were not better or worse than any other creature in this world. If the void creatures rapidly leveled up and surpassed others, humans could just as easily be made into their prey. 277 Rapid development of the agricultural area. Su Yuan felt that things were going to get even more difficult than before. Suwon was still weak. She was stronger than the other overlords right now, but when compared to the light and the dark types, she wasn't even worth the mention. She needed to get stronger. Unfortunately, Suwon's potential was very limited. It was impossible for her to grow rapidly. She could only do it gradually. Su Yuan was confident that Suwon could stand by his side when he reached his peak. However, that would take too long. Su Yuan couldn't change the rules of the Overlord plane. He had to find other ways to help Suwon get stronger. He sighed. Are there no shortcuts? If Suwon could gain experience points in her sleep like him, she would level up quickly. Su Yuan, I am coming. Suwon appeared out of the shower in a milky white pajama, which revealed her pale white thighs. It seemed Eliza had given her quite a shock. n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. The next morning, Suwon scouted the territory to find a suitable location to build arrow towers. When we have enough resources, we will start construction immediately. Hurricane Arrow Tower construction requirement, 50,000 gold coins, wood, stone, and iron ore, 500 crystals, 500 gems, 500 mercuries. Right now, she didn't have enough resources. The red-eyed black dragon was particularly excited. He was assigned with finding suitable staff for the food workshop and the winery. He had to choose carefully. He was short of some resources to get going on recruiting the staff for these two places. Suwon was convinced that she needed to set up some form of trade to earn resources. The quickest way to earn resources was from trading. She needed something attractive enough for people to spend money on. Hunting and exploring weren't reliable sources to earn resources in the long term. The first thing was to have something that would attract people. To produce higher quality goods, Suwon needed someone with talent and skills. She had no choice but to turn to Eliza. Eliza was quite skilled and business-minded. She was adept at negotiating with people, especially men. Suwon knew that Eliza could solve the problem of the food workshop and the winery in no time. At least the 100 night flower honey and the dragon drool grass were expanding rapidly in amount. There was a limit to how much honey the night devil bees could produce at a time. However, there was no such restriction for the dragon drool grass. Suwon had a hunch that these two things will be their money-making source. Dragon drool grass was a medicinal herb that had a very quick and useful effect. Everyone would surely covet it. When she walked out of the dark castle, the residents of her territory bowed to her respectfully. Some pressed their fists to their chest to express their admiration. Suwon nodded and acknowledged them as she passed by. The territory had clearly become prosperous under her leadership. It was crowded, to say the least. Some of the residents still weren't familiar with the place. However, when they saw other residents bowing and saluting Suwon, they followed suit. Suwon headed to the agricultural area. As she got near, she saw some parts that were scorched because of yesterday's incident. Most crops had ripened. They could be harvested within 2 days. The agricultural section was vast. Auntie Green, who was responsible for the management of the area, smiled at her as she approached. This must be a blessing from the gods. Auntie Green exclaimed. Those D*Ned vultures? If I hadn't run fast enough, I wouldn't be here today to greet you. Those vultures will soon be turned into fertilizers for the area. I promise you that, said Suwon. Auntie Green smiled happily. My lord, you should check on the night devil bees. The queen bee has many nests. You are really smart. You even knew that they would split their nests. Suwon nodded and turned to leave. As she walked further toward the vast field, the night devil bees swarmed over. Suwon reached their nest and estimated the amount of the 100 night flower honey that had been produced. There were 10 empty wooden boxes placed around the main nest. It was prepared in advance for the bees to slit their nest. However, Suwon realized that the yield of the honey wasn't as she had expected. She turned to look at the field and saw the part of the land which was burned and blackened because of the venom vultures. Her gaze turned cold. The light types and the vultures deserve death. This was absolutely unforgivable. She walked further into the fields toward the rice plantation. The ears were already blooming. It wouldn't be long before they could harvest the rice as well. There were around 10 residents who were tending to the crops. The plants swayed in the gentle breeze. The fields were so full of life that it made Suwon feel happy. The scene filled with vitality made her feel better. She had exchanged many resources for 100 mu of rice and wheat. The rice was planted last month. The crops were already growing bountifully. She could harvest it soon. She felt relaxed when she saw that everything was turning out all right. She could use certain treasures to rush the harvesting period of the crops. However, she didn't think it was necessary. She had already used the treasure to rush the harvesting period for the dragon fruits, solely because she needed them to flower as soon as possible. It was necessary because the night devil bees had to collect nectar from the flowers. She walked into the paddy field. They were all so lush and green that it made Yuan giddy with happiness. This was what she had always wanted. The green crops represented life and vitality. She then walked to the wheat field to check. Yuan went to meet Auntie Green once again. She urged her to assign more people to the fields so that more attention could be given to the well-being of the crops. Aunt Green agreed to do it. She was in charge of the fields, and she liked her job. Auntie Green had been managing the fields for a while now. There had been no problems under her management till now, so Yuan trusted her. 278 Territory Expansion. After inspecting the territory to her heart's content, Yuan took the night elves, the rotten cavalry, and the succubus outside to slay some monsters. They were the main strength of the territory and would be fighting at the forefront during an attack. It was necessary to train them. Yuan didn't accompany them for such a small mission. Only dangerous places like the mythical ruin were worthy of his attention. This was Eliza's first time being part of such a system of leveling up. She only needed to follow what the others were doing and gain experience points. Yuan stayed behind but kept track of Yuan's progress through shared communication. She led her troop to the void crack. In the early stages, Yuan simply skipped fighting. When the night elves and the rotten cavalry caught up with her, Yuan became calm. She stayed at the back and watched the show as her team fought. As expected of a troop from the mythical ruin, the rotten cavalry was really strong. Yuan was happy. With such strong troops, she could soon sleep and gain experience like Yuan while her troops fought on her behalf. My beautiful lord, you can't be lazy. You have to level up and collect more resources. When the territory is upgraded, I will level up too. Why don't you try and gain some experience points while you are there? Yuan's voice startled Yuan, who was lazily watching her troops fight. She turned around. Yuan was perched on the wall behind her. When did he arrive? He had caught her red-handed. I will work hard, said Yuan with a scowl. I only wish you wouldn't squeeze me dry like this. She joined Eliza and the others to kill the monsters around. Time passed quickly, and their territory entered a short period of peace and stability. The number of residents had increased in the territory. They were close to upgrading the territory to level 4. Territory core upgrade requirements. Land area, 7/10 square kilometers, not yet achieved. Total amount of resources, 1300/2000 tons, not yet achieved. 13/20 buildings, not yet achieved. Population, 14560/20,000 people, not yet achieved. The experience points gained were enough for Yuan to reach the level 70 threshold. Everything was developing beautifully. However, Yuan felt that it would be even better if Yuan was less jealous of everyone. The morning sun was warm and beautiful. Yuan hugged Yuan. She convinced him to turn into his human form when he slept. His arms were wrapped around him. One of her legs hooked around his waist. Yuan opened her drowsy eyes and reluctantly left Yuan's warm embrace. She walked to the vanity table and began to get dressed. She tied her long hair into a ponytail and took a sip of the 100 night flower honey that she kept in a small bottle. The 100 night flower honey was supposed to be very effective in restoring and maintaining youthful beauty. She probably might be the only person to own something like that in this world. A notification sounded. Someone mentioned her in the group chat. Shi Linglong at Yuan, respond. Yuan, what is it? Shi Linglong, Wan, the three of us were planning to upgrade our territory to level 3 and also expand it. We sensed frequent movement of the light and the dark types in the past few days. We are planning to expand toward your territory. Zhao Qingrong, that's right. The world is becoming more dangerous day after day. We need to stick together. Lin Yao, +1. The territories of the four lords were far from each other. They had planned to expand their territory outward to new areas, but the Overlord Plain was becoming more dangerous. It was logical for them to expand toward each other and close the distance between their territories. Everyone had to be prepared. When the time came, the four of them could band together for a fight. The light types were very quiet after the incident with the venom vultures. They might be brewing some other trouble in secret. Yuan's friends needed her permission if they were going to expand toward her territory. Without her consent, they couldn't infringe on her borders. N/O/vel/b/in.c//om. Yuan was the strongest among them right now. By joining her, they would all benefit. Zhao Qingrong, what do you think? In the future, we can have a sleepover? The four of us. Yuan snorted. Who would want to sleep with a bunch of tramps like you? She always enjoyed hugging Yuan to sleep, especially since he changed into his human form at night. She walked to the bed and sat on the edge of it. Yuan, Shi Linglong, and the others are planning to expand their territories toward us. What do you think about it? She whispered in his ear. Do as you please, said Yuan and turned the other way to continue sleeping. Yuan, sure. You all can expand toward my territory. When I expand my territory, I will do it toward your territories as well. Zhao Qingrong, thank you, Wan. I promise I won't lay a finger on your precious dragon. Shi Linglong, Wan, be careful. Qingrong is flirtatious. Don't let her get near to your dragon. There was always some kind of trouble that the lords had to deal with whenever they chose to expand their territory. Xi Linglong was the first to encounter it. She messaged for help in the group chat after provoking a light-type creature. Yuan activated her demonic dragon form, unfurled her wings, and flew over to help her friend. She wanted to take Yuan with her, but he was busy in a meeting with the Dark Alliance. She felt that she had improved a lot in the past few months to deal with something like this. She rushed to her friend to offer her help. She didn't even inform Yuan before leaving. There has been news of sightings of a rare light-type creature near Xi Linglong's territory. It is at least of the mythical level. We need to tread with caution, said the Dark Enchanter. Usually, Yuan wouldn't participate in the Dark Alliance meetings. However, the Dark Enchanter had invited him specifically because the matter wasn't something small that they could deal with. Mythical level. Yuan frowned. He seemed to be deep in thought. Xi Linglong and the others were discussing expanding their territories. What if the light-type creatures take advantage of their vulnerability and attack their territory cores? I will go and check once, said Yuan. He unfurled his wings and flew away. The Dark Enchanter, the White Dragon Saint, the Fallen Angel, and the Red-Eyed Black Dragon all glanced at each other. Was this still the Dark Demon Dragon that they knew? In the past, all Yuan did was sleep in the Dark Castle. How had he suddenly become interested in something like this? Was it because of his hatred toward the light types? They had many questions but no definite answers. Yuan flew around Xi Linglong's territory and sensed the aura of the light-type creatures. He didn't know how strong the creature was. 279 Dark Demon Dragon level. Yuan had already broken through to level 70 by this time. Name, Yuan. Demonic Dragon's true name, Lapis Olga. Race, Dark Demon Dragon. Level, 70. Strength, 4103. Spirit, 4112. Agility, 4007. Constitution, 4150. Abilities. Night Shift LVL5. As a Dark Demon Dragon, the energy of the night can be converted to power. During the night, the experience will be automatically gained at all times. The amount of experience gained will increase according to the current skill level. Dragon God Slumber LVL3. As long as you fall into a deep sleep, you will receive the blessing of the night. Demonic Dragon's Blessing LVL6. Imbues the Demonic Dragon's aura onto living creatures, strengthening them. All attributes will increase by 2200% for 1 hour. The living creature has a chance of transforming, and the buff cannot be dispelled. Demon Dragon Wings LVL4, ability to fly. At night, ability to travel from one dark area to another n/o/vel/b/jn.c//om. Demonic Dragon's Breath LVL3, spit out a demonic dragon's breath, causing AoE damage to the target area. Creatures who die from the demonic dragon's breath have a 15% chance of becoming an undead, depending on the ability level. Lord of Darkness LVL3, has absolute control over all dark creatures. Can forcefully control dark creatures. Within the territory, you can use a certain amount of dark energy to resurrect dead dark creatures. Dark Fusion LVL3, fuse 2 dark creatures of the same race into one creature for 30 minutes. The fused creature will have the combined attributes of the 2 creatures. True Eye of the Demon Dragon LVL3, the true eye of the magic dragon can see through all illusions. It can trace back time and see what happened 62 hours ago. Dark Dual Domain, drag the enemy into the dual domain and engage in a fair one-on-one duel. There is no interference from the outside world during this period. The winner will devour the soul of the loser and absorb the power. Chaos Realm, gather 12 elemental hearts and fuse them into a Chaos Core. Use the Chaos Core as support to release the Chaos Realm. Within the territory, all other elemental powers will be suppressed, and the skills of the territory's master would be greatly strengthened. Within the territory, all other elemental powers would be suppressed, and the skills of the territory's master would be greatly strengthened. Lost in the night. When this night magic is cast, within the range of the magic array, enemies with weak willpower will be lost in the darkness and become its slaves. Dark Destructive Light LVL2, summons a huge black pillar of light from the sky and penetrates the earth, annihilating all enemies within the pillar of light. Damage dealt is, Spirit X20. The Dark Destructive Light has the ability to lock space. Once it locks onto an enemy, it can bombard the enemy across space. Original Field LVL2, summon a force field that can withstand most attacks. The force field will form a space of its own, and anyone inside it can escape into an alternate dimension to avoid damage. Dragon Will, can be used on creatures with dragon blood to awaken the sleeping dragon blood and dragon soul. Chance of atavism. After this, if he wanted to level up further, he had to wait for the territory core to be upgraded. In Xi Linglong's territory, they were surrounded. The light-type creatures looked at Yuan and Xi Linglong with contempt. Go and give them hell, shouted Xi Linglong to her troops. After a while, the ground shook violently as if everything was going to collapse inward. What's happening? The light-type creatures were light dragons. Before they could understand what was going on, Xi Linglong's initial hero, the Flower Fairy, appeared in front of them. How dare you destroy our territory? Don't you dare think you can escape from here. The Flower Fairy charged at them. One of the light dragons stared at the angry hero. It raised its claws and spread the wings on its back and flew higher. A blue array of magic appeared behind this dragon. The array shot water blades at the Flower Fairy. The Flower Fairy was unfazed. She crossed her arms in front of her to block the attack. She had a high magic resistance. The water blades collided with her arms and dissipated without causing her any harm. The light dragon's eyes narrowed. The water blades turned around and rushed toward the light dragon. It was ready. It raised its claws and blocked it. The flower fairy grabbed the light dragon by the neck and slammed it to the ground. The light dragon could lift its head. The wings on its back flapped to no avail. The last thing that the light dragon saw was the initial hero's face as it slipped out of consciousness. She then flung the light dragons away. The flower fairy looked at the other light dragons, which were now retreating. One of the light dragons let out a roar. Fire condensed in its throat, and it aimed the flames at the initial hero. It opened its mouth and let out a stream of blue-white fire. A terrifying explosion blew everything away. The initial hero, the flower fairy, appeared slowly out of the smoke. Her eyes narrowed at the ground that was burning. The blast had affected those standing near the pit. Some of the dragons fainted and fell into the pit. The flower fairy slowly walked forward. The battle had just begun. War was always a place to reap benefits for certain people. Yuan, Zhao Qingrong, Lin Yao, and Shi Linglong did their best to assemble their troops and get ready for a long fight. There were other lords converging to try to take advantage of this situation. Everyone wanted to obtain more resources. A fight was always an opportunity to do just that. Moreover, they all knew about Yuan from the inter-campus tournament. 280 the light types and their new attacks. They had to get rid of these light-type creatures and their lord. We don't need to be lenient. They attacked first. This lord's territory is in the middle. It is better if we can eliminate them and clear the way. Yuan and Su Yuan had fought together for so long. She had begun to understand that the strong preyed on the weak. That was the rule of the world. Let's go all out. Shi Linglong gritted her teeth. They just needed to wait till Su Yuan arrived. If they could hold out till then, he would definitely help them. The success and failure of the four lords depended on him now. Everyone, take care of your troops. Protect yourselves and try to reduce the casualties. We need to hold our ground till Su Yuan arrives, said Yuan. If she had known that there were such strong light types here, she wouldn't have rushed over alone. Without Su Yuan by their side, they wouldn't be able to resurrect the troops or themselves if they died here. Yuan stood at the back in a relatively safe place. As a temporarily chosen leader, she needed to be able to see the progress of the fight and issue orders from a safe place. The sound of a horn rang out from the dimensional portal. The war had begun. Archers, get ready, Shi Linglong ordered. The soldiers stationed on the city wall pulled their longbows. The sound of the bowstrings being pulled tight was audible. Countless mechanical troops entered from the dimensional portal. The mechanical troops were masterpieces of the dwarves, who were exemplary in building such things. The weapons and blades on the body of these mechanical troops looked intimidating. Attack! The archers fired. The volley of arrows arched through the sky toward the dimensional portal. For a moment, the arrows covered the whole sky like a curtain. Then, they descended on the mechanical troops. Even though the mechanical troops' bodies were made of metal, the arrows pierced through them. However, the arrows were barely enough to hold them back as more and more mechanical puppets arrived through the dimensional portal. The ground was littered with metal bodies. Numerous mechanical troops appeared to replace them. Behind them, human warriors appeared as well. The corpses of the mechanical troops that were piled up at the front provided ample cover for the human troops which just arrived. Their archers fired their arrows to counter the incoming volley of arrows. Meanwhile, the human warriors advanced toward the bottom of the territory wall. The walls were high enough to make sure ordinary people or troops couldn't climb through. However, warriors were a different story. They were trained for something like this. Nov. L. B /JNN. The fully armed human warriors leaped up and stabbed their long blades into the walls. They pulled themselves up the wall. Shi Linglong's archers were busy firing a volley of arrows to stop more troops from entering through the dimensional portal. Only the troops that were near the wall could pose the enemies a threat. Despite their efforts, the front of the walls was crawling with enemy warriors. There were just too many of them. They couldn't kill them all. Just when they thought the enemy would succeed, a volley of fire arrows rained down. The enemy warriors weren't prepared. Although their armors were strong and covered them almost entirely, the few uncovered areas were vulnerable. Blood sputtered when they were pierced. There was the smell of burning flesh. The night flame archers that Yuan had brought along with her did their job perfectly. A notification appeared in Yuan's mind. You have leveled up. Her aura reached its peak. Every time she leveled up, her attributes increased, and she felt a surge of power within her body. The benefits of each upgrade were not to be underestimated. As a person who was under contract with Yuan received better benefits than most. She took a deep breath as she felt the immense power flow through her body. She had finally leveled up. The enemy troops kept advancing. The number of archers on the enemy side gradually increased and attacked their archers. Mages, attack with magic fire, shouted Lin Yao. The mage army that Lin Yao had brought along with her began chanting. Fireballs whizzed past and fell from the sky onto the enemy troops. The temperature suddenly increased. The enemy archers were engulfed by flames. Of course, the fight wouldn't end so easily. The enemy offense strategy began to get more aggressive. More archers, mechanical troops, priests, and creatures of light poured in from the dimensional portal to replace the fallen human warriors. The combat ability of a mixed army was always more powerful and confusing to deal with than facing just one type of troop. The deadly arrows weakened as the priest's healing and courage spells encased the enemy troops. The mechanical troops constructed siege ladders at a rapid speed. Half an hour later, the siege ladders were completed. The enemies charged up the city wall easily. Yuan ordered the archers on the wall to retreat a little further so they could form a new line of attack. At the same time, she urged Lin Yao to order the mages to produce more fireballs to destroy the enemies and their siege ladders. However, maintaining and repairing the walls of the territory required too much energy and resources. Shi Linglong couldn't do two things at once. She focused on keeping the walls upright. They did not have the confidence that they could win this fight. Shi Linglong had to rely on Yuan's troops if she wanted to survive. Blazing Flame Axe Break. Other than the Night Flame Archers, they still had the Heavy Blade Warriors and the Battle Axe Warriors that they could send outside to fight. The Battle Axe Warrior threw their battle axes at the enemy troops from the walls. The battle axes crushed the enemy and erupted in flames, covering a diameter of about 10 meters. 281 The Fierce Alliance of the Four Lords. Even if the enemy warriors were of level 40 to 50, they would definitely be crushed under such force. Yuan and the other lords had lost at least a dozen of their troops. The light types and their attacks had exceeded their expectations. Moreover, the enemies kept applying buffs and other abilities that could increase their combat power. The enemy fought aggressively. Almost every second, numerous troops fell on the battlefield. Nov. L. B /JNN. The territory walls were in bad shape. If Shi Linglong hadn't repaired it constantly, the walls would have fallen a long time ago. Su Yuan, please come quickly. Yuan prayed in her heart. Many armored light griffins, light dragons, and light unicorns appeared through the dimensional portal. Sensing their weakness, they launched their final wave of attacks. The light types were always arrogant. They could not tolerate anything other than their own point of view. Every other creature, hero, or human had to be purified under the holy light. They knew the four lords were planning to merge their territories. The light types vowed to destroy their territory cores one by one. Strange giant worms crawled out of the dimensional portal and bore into the earth. There were several dents in its abdomen where the human warriors sat. These dents were covered by spikes. Those were the light earth-boring worm cavalry. These creatures dug their way into the earth the moment they came out of the dimensional portal. They could create tunnels underground and directly enter the territory with the human warriors in their bodies. Yuan's face darkened. The light types had launched a fatal attack from three sides: the sky, the land, and the underground. They were in despair. They were already fighting with all they had. Yuan commanded the troops according to what was needed. Shi Linglong repaired the territory walls to keep them intact. Zhao Qingrong was fighting with her warriors at the forefront. Lin Yao led the mages to attack with their devastating fireballs. If Su Yuan didn't arrive soon, they would fail. Their defenses would fall apart. Only now did Yuan understand how essential Su Yuan was to her. The situation had begun to spiral out of control. Shi Linglong was still busy repairing and maintaining the territory walls. She had no time or energy to spare for anything else. Zhao Qingrong also felt a sense of doom when she saw more and more enemy troops approach. Although Lin Yao's A-class fire magic was enough to cause devastating damage, it needed a constant flow of mana to sustain the magic. However, Lin Yao wasn't ready to give up yet. Her face darkened. Wan, order the troops to retreat behind the walls for now. She would show the enemy what a natural disaster felt like. Yuan immediately heeded her request. She issued a temporary retreat order. They all had witnessed Lin Yao's power before. Her sacred fire mage profession was not for the faint-hearted. Zhao Qingrong led her warriors and retreated gradually. Lin Yao's flames began to surge. In an instant, countless flames descended from the sky. Some portion of the broken territory wall also suffered the brunt of these flames. They collapsed when the flames rained down. They had no time to watch. They noticed that the ground rumbled and an enormous light earth-boring worm cavalry erupted from the ground. Troops poured in. The enemies planned to attack them from behind. Many light dragons swooped down from the sky as they prepared to breathe fire. A dragon's breath could even melt steel. Their target was Yuan. Lin Yao commanded her flames. The sky had become one huge fire monster as it devoured everything around. The enemies' pained cries filled the air as the fire fell on them indiscriminately. Some troops tried to flee back to the dimensional portal. However, when they reached there, they saw that the portal was also covered in fire. It was like a dragon's fire breath falling on a pile of haystacks. The terrifying fire vortex pulled them in and burned them to crisps. The fire engulfed everyone, whether they were a friend or a foe. The troops that couldn't escape on time were completely burned. Screams of agony filled the air. This was no less than a natural disaster on a monstrous level. A lord who was ranked 7th on the leaderboard was watching everything from afar. In the blink of an eye, 300,000 enemy troops were reduced to 50. The lord who ranked 5th was equally stunned. When they received news of Shi Linglong planning to expand her territory, they rushed to eliminate her to weaken the alliance of the four lords. Things had gone smoothly. However, the tables had suddenly turned. It was unbelievable. The points of the four lords slowly increased on the leaderboard. It had just reached 200,000. Yuan's points soared to 500,000. The lords were anxious. In the past, the leaderboard represented the strength of each lord. However, it now seemed that those in the upper rankings were just cannon fodders for the four lords to gain more points. Yuan was ranked first. The gap in her strength and the other lords was like a difference between heaven and earth. The four lords were like sisters. They would band together and advance together no matter what the cost. If they were allowed to grow at this pace, the lords would be classified into two types in the future. The first type would be someone like Yuan, and all of them would be labeled under a second type. The others wouldn't be able to compete at all. These shameless women have accumulated so many points. Is this the true power of the top lords? I'm so angry. I didn't even get to fight them. Sister Yuan, do you have sisters? Ever since the inter-campus tournament, everyone knew of Yuan and her devastating strength. However, they wondered where the dark demon dragon was. He didn't appear at all. Qingrong, take the troops to the base to stall for time. Zhao Qingrong, who was watching everything in shock, regained her senses. She immediately responded to Yuan's order. 282, killing the common enemy, Yuan. Yuan didn't hesitate. She summoned the nine-headed Hydra. Before the enemy could react, the Hydra lifted Lin Yao and slithered away. Zhao Qingrong looked at her troops. Some of you stay behind and guard the rear. Others, retreat. Your goal is to stall for time. Yuan and Lin Yao rode on the back of the Hydra. However, they were about to reach their speed limit. The Hydra slithered through the rocks and boulders quickly. Yuan opened the forum on her device. Some lords were posting the same sentence over and over again. We must kill Yuan. Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was now a common enemy of the lords, and they wanted to get rid of her. The news that followed made the players who had suffered a huge blow excited. Good news? Yuan's troops were defeated. The remaining troops are trapped. At the opening of the dimensional portal, the sandstorm had calmed. Numerous troops began to emerge once again. When the other lords found this out, they began to send their troops through the portal to salvage the resources. Yuan ignored them and gestured for the Hydra to slither toward the northwest corner of the valley. The place astonished them. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. The ground had become so dry that cracks spread everywhere like spider webs. The space between the cracks formed a deep and bottomless void. Even a dragon would fall to its death if it stumbled between the cracks. On both sides of these cracks were piles of sand. Yuan could feel the power in this place. Her own power surged in response. This was the opportunity to upend the battle. This terrain was perfect. It was easy to defend here but difficult to attack. The advantage of such a place was that the enemy didn't get to decide who would live and who would die. Yuan's eyes sparkled. They still had a chance? She was now grateful for Yuan trying to force her to train every day. Otherwise, she couldn't even think of coming up with an idea such as this. She had grown a lot as a lord. She could not believe that Yuan, who used her as a tool every day, was behind her progress in combat and strategy. While the invading lords were busy enjoying their success and taking it easy, she had trained every single day to become stronger. It was now time to put what she had learned into practice and see the results for herself. They let the Hydra hide first. Surrounded by piles of sand, Yuan and Lin Yao stayed out of sight. Yuan took out the magic crystal and let Lin Yao replenish her mana to perform magic again if needed. The two of them looked around to decide on a suitable location for the next battle. A moment later, they found it. Yuan gestured to Lin Yao. They climbed down a small valley that was just a few meters wide. At the base, they saw a circular passageway that was around 300 meters tall and 30 meters wide. It looked as though it was dug into a circular shape by a machine. They stood in front of this huge passageway. Just then, the sound of falling rocks rang out from the tunnel. The sound seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It sounded somewhat muffled. Yuan recalled something Yuan had told her. The creature's name surfaced in her mind, Dark Demonic Sandworm. It was a monster Yuan had warned her about. It was a special creature that was huge and could devour light dragons very easily. When Yuan first heard of it, she had just brushed it off because she had no idea how huge the creature must be. Now that she was in front of the enormous passageway, which was probably made by the creature, she truly felt terrified of the monster. However, Yuan wondered how useful the monster would be in a fight. Even 30 warriors wouldn't be a match for such a creature. Yuan and Lin Yao stayed alert. When they felt that there was no immediate danger of the creature suddenly appearing before them, they made their way further into the valley. They soon came across a similar passageway. This passageway was even larger than before. Yuan frowned. How many huge creatures lived in this area? Yuan tried to open her senses and find out. The creatures seemed to be deep in sleep for now. Their life force was stable. Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. She ignored everything else and observed the cracks on the ground more closely. They had to choose a location that was large enough to bury all their enemies in one go. The lords were done with salvaging the resources. They turned their focus toward the northwest direction. The spatial crack that Yuan had chosen was not huge. It was only about 100 kilometers from the center to the northwest corner. The flying troops arrived in about 20 minutes. However, they were a little disappointed when they saw the cracks in the ground. How will they ever find the enemy in such a terrain? Finding two people in the ground with so many cracks was like searching for a needle in a haystack. They started building a dimensional portal to summon the troops quickly. The army reacted quickly and immediately gathered the mages to start building the teleportation portal. The dimensional portal directly teleported the troops to the valley. There were so many of them that the sky was entirely covered by flying troops. The lords hitched a ride and flew around the valley. Numerous troops covered the sky. They could hunt Yuan and Lin Yao down from every direction. Yuan would definitely be killed this time. If they couldn't get rid of Yuan even after this, it would be a disgrace. The lords couldn't believe Yuan and Lin Yao held out till now. If it was anyone else, they would have run out of ammunition. Besides, how could they even escape from something like this? The lords and their troops were full of confidence. The terrain was now swarming with light dragons, light unicorns, and light griffins. There were numerous other troops on the ground too. The lords were confident they could kill Yuan. However, the thought made them uneasy. No matter how many times they tried to deny it, the fact that Yuan had become a common enemy to so many lords felt like an honor. She was seen as the strongest and the most significant threat anyone had ever encountered. The light types wouldn't even bother if somebody else was in her place. The lords couldn't help but marvel at Yuan's prowess even if they wanted to kill her. However, this was the end for Yuan. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't avoid this. The troops searched for her at the center of the valley. 283 Collapse of the Rift Valley. Everyone, Yuan is here. The troops swarmed over to the direction from where the shout had come. More than 10 lords followed behind. A giant rift appeared before them. A terrifying giant rift appeared in their line of sight. It was more than 300 meters wide and 4,000 meters deep. One could barely see the bottom of the rift. Looking down from the sky, it looked like the earth had split open. At this moment, they saw a face in the valley. The lords opened the attribute panel to confirm that it was really Yuan. They were excited to find out that it was her. Sister Yuan, you can't run away now. Why are you being so respectful? She must have cheated all this while. Who dares to slander her? Now that all of them were fighting against the 4 lords, it was okay for them to defeat them and claim victory. However, Yuan and the 4 lords were still the strongest among them. They could fight them, but they didn't dare to disrespect them. Yuan waited for her chance. When a few people approached the area where she was, she attacked. The area where the lords and their troops were standing collapsed. They only managed to scream for help as they fell into the bottomless rift. Killed a light type overlord. Reward, 300 points. Light dragons flapped their wings and swooped down. Yuan didn't panic. Instead, she smiled. Come on. Yuan pulled Lin Yao into the open area. The sacred fire mage was exposed to everyone. The enemy troops saw them. The enemy lord smiled in triumph. There was nowhere Yuan and Lin Yao could run. The light dragons surrounded the 2 women. Dragon breath began to gather at their throats. If the dragons weren't wary of Yuan, the dark demon dragon, they would have already released the fire in their breaths. There was the largest light dragon at the front. A black armored knight rode on its back. He held a dragon spear in his hands. The aura on his body surged. He was relieved that Yuan had nowhere to run. However, he knew about Yuan's hero. He was hesitant. The knight made some gestures to delay the attack. They would wait for reinforcement to arrive. Yuan couldn't care less. The light types were arrogantly showing off their power. As a lord to a dark type, she couldn't tolerate this. Come then, shouted Yuan. Try your luck. When my hero arrives, you will all be dead. The knight held his spear tighter. He looked angry. This was an insult to his strength. Yuan and Lin Yao looked unfazed. They patiently waited for the attacks to come. The knight was furious. He would personally kill Yuan with his bare hands. The troops in the air swarmed over and crowded the sky above the rift. The mage army also arrived at the scene. The mages cast spells and sealed the area to prevent Lin Yao from using her magic to escape like before. At the same time, magic locked onto Yuan and Lin Yao. They were under the radar of so many troops now. They really couldn't run even if they wanted to. Numerous lords also rushed over to the area. Flying troops watched Yuan and Lin Yao closely. Real-time battle report. Yuan has been blocked by the enemy from all sides in the rift. The champion might actually die this time? Yuan is definitely going to die this time. There are hundreds of mages around. It is impossible to escape by teleportation at this time n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. It wasn't easy, but they did it. Even with thousands of troops against her, Yuan looked smug. Every single one of you will remember this day, shouted Yuan. The lords were all stunned. Was Yuan crazy? She was about to die, but she was still spouting nonsense. Yuan was unfazed. The knight gritted his teeth as he looked at the arrogant Yuan. Yuan and Lin Yao were surrounded from every side. Even if they displayed heaven-defying strength, they couldn't escape. At this moment, the night devil bees swarmed over from afar. They attacked every light type on sight. The knights riding the light dragons were uneasy. They saw Yuan take out a crystal ball. An immense amount of energy surged toward Lin Yao. Flames covered her. In an instant, fire rained down from the sky and caused enormous explosions. The valley collapsed. The terrain began crashing down. The effect was devastating to the onlookers. The knights looked on in shock. The troops were all stunned. The troops in the air had a chance to escape, but those on the ground felt despair. They cowered in fear. The night devil bees attacked the troops in the air and made it difficult for them to fly away. D***mn. The knights howled in anger. They rushed towards Yuan. Yuan summoned the 9-headed hydra and escaped with Lin Yao. The knights' attacks missed the target. Giant rocks fell like flaming meteors. The knights on the dragons only wanted to reach Yuan, no matter what. They couldn't dodge the meteors in time. It was like a natural disaster. No one could withstand such a catastrophe. Moreover, when they had sealed the area to prevent Yuan from escaping, they had sealed themselves in, too. The light types had been careless. In their excitement to kill Yuan, they had messed up. 284 ranking points soared. How could the whole terrain collapse? The enemy troops felt the inevitable doom. A catastrophe didn't differentiate between the light or the dark. The collapse of the terrain started a chain reaction, and the other areas began to collapse one after another. The lords, who had been rejoicing before, were flustered. Most of their troops weren't airborne. If they couldn't fly, they would end up dead. Where could they even hope to run if the earth collapsed under their feet? Just moments before, they were excited to see Yuan die. Now they were in a predicament. The lords who were waiting for Yuan's downfall were shocked and scared. The shock they felt was partly because Yuan and Lin Yao's points were increasing rapidly. Yuan, 173,6000 points. Lin Yao, 793,824 points. Yuan's points had been 500,000 a few minutes before. The cracks spread across hundreds of miles. Numerous troops fell. Deep inside the ground, Yuan and Lin Yao stood in the passageway. This was the passage created by the burrowing of the dark demonic sandworm. They heard rumbling over their heads. It seemed like the passage was going to collapse at any given moment. Yuan opened the attribute panel and smiled. Their points had increased rapidly because of the massive collapse of the valley. Although it was unlikely for them to level up in such a short time, the points did help. The other lords and their troops wouldn't be foolish enough to use such a move in the future. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. The lords, who were riding their aerial troops, looked at the scene unfold in shock. Their excitement had disappeared. The only thing they felt now was fear. Yuan was indeed ruthless. So many troops were dead. They were swallowed up by the earth. Yuan and Lin Yao's points had increased, but they felt that it was not enough. They wanted to increase it more. The news about the incident spread to the forum. All the lords reading the post were silent. I don't know what to say. How is Yuan so strong? How did the troops get lured to the valley? Did they not think it was suspicious? The 50 other lords can't even compare to the top 4 lords. Many lords had been wiped out that day because of their recklessness. The lords had thought Yuan and Lin Yao might have died too. However, they sensed a power shift. Could it be that they were still alive? Everyone wondered if Yuan and Lin Yao were even human. The lords and the light types were in despair. The losses they had suffered were heavy. They needed to kill Yuan to compensate for it. The dimensional portal flashed. It hadn't been destroyed yet. The light earth-boring worm cavalry entered through it. The worm cavalry used their calicary to dig a hole deep into the ground. Yuan sensed them. The tunnels collapsed. However, the light earth-boring worm cavalry had tough armor to withstand the debris. It was close to impossible to destroy their bone armor. The human warriors in the abdomen of the light earth-boring worm cavalry were safe. The warriors themselves were of level 50, so it wasn't easy to destroy them. Suddenly, something moved in the depths of the tunnel. Yuan turned around. The sound was getting nearer. Yuan and Lin Yao sensed the danger. Every cell in their body warned them to move out of the way. Yuan urged Lin Yao to climb up first. Yuan looked further into the passageway. A new hole appeared there. The ground trembled as the creature got close. Yuan's concealment ability enveloped her body. Her gaze was focused on the direction from where the sound came. It was pitch black underground. Yuan tried to use her other senses. The tremors increased. An extremely grotesque monster appeared. It had a bloody mouth almost as big as the tunnel it had created. Numerous sharp teeth spiraled around and deep into the opening of that mouth. Each tooth was almost as tall as a person, and they were razor sharp. Even rocks turned to dust when snapped by those teeth. The huge mouth seemed to open even wider as the surrounding muscles spasmed. The creature could swallow a few dragons in one attempt if it wanted to. Sandworm. Boss type. Level 60. Before the creature reached them, Yuan pulled Lin Yao. They fell. An air current enveloped them and made them float. The sandworm hadn't noticed Yuan and Lin Yao. The creature's attention was focused on the numerous light earth-boring worm cavalry digging in its tunnel. The light earth-boring worm cavalry sensed the tremors on the ground. Before they could react, they felt the ground sink. They thought their digging had made the ground collapse. Just then, they bumped into numerous sharp teeth. They were gripped by terror and had no time to dodge as the sharp teeth bit into them and gnashed together. 285 Unexpected harvest. The sandworm's huge mouth spewed out the gravel. The creature swallowed boulders into its mouth, crunched on them, and expelled the remnants through 2 holes. The lords who were reluctant to leave the valley watched in shock as the light earth-boring worm cavalry climbed out of the holes in a rush. Before the lords could think, they saw the hideous creature climb out of the hole too. The huge mouth opened like a flower in bloom. The numerous teeth that opened in a spiral made them cower back in fear. The creature swallowed the light earth-boring worm cavalry whole. After that, the cavalry was spat out on the ground. The ground shattered. The dust and rocks flew everywhere. A few lords who were close were crushed by the falling boulders. The creature squirmed for a while and then disappeared underground again. When the lords got a hold of themselves, they saw the giant hole in the ground that was left behind by the creature as it burrowed down. Everyone was shaken by the scenes. What the hell is that thing? If multiple creatures burrowed out of the ground, they could devour everything in sight. The lords were terrified. They no longer thought about hunting Yuan. It was the last thing on their minds. They wanted to survive. The light types watched in a daze as the creatures disappeared underground. They were too stunned to say anything. Their despair was unimaginable. They wondered if God had abandoned them. Yuan, along with Lin Yao, waited for the sandworms to cease their movements. She then flew deeper. She was curious to see where these creatures lived. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she kept going deeper. Finally, she and Lin Yao came upon an open underground space. Their eyes lit up with the thrill of discovery. They waited for a while. When they sensed no danger, they dug through the gravel. So activated her inner perception. The space was huge. What caught their attention was the outermost area. Dozens of giant tunnels connected the deeper parts of the earth to the surface. The space smelled fishy. Yuan activated the true eye of the demon dragon to understand more about this underground space they had discovered. At least 10 wormlets were sleeping in the space. Each of them was 10 meters long. Yuan looked around. Is this the creature's nest? The creature hadn't returned, so that gave them some time to explore. Yuan wondered if she would find anything worthwhile in this area. Yuan's camouflage was still active. She and Lin Yao blended with the background. She wasn't afraid of being discovered. Yuan examined the nest closely. The nest itself was unguarded and empty, except for the wormlets that dug deep and slept without worry. Although the wormlets were big enough to pose a threat, Yuan doubted they could fight. She walked closer to the sleeping wormlets. Their bodies were smooth and long, allowing them the flexibility of slithering through sand and tunnels. They had no eyes on their head, only a mouth. The teeth were just starting to bud. They were arranged in a spiral that went deeper into their bodies. There were 2 holes behind the mouth. This was for spewing out soil and sand to line the tunnels as they moved through them. Their bodies were created so that they could burrow through the earth. Nov. L. B / JNN. Sandworm wormlets. Level 1. Status, larva stage. Note, when the body reaches 30 meters, it will enter the growth stage. When it reaches 80 meters, it will enter adulthood. When it reaches 100 meters, it will be a full-fledged adult. Perhaps because they were still wormlets, their abilities section was blank. When one of the wormlets turned around and touched a rock, its mouth expanded, and the teeth snapped down on the rock. The teeth ground the rock to dust. Its bulging mouth shrank back to its normal size. The wormlet squirmed. The hole behind the mouth spewed out gravel after a while. Yuan also squirmed internally. These creatures would grow up to be dangerous. However, they could be very useful as a troop. If only she could raise some of them, it would be very beneficial. In the future, any enemy who attacked from the land would have to brave these creatures. Besides, her territory had many underground spaces which could prove to be a suitable habitat for such creatures. She wanted to recruit these creatures. Without disturbing the wormlets, she and Lin Yao explored the underground space. There was another huge tunnel behind the area where the wormlets slept. It was filled with sticky fluid. Is that an incubation area for the creatures? Wondered Yuan. Yuan flew to the area to examine it. She sensed something. She expanded her inner perception to gauge the area. The huge space was filled with sand. On the sand, some eggs hadn't yet hatched. There were probably several thousand eggs in there. This is a great harvest. Yuan rejoiced. Yuan's smile froze on her face. She couldn't sense any sign of life on most of the eggs. Some of the eggshells were cracked. The eggs must have hatched many years ago. These were just remnants of the eggs that had already hatched. Yuan felt a little disappointed. She could have built a massive sandworm army with these eggs. She sighed. What a pity. Yuan focused on those eggs that still had a sign of life. She only found 15 of them. Just then, 2 of the eggs cracked and little heads popped out of the shells. The 2 little wormlets devoured the opening of the egg and left the area. Yuan was even more disappointed after losing 2 more creatures. Now she only had 13 eggs to take home. She didn't have Su Yuan with her, so she wasn't willing to fight against the creatures even if they were just wormlets. If the wormlets called for their mother, she would be in danger. She quickly wrapped the 13 other eggs carefully and took them with her. They weren't easy to carry. 286 The Cowardly Lords. Yuan sought Lin Yao's help. She made her cast a levitation spell to make the eggs fly in the air. Fortunately, Lin Yao was a mage and knew many useful spells. If Yuan had Zhao Qingrong instead, they would have been able to carry only 2 eggs with them. Yuan prepared to leave the tunnel finally. When the sandworm returned to the tunnel, it would definitely go crazy because of the missing eggs. It was better to leave soon. Just as they were about to leave, Yuan decided to check the area one last time. She extended her perception to cover the whole area. She felt a fluctuation underneath the sand. She found more eggs buried deep in the sand. If it wasn't for the true eye of the demonic dragon, she wouldn't have found it. The illusion cleared, and more eggs slowly appeared before her. These eggs were smaller than the others she had found just a moment ago. The eggshells were of a faint golden color. There were mysterious patterns on the shell. What is that? Thought Yuan. Ancient sandworm egg. Level 1 Nov. L. B / JNN. Status, weak life force. Note, able to incubate but difficult to hatch because of weak life force. Yuan couldn't see any more attributes of the eggs beyond what the true eye of the demonic dragon revealed to her. However, she thought that these eggs weren't so weak. There must be a way to make them hatch. I will take them back. Su Yuan might know of a way. After carefully levitating the newly discovered eggs, they did not linger in the area any longer. Yuan looked around for any treasure that she might find in the nest. Unfortunately, there was nothing. The creature wasn't a dragon that hoarded trinkets, after all. Lin Yao refused to take any of the eggs for herself. She was disappointed that she had embarrassed herself with her magic before. So, she let Yuan keep everything as compensation for her failure. Yuan gladly accepted them. She was sure that the eggs were useful. Thinking about the creatures she would have under her command after the eggs hatched, Yuan was ecstatic. They did not dawdle any longer. They escaped. Just then, they felt the earth tremble. The creature might have discovered the missing egg. Yuan and Lin Yao fled in the opposite direction to the nest. Due to their camouflaging ability, the eggs did not leave an aura to be discovered. However, the sandworm was now so angry that it attacked everything in its sight. The troops above suffered a devastating blow. The earth crumbled, and the valley started collapsing. The troops were terrified. They had no idea what had happened to make the creature so furious. The sandworms gathered in droves and razed the valleys to the ground. Every troop on the ground felt the brunt. None survived. The situation had spiraled out of control. The troops in the air were alive. However, they were horrified watching those on the ground die brutally. In an area with such complicated terrain, it was extremely difficult to pursue Yuan and Lin Yao who could fly. After the landslide, Yuan and Lin Yao had hidden underground. However, the lords still had hope of finding them. But now, everything had spiraled out of control. Yuan had somehow angered the creatures which hunted the lords and their troops, while she escaped. When the word reached the commander of the light types, he was enraged. They had come here with the sole goal of hunting Yuan. They hadn't expected things to turn out this way. The light types had suffered a heavy loss. They were in a dire situation. They all needed to escape. If the dimensional portal closed down and dark types appeared out of nowhere to fight them, everything would be over. The light types felt helpless anger at their situation. The other lords also had mixed feelings about the situation. Yuan really can't be killed so easily, can she? They had tried and failed miserably, with hundreds of troops dead and still dying. Could Yuan even be killed? The lords were flabbergasted. They had been so full of confidence when Yuan and her friend disappeared underground. In the end, they were the ones who were trapped and killed brutally. Thousands of troops were dead. Many lords had died as well. Their downfall was tragic and brutal. Most of them were killed in the landslide or at the hands of the hideous sandworms. However, they knew that the cause of this disaster was Yuan and Lin Yao. In the alliance of the four lords, Yuan was the strongest. If they didn't defeat her now, it would be impossible to do so in the future. Yuan and Lin Yao used various tactics to beat them into submission. I don't want to see them ever again. The lord in charge of the battle report deleted the post. After that, he never posted again. The other lords were silent. They had spent so much effort and mobilized more than 1,000,000 troops to fight Yuan, but they had ended up like this. They didn't know what to feel. Was Yuan that strong, or was she truly invincible? The difference between their strength and Yuan's was huge. However, they thought they could defeat her if many of them banded together. This time, the dark demon dragon hadn't even intervened. They all felt uneasy. Nobody wanted to talk about Yuan anymore. The lord who was flying right above watched the sandworms come out of the ground and devour his troops. He turned away and left quietly. They vowed never to fight the four lords ever again. Yuan ran deeper underground and kept the true eye of the demonic dragon activated, lest she encountered any sudden surprises. The troops of the light types watched the tragedy unfold. They did not intend to make a move at all. If the light types had a hero of the highest level, they would have sent it underground to find Yuan, but they didn't have anyone who could fight the sandworms. They had severely underestimated Yuan. 287 A Seraphim. The sandworms made them feel powerless. The body of these creatures could even withstand the dragon's breath. The sandworms could also devour rocks and boulders and spew gravel to recover from their injuries. Even when they injured the creatures, the sandworms dived and reappeared within a few minutes, fully healed. The sandworm's aura of rage was palpable. Only when the aura subsided did Yuan finally relax. The most difficult moment had passed. Yuan had used all her trump cards and they were finally safe. Her greatest trump card had yet to appear. Yuan wasn't here yet. She had learned something from this incident, too. She would no longer be lazy and arrogant. She vowed to upgrade her territory as soon as possible and train every day to become stronger. Yuan was happy that she had done well this time, but she couldn't be arrogant. She had much to learn. Her territory was still not as powerful as she wanted it to be. She also gained a lot of points from this encounter. She wondered what kind of treasures she could get in exchange for her points. Another benefit of this fight was the sandworm eggs. She couldn't wait for them to hatch. The creatures would come in handy in a battle or as transportation. If she could build some storage equipment for the creatures, she could even trade things in bulk. Yuan thought of countless possibilities in which the creatures could be used. The final reward was that Xi Linglong was about to expand her territory towards Yuan. She had spent so much effort on it. In the future, all their territories would be closer together, so it would be easier to fend off enemies. Yuan had encountered an unexpected situation as he was rushing off to help Yuan. He had run into the angel army of the light types. The leader of this team was the six-winged angel leader. The underground plants glowed faintly. It was so dark that he could see almost nothing at all. The only light came from the twisted, strange plants. Yuan felt that this world was unimaginably creative. He had discovered something new. He had flown at an impossible speed and rushed to Xi Linglong's territory when he encountered the angels trying to launch a sneak attack from behind. Filthy dark demon dragon, cursed the six-winged seraphim. You are quite arrogant, aren't you, birdie, said Yuan. Kill him, commanded the seraphim. The angels had light dragons with them. Their roars were deafening. If you want death, so be it. Yuan's dark aura spread out. The angels felt the doom in their souls. Their legs trembled. It was hard to stay upright. They wanted to rush and attack, but their bodies didn't obey them. Demonic Dragon's Breath LVL3, spit out a demonic dragon's breath, causing AoE damage to the target area. Creatures who die from the demonic dragon's breath have a 30% chance of becoming an undead, depending on the ability level. Dark flames gathered in Su Yuan's throat. The dragon's breath shot out. The dark flames enveloped everything. Some of the angels turned into fallen angels and turned against their companions. Even the light dragons couldn't resist the dragon's breath. The light dragon felt immense pain as the flames burned and corroded their bodies. They screamed in agony as they fell to their deaths. The last thing they saw before they died was the dark demon dragon charging toward the angel army. The creature's dragon's breath was like a reaper's scythe that harvested the souls of the angels. "Everyone, don't panic," shouted the six-winged seraphim. "Hold your position and focus your attacks on the dark demon dragon, n/o/vel/b/n.c//om." The angel army, on the verge of collapse, barely managed to put together a defensive line of force. A volley of light arrows arched toward Su Yuan. The arrows tore through the sky. Such weapons could even destroy a whole territory. Su Yuan turned his head and spat another wave of dark flames toward the falling arrows. The six-winged seraphim looked amused. Really? Is he going to use the dragon's breath to fight against arrows? What a fool. The arrows were forged with a special technique. Dragon's breath would be useless against them. The six-winged seraphim was smug as he looked at the dark demon dragon. His smile froze on his face. When the dragon's breath hit the arrows, they melted. The joy on the seraphim's face turned to fear. What kind of monster is this?" he stammered. He couldn't understand how the arrows had melted. How could an ordinary dragon's breath melt such powerful arrows? The dark demon dragon flapped his wings and crashed into a light dragon. The light dragon fell to its death. It hit the ground with a thud as dust flew everywhere. Su Yuan hadn't suffered even a scratch. The seraphim was terrified. Their defense was useless. "Retreat," said the six-winged seraphim. He was worshipped by numerous people as a beacon of hope, but he no longer dared to fight against such a monster. He turned and fled. Su Yuan was surprised. A six-winged seraphim is capable of just this. 288 No morals. The six-winged seraphim fled from the scene. Others had no intention to keep fighting. The light dragons and the angel army followed suit. The magical siege cannons caught Su Yuan's attention. He flew toward the creature controlling the siege cannons. Everyone fell silent. The dark demon dragon, with dark flames burning on his body, stared at the creature with disdain. The humanoid creature felt a chill run down its spine. Its mind went blank. The other creatures covered their mouths and cowered in fear. They didn't dare make a sound. As Su Yuan swooped down, the creatures felt the terrifying pressure of his aura. They felt terror at his presence. "I remember that dwarves have always remained neutral during any conflict. Weren't your kind in charge of producing weapons for the Furnace City?" The humanoid creature was indeed a dwarf. Su Yuan's words jolted him back to reality. The dwarf raised his head. "Great dark demon dragon, I am Timo, a dwarf alchemist. I greet you most humbly." He leaned down and pressed his forehead against Su Yuan's feet. Su Yuan turned toward the dwarves who were watching him. It didn't matter whether they were with the light types right now or functioned alone. They wouldn't hurt anyone directly. Su Yuan opened the attribute panel of the dwarf alchemist. Timo. Hero unit, neutral. Level, 32, high-level hero. The attributes of alchemy items produced will increase by 30%, and the success rate of developing new alchemy items will increase by 20%. Potential, B class, increases alchemy item production speed by 40%. Abilities. Special Alchemist, increases the success rate of alchemy bombs by 50%. That piqued Su Yuan's curiosity even further. Finally, there was a creature that could be assigned the responsibility of maintaining the cannons and weapons. With attributes like that, it was no wonder the angels wanted them by their side. Su Yuan revealed more of the dwarf's attributes. Underground Alchemy, A grade. Familiar with the attributes of various materials in the underground world, able to develop various alchemy items with magic. Advanced Ammunition Research, B grade. When researching and improving alchemy bombs, the success rate will be increased by 40%. The higher the level of the alchemy bomb, the lower the success rate. Advanced Mechanics, S grade. Has a deep understanding of machinery. Increases the success rate of mechanical puppets by 40%. The higher the level of the mechanical puppet, the lower the success rate. Smart Brain, A grade. Has an extraordinary understanding of alchemy research. When learning alchemy, efficiency will increase by 40%. Hero Talent. When devoting to researching an alchemical item, intelligence will increase by 30%. Race Talent. When creating destructive alchemical items, power increases by 20%. N/O/vel/b/n.c//om. Binding. If the number of acolytes exceeds 10, the research success rate will increase by 10%, and the production speed will also increase by 10%. If the number of acolytes exceeds 20, the success rate will increase by 20%, and the production speed will also increase by 20%. Note, an alchemist among dwarves. Has outstanding research capabilities. Su Yuan was glad to have found this dwarf. His alchemy knowledge was indeed unparalleled. His abilities and attributes were also commendable. He looked at Timo, who was still prostrating on the ground. Get up, said Su Yuan gently. The dwarf cautiously raised his head to look at him. No, your majesty. I prefer to kneel at your feet. Su Yuan's eyebrows twitched. Timo was a coward. It was no wonder he had agreed to join the light types. Timo looked at the dark demon dragon in awe and fear. He didn't say anything further for fear of offending the huge dragon. Timo was terrified. The dragon could devour him whole. The more he thought about it, the more he panicked. He didn't want to die. Timo hadn't even had the time to use the alchemy materials he had bought yesterday. He still needed to collect the money for the wares he had sold last week. He had his whole life ahead of him. How could he die here? Great dragon, please spare me. I will do anything you ask. My lowly existence is not worth your time. Please forgive this mistake of mine. Su Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How had dwarves ever ruled the underground? They were such cowards. However, Su Yuan thought that their cowardice made it possible for them to survive longer. Timo, do you choose death, or will you submit to me? I surrender, shouted Timo. I choose to submit to you, master. I will serve you with the utmost dedication. Su Yuan was at a loss for words. He didn't even know what to say to the trembling dwarf because he had surrendered immediately. Su Yuan had thought that it might have taken some convincing. You're smart for choosing that. Su Yuan glanced at the other dwarves around him. Are all of you his apprentices? Kneel, you ingrates, shouted Timo. Do you all want to die? Show your loyalty to the master. Timo glared at the dwarves. The dwarves cursed Timo inwardly. Bah, coward? Is this the unyielding spirit of the dwarves that he was boasting about before? Inwardly, they cursed at him. Outwardly, they wore an amiable smiles on their faces and knelt in respect. Greetings, master. When Su Yuan saw them, his sense of accomplishment from having scared the seraphim to flee disappeared. Defeating such cowardly creatures wasn't glorious. This was pathetic. Su Yuan sighed. Even the seraphim had fled in terror, so what could he expect from a few dwarves? Pack your valuables. You and your apprentices will live in my territory from now on, said Su Yuan. Timo trembled. Does that mean we will live on the surface and not underground? He seemed to want to say something, but he shut his mouth when he saw the dragon watching him attentively. He nodded. 289 A wild goose chase. Master, please give us 10 minutes. All right. Bring along any treasures that are of a high level. Throw other useless things away. From today, I will make the decisions for you. Su Yuan waved his hand. A staircase appeared which led to the surface of the earth. He ordered the apprentices to go up to the ground. The other apprentices also volunteered to follow. They didn't care about obeying him, but dwarves loved treasures. However, their own treasury had been cleaned out. The nobles of the dwarf clan were furious. The light types had first threatened them and not the dark demon dragon was sucking them dry. The dwarven nobles were dependent on the dwarven army to defend them, but it seemed that that was worthless now. They watched the army leave with treasures to offer to the dark demon dragon. Su Yuan had not intended to scare the dwarf chief just by appearing in front of him. Otherwise, he would have stayed out of the way. He was satisfied with the harvest of today. The dwarves and the treasures they carried exceeded his expectations. The dwarves carried wooden boxes that were sealed shut by iron chains. Su Yuan thought the treasure inside must be very powerful. Su Yuan didn't waste any time. He led the dwarves back to the territory. Alchemist Timo felt very conflicted. He hadn't expected that things would end up like this. Being threatened by the Dem six-winged seraphim had been bad enough. Now, he was being made to leave his home and travel to some unknown place. His heart sank. However, when he looked at the terrifying dragon in front of him, he decided to be grateful that at least he was alive. He still wanted to live. Lord Timo, what is the surface like? Asked one of the apprentices curiously. Is it like the legends say? Is there really food and clean water everywhere? Will we be killed? Asked one particularly terrified apprentice. Lord Timo. Timo ignored them all. How would he know what the surface was like? He had never been to the surface before. He had only heard rumors about it being richer than the underground world. He was nervous, too. Was the surface world really like what the legends described? God of dwarves, I hope you bless me this time, cursed Timo inwardly. Otherwise, I will change my faith and never worship you again. Su Yuan tried to move as slowly as he could so that the dwarves could follow him. However, after getting used to flying at an impossible speed, this was torture for him. His Majesty is back. The entire territory rejoiced. Su Yuan's lips curled into a smile when he heard the residents of the territory cheer for him. The territory had really become his home. Every time he returned to the cheers, it made him feel warm and happy. Yuan was back too. She had headed back after Shi Linglong's situation was sorted. However, she didn't find Su Yuan in the territory. That had worried her. She thought he might have encountered something dangerous. Su Yuan landed slowly in front of the dark castle. The dwarves followed him. They then placed the boxes on the ground. My dear hero, you're back. Yuan looked at the dwarves and the treasures on the ground. Although Yuan emphasized her words, everyone still felt like Su Yuan was the real lord of the territory. His authority was apparent. The master to the residents of the territory was the dark demon dragon and no other. Everyone crowded around him. He was the center of their world. Yuan tried her best not to feel too disappointed. Su Yuan's existence was indeed extraordinary. With dark flames burning around him, he looked indomitable and ferocious. Welcome, Your Majesty. The residents bowed to him respectfully. Their gazes, as they looked up at him, were filled with admiration and reverence. Yuan glanced at the crowd. This seems like a perfect opportunity to give a speech. My people, you will have more glory in the future and hear more trumpets of victory. Our territory will dazzle like the sun. The crowd cheered. Yuan didn't say anything. He turned to the dwarves and instructed them to take the wooden boxes into the dark castle. Yuan smiled in satisfaction at the boxes. They did look valuable. She had never expected Yuan to bring along so many rewards. Your Majesty, did you find the underground world, n/o/vel/b/in.c//om? A voice asked behind Yuan. It was Scarlin. Yuan smiled and nodded. He then told the crowd about his recent journey. Scarlin didn't seem to react. However, Yuan was frightened. A seraphim. Fortunately, Yuan had been there to discourage the angel's attack. Otherwise, Shi Linglong's territory core would have been destroyed. Only now she understood why Yuan hadn't arrived to help them. He had been facing another danger. Yuan was at a loss for words. The resentment she had felt for Yuan's absence in helping her disappeared completely. She was grateful that Yuan had dealt with the angels. She didn't know that Yuan hadn't had much difficulty in chasing them away as she had. Yuan's fight had been far easier when compared to Yuan's. The enemy had fled the moment they saw him. Yuan gestured to Timo to approach him. 290 Yuan and Yuan's harvest. This dwarf with a disabled arm is an extraordinary alchemist, said Yuan. He has great knowledge of alchemy and can build siege weapons. His name is Timo. He and his apprentices will be living with us from now on. Make arrangements for them. Yuan nodded. While you were gone, I tried to reach out to Dark Region City. In the future, we can hope to establish a long-term trade relationship with them. Also, the matter with the food workshop and winery must be resolved soon. I need qualified heroes to run those two places. Perhaps we can start now. Yuan gestured for some residents to show the dwarves around the territory and assign them residences. When she saw the 30 wooden boxes neatly arranged nearby, her lips curled up into a satisfied smile. Yuan, what is inside those? She asked. Yuan used his magic to untie the chains around the boxes. The lid of the boxes opened. Yuan watched carefully. n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. There were ores inside some of the wooden boxes. The ores glowed faintly. Other boxes held some mysterious thing that looked like mud. It was black and smelled awful. The faintly glowing ores were mithril ores. Even Yuan was surprised at this. He couldn't believe there were so many mithril ores in that small dwarven underground city. Although the quality of these ores was a few grades lower than the ones traded with Dark Region City, this was still a bountiful harvest. 3 boxes contained mithril ores. Each had around 1,000 units of ores, totaling up to 3,000 units. No matter how many impurities there were in the ores, the mithril content would still be more than 50 units obtained from the Dark Region City. Moreover, they had received this for free. What's in the rest of the boxes? Asked Yuan. Alchemy gunpowder, said Yuan. An ingredient used to make alchemy bombs. The alchemy gunpowder was a top-grade gunpowder developed by Timo. It contained magic that was channeled to be used as explosives. The alchemy bombs were used in the magical cannons he had seen the dwarves use. It was an extremely powerful weapon. 27 boxes of alchemy gunpowder now belonged to them? There might be around 30,000 units of gunpowder in there? Yuan asked Timo about it. The dwarf told him that 30,000 units of alchemy gunpowder could produce 3,000 alchemy bombs. He emphasized that he could produce 10 and thousands of alchemy bombs if he used the gunpowder sparingly. In addition to these, there were also 20,000 units of rare resources Yuan had obtained from the Dwarven City. Each of the 4 rare resources contained powerful magic and was suitable for various purposes. They could be used to develop weapons or sold for treasures. Yuan thought that the gains far exceeded his expectations. He now had rare resources, mithril ores, alchemy gunpowder, and the knowledgeable Timo. Store the gunpowder in the warehouse, instructed Yuan to one of the troops. If anyone needs to use it, they will have to come to me for approval. Yes, my lord. Yuan began telling Yuan about her encounter with the light types and other lords. They talked about their adventures. The succubus, Eliza, talked to Timo excitedly. She realized that they were the new troops. When the residents passed by, they bowed to her respectfully. Lady Eliza. Eliza acknowledged them. Where are you going? The Lord has summoned us. All right. Go ahead. Eliza looked thoughtfully at the backs of the 5 people as they left. Resources were limited and could not be shared among everyone. So, Yuan and Yuan selected some heroes with talent and helped them nurture their skills further. Each troop type had a unique trait that was suitable for one type of job. Yuan and Yuan examined them carefully through their attribute panels. The natives of the Overlord Plane were especially confusing. They weren't heroes, so their attributes differed in some respects. 2 residents who were steady and hardworking were suitable to work in the food workshops and the winery. So, Yuan and Yuan assigned them jobs to work in those places. The other 3 were more suitable for research according to their attributes, so Yuan noted their names down and told them that they might be summoned in the future for suitable jobs. The 2 young men who were chosen to work at the winery looked flustered. They looked at Yuan and Yuan in awe. They felt blessed. The food workshop and the winery would be at the forefront when they opened trade relationships with neighboring cities. The jobs they were assigned were very important. They were grateful for the opportunity given to them. They thanked Suan and Su Yuan profusely. The fact that you were chosen means that you have talent. Your future is bright, said Su Yuan. As long as you are ready to shoulder the responsibilities diligently, I will grant you unprecedented power. Are you willing to take responsibility for the food workshop and winery to create more value for the territory? The two of them looked at Su Yuan. Pride and passion flared in their hearts. We swear to it, Your Majesty, they said. I hope you won't let me down. Under Su Yuan's aura, their bodies surged with power. After about 10 minutes, when the power subsided, Suan opened their attribute panels. Harlan, upgraded to a hero unit. Level, 14. Potential, B class. Profession, brewer, intermediate, plus 20 winemaking success rate. Muba, upgraded to a hero unit. Level, 13. Potential, B class. Profession, chef, intermediate, deliciousness of food increased by 20%. Their bloodline that Su Yuan awakened, and their skills were decent. Overall, they had passed. You now possess the power of heroes. Your future is indeed bright. I hope that you can create more value for the territory in the future with your skill and talent, said Su Yuan in encouragement. I hope you make the residents proud of you. 291 Qingyu Pavilion Chamber of Commerce. The two of them were assigned the responsibility of developing and maintaining the food workshop and winery. n/o/vel/b/c/om. If they needed any materials, they could directly contact Suan. They were urged to develop delicacies and fine wine as soon as possible. The two young men looked at Suan and Su Yuan. They were moved to tears. They wouldn't hesitate to even die for their lord and their hero. They had given them everything. We won't let you down, they both said with conviction and bowed. Su Yuan nodded. He encouraged them for a while longer and then let them leave. Suan was astonished. She had to admit that Su Yuan was very convincing. She wasn't at his level yet in terms of persuading people in that manner. As soon as they left the room, they saw Eliza hovering near the door. The two young men bowed to her when they saw her and went their way. Eliza was surprised. As she watched the receding backs of the two people walking away, she noticed that something had changed. These natives had become heroes. How could a person become a hero in just a few minutes? Eliza, being a hero herself, knew the hardship that came with her race. Heroes had to train from a very young age. They had to go through deadly situations to prove themselves as heroes. She was in disbelief. Not only had those two become heroes in such a short time, but their bloodline and level were also strong. Eliza turned back to look at the room from where they had appeared. She thought that the recent developments in the territory had been very efficient and immediate. She felt admiration toward the dark demon dragon. He was indeed powerful and mysterious. Eliza accompanied the one in charge of the Chamber of Commerce into the dark castle. A female night elf was moving the wooden boxes to the warehouse. Eliza saw the gunpowder and the ores that glowed faintly. This kind of growth was simply unheard of. If this went on, their territory would be formidable. The one in charge of the Chamber of Commerce also believed this to be true. He composed himself, entered the room, and bowed to Su Yuan and Suan. Lord Suan, I didn't expect the troops to be so smart. Congratulations on your harvest this time. Suan smiled and exchanged polite greetings. She then turned to Eliza. Eliza, does the Chamber of Commerce sell some high-quality wine recipes? Su Yuan had no interest in price negotiations, so he left it to Suan. Fine wine has always remained rare and pricey, said Eliza. No one seems to have a decent recipe for winemaking. Those who do charge exorbitant prices, the ones found in the market right now are of inferior quality. Suan's wish of buying a nice wine recipe disappeared. She was never going to find a decent recipe at a reasonable price. She had looked for a recipe in the market. However, the ones she found were bad ones that weren't really suitable for trade. There were only dark plants in her territory. Suan didn't know how she could use them for wine yet. Her territory was too dark and bar to grow any kind of decent crops. Therefore, production value was sorely limited. That's why Suan was so keen on summoning more heroes, especially for research and development. Only with traits like that could she hope to develop areas of her territory. Eliza looked at Suan. She hesitated as Suan was deep in thought. My lord, I saw two residents who converted to heroes. Yes. I obtained a magic item in the mythical ruins that make it possible. Suan was wary of Eliza. It can turn an ordinary creature into a B-class hero. I can only use it one more time. Eliza was both regretful and envious of Suan. If there was such an item, then it must be something of very high value. My lord, thank you for developing the territory so efficiently, said Eliza. I will return tomorrow morning. The guild leader is still waiting for me to take the 100 night flower honey to him. Eliza was assigned to manage the trade responsibilities of the territory. She was a succubus and displayed very efficient negotiation techniques. The 100 night flower honey and dragon drool grass were the rarest and greatest treasures of Suan's territory. Suan wanted to trade them in exchange for money and resources so that she could upgrade her territory as soon as possible. I will be leaving for the Qingyu Chamber of Commerce soon, said Suan. How should I contact you once I reach there? Here, said Eliza as she handed her a wooden tablet. You can use this to contact me. I will be able to listen to you no matter where you are. Suan nodded and placed the wooden tablet away in space. When you go to a large city, it's best to not take the dark demon dragon with you, said Eliza tentatively. Why not? Suan was puzzled. The dark demon dragon is a creature of legends who is associated with death. He is believed to have caused a disaster in the War of the Gods. When Su Yuan heard that, he raised his head and looked at Eliza. His face looked strange. If anyone dared attack him, he could destroy them. Su Yuan was interested in the information. Even the seraphim had fled from him. He was still curious why that had happened. Eliza looked like she had something more to say. What is it? Asked Suwan. Can I please have a few boxes of alchemy gunpowder? Asked Eliza cautiously. Suwan laughed. Of course. She let Eliza have 2 boxes of the stuff. Only when the meeting was adjourned, and they had left, did Suwan let herself relax. She hadn't realized that she was still tightly strung from the recent incident in Shi Linglong's territory. She suddenly felt exhausted. She called for the maids and instructed them to prepare a lavish lunch. After that, she returned to her room with Su Yuan, hugged him, and lay down on her bed. She fell asleep. When she opened her eyes, it was already dark. She didn't know how long she had slept. She couldn't get rid of the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. 292 Special Rule. There was not much to do in the territory. The 4 lords remained alert and tried to attend to every loophole in their defenses. For now, everything was all right. However, Suwan was in a dilemma. Other lords lamented about not having resources to summon more troops and heroes. Instead, Suwan worried about having too many. There were more than enough troops in Suwan's territory, and they all consumed resources. Each recruitment cost her tens and thousands of resources. That was not a small amount. Her profits were decreasing. She had to pay a 30% handling fee when trading in any market. This made a dent in her income. She wasn't even rich, to begin with. We are almost done, said Su Yuan. Let's hold on a little longer so that we can level up. Having seen the Seraphim and the Angel Army, Su Yuan was worried that Suwan still wasn't strong enough to face them. The 6-winged Seraphim had fled with his army when he saw Su Yuan. However, if it was Suwan at that time, the Seraphim would have had no trouble dealing with her. Suwan muttered in agreement. She led a few of her troops and went to kill monsters and farm for resources. Su Yuan didn't accompany her. Suwan studying the map to discover new areas gave him painfully low experience points that he felt it wasn't worth it. It would be better to sleep and gain experience points instead. He was frustrated that he couldn't move beyond level 70 until the territory core was upgraded. The time passed quickly. They could finally fulfill one of the requirements for territory upgrade. Territory core upgrade requirements. Land area, 10 square kilometers, not yet achieved. Total amount of resources, 2,000 tons, not yet achieved. Possesses 20 buildings, not yet achieved. The population has to reach 20,000, achieved. The population had increased greatly. It had finally reached 20,000. In terms of territory security, Suwan had worked hard to clear the surrounding area. There were only a few wild animals around. Everyone knew about Suwan and her territory. No one wanted to mess with her. The lords residing near her territory had applied for relocation. They wanted to get as far away from Suwan as possible. They felt that their territory core would be destroyed if they got in the way of Suwan's territorial expansion. The Night Elves and Night Devil Bees had expanded their patrol range to about 30 kilometers. They didn't find any formidable enemies within that range. The Night Elves were good at hiding. The Night Devil Bees could launch poisonous attacks from the air. The security and defense of the territory were strong for now. There wouldn't be any problems when expanding the territory unless the light types deliberately caused trouble. When Suwan, Shi Linglong, Zhao Qingrong, and Lin Yao all expanded their territory toward each other, they would then think of moving outward. The underground area was also unstable. Many creatures hid below and tried to attack them. However, if they could prevent the attacks from reaching the surface, all would be well. This is the map we obtained from the enemy last time. There might be many treasures hidden in this area. Suwan had gotten the map from one unlucky lord, who had dropped it while fleeing. She looked in the direction where they were supposed to go. She had brought along the 9-headed Hydra, the red-eyed black demon, the 3rd elven prince, and Eliza. The Night Devil Bees had also followed her. Su Yuan wasn't interested in exploring the area, so he stayed behind in the territory. He didn't want to move from where he slept, no matter how much Suwan acted coquettishly in front of him. Suwan had let him be when he didn't budge. If there was a danger, they could rush back to him for help. After all, Suwan looked at the map in her hands and at the place where the treasure was supposed to be. Her eyes lit up. She took her demonic dragon form and flew ahead. The Night Devil Bees followed. They were in charge of her safety. Suwan had a headache. She wanted to take Su Yuan to the underground area and rob resources. However, Su Yuan had flatly refused. They didn't have enough resources to do all the things they wanted to do to improve the territory. Nov. L. B /JNN. Suwan had put that aside for now and opted to go on a treasure hunt. If they found treasures to make them stronger, they could always go back to explore the mythical ruin and earn more resources. After 2 hours of flying, she gestured to her troops to stop. Suwan confirmed the spot on the map with something in the distance. "We're here," she said. A few meters away, a colorful wave descended from the sky. It was like a force field around something special. They got nearer to look at it more carefully. Inside the force field, they saw water suspended in the air. It was as though the water flowed down without being affected by gravity. The floating lake had a split in the middle, but the water didn't spill out. Instead, they remained in their fixed path. It looked magical. A system notification sounded in her mind. This is the place where laws don't apply. During the battle between the gods, such places were split away and preserved to keep order in the world. This shattered land holds mysterious life forms. It might also hold unique treasures or artifacts. Explore with caution. This place was a remnant of the war between the gods. Yuan raised her head to look at the flowing water. She was excited. She led her troops forward. The closer she got to the lake, the more amazed she was. How was it that the lake just floated in the air? What kind of power would it take to create something like that? Yuan wondered if only creatures like Yuan or the fire elemental lord had that kind of power. Unfortunately, she needed Yuan, or she had to level up massively to explore the place. Level of threat, medium. Special rule, unable to use spatial magic. The rule made Yuan stop and reflect. She looked up at the lake floating above the ground. If it crashed down, even a giant wouldn't be able to withstand the impact. 293 I still have Yuan with me. The discovery made Yuan's heart race. When any area had strange rules attached to them, it usually meant there was a precious treasure inside. Perhaps there really was a divine artifact up there. Yuan turned and looked at her troops. The night flaming archers and the rotten cavalry set up a defense line. Yuan still wished Yuan was here. The area was of a medium level of threat, after all. Scarlin, please take the troops back to the territory with you. Bring along troops that are of very high level. Also, ask Yuan to help with this. She needed Yuan here just in case. She and the troops would level up by defeating whatever they faced. However, it was always helpful to have Yuan around. She knew Yuan would not participate in a fight unless the enemy was as strong as the angels or at the level of a god. If she had known about this place earlier, she would have done more to persuade him to come along. Scarlin left to fulfill the order. He traveled at full speed. It only took 2 hours to reach the territory. Scarlin relayed everything to Yuan. Yuan opened his eyes drowsily. He was curious about the strange floating lake. He took the little butterfly and the flower fairy with him and headed to where Yuan was. Scarlin gathered the strongest troops. The Hydra stayed back to guard the territory. As for Yuan, he flew at full speed to where Yuan was. No one dared to ride on his back. Only Yuan was allowed to do that. Scarlin had to go back and forth multiple times to transport the troops. Yuan sighed in disappointment. Her territory still lacked a convenient form of transportation. She comforted herself in the knowledge that the sandworms were going to hatch soon. When the time came, she would design a special carriage for the sandworms that could be used as a means of easy transportation. Yuan, will this place affect you in any way? Asked Yuan. He was her escape route. If the place affected him in any way, they would be doomed. They wouldn't be able to revive the dead soldiers. Yuan wondered how the owner of the map was feeling right now. The Lord must be probably crying. They must have postponed exploring the area because of a lack of strength or power, only to have the map stolen by Yuan. It doesn't affect me at all. If a powerful enemy appears, I can still use the Dark Dual Domain, said Yuan. Dark Dual Domain, drag the enemy into the dual domain and engage in a fair one-on-one duel. There is no interference from the outside world during this period. The winner will devour the soul of the loser and absorb the power n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. Eliza, lead the 5 troops and scout ahead. If you encounter any danger, retreat immediately. Don't fight them on your own, said Yuan. Eliza obeyed the Lord's orders. She led the troops forward. Yuan looked at the map again. When they entered the force field, the map changed. It showed an area that wasn't there before. Yuan let the map guide her and the troops. It's like an automatic navigation system. At the same time, she sent the night devil bees forward to clear out any danger. The place was mysterious, and it was getting even stranger by the second. Yuan raised her head to look at the broken lake floating above. A few fish were swimming in the lake. It felt too surreal to look at. Inside the force field, everything was affected, even their vision. The rocks and plants seemed very out of place. However, they still had Yuan with them, so there was nothing to worry about. To be safe, Yuan ordered the troops to advance slowly and sent the night devil bees forward to examine every corner and crevice of the place. However, there were no hidden enemies. She couldn't even hear or feel the wind in this region. The surrounding was so quiet that the footsteps of the troops and the sound of their breathing felt too loud. Time passed. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Even when Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon, she couldn't figure out how big or small this place was. Nothing had changed. It was strangely quiet. Yuan felt uneasy. She asked Yuan if she could ride on his back to see the place further. She looked down at the map in her hands. It glowed faintly. It was as though the map was guiding them closer to something. They were almost there. Yuan was on high alert. Everyone, be on your guard. We are almost there. The troops straightened their backs and proceeded with caution. The night devil bees continued to scout the surroundings for any threat. They needed to be vigilant around such a place. A few minutes later, Eliza sent a message through the magical shared communication. She had found a strange area. The map seemed to get brighter as they moved to the area that Eliza had spoken of. Yuan calmed herself when she finally reached the place. She led the troops there and carefully examined the place. What appeared in front of her was extraordinary. A few steps away, the shattered lake disappeared without a trace. A huge river replaced it and stretched across the sky. It felt as though they were in the depths of a sea. The river floated in the sky. Below the floating river, a translucent shield surrounded the lake, making a dome shape around it. A huge area was isolated in the middle. It was untouched by the water. The river crashed on the dome and flowed in an arch. It was breathtaking to look at. However, at the bottom of the river, there were corpses. Even the corpses were strange. They looked like two-headed ogres. Judging from what they saw, a battle must have taken place a long time ago in that place. Curiously, the corpses hadn't rotted yet. They looked well preserved. Even Su Yuan was quiet. His gaze focused on the corpses. 12 blue crystals were floating in the isolated space. They were as big as a shield. They slowly rotated in a clockwise direction and remained suspended. Through the gaps, they could barely see a hollow ball in the middle. It was the size of a human head and engraved with mysterious runes. The hollow crystal ball radiated with power. 294 the merman. The energy fluctuated, and the power surged even more. The mysterious hollow core surprised everyone. If the power within was given free rein to erupt, it could wipe out all life forms within a kilometer. The energy and the power that the hollow core contained was more potent than what they had encountered at the magic tower in the mythical ruin. Yuan looked closely at the crystal. She noticed that there were hundreds of thumb-sized crystals floating outside the perimeter of the huge 12 crystals. They were spatial pearls. These probably belonged to the two-headed ogres. Yuan took a deep breath to restrain her excitement at the discovery. She turned and looked around the isolated space. There was no other sign of life. Everything was terrifyingly quiet. "My lord, your majesty, we didn't find any enemies around," reported Eliza. Yuan nodded. Her gaze was fixed on the hollow core. "No enemies. Is it really this easy to obtain that treasure?" Yuan wasn't a fool. She knew that such a treasure wouldn't be left undefended. "Troops, prepare for battle," she shouted. The troops obeyed and got into position. Yuan used the magic crystal and floated into the air. She slowly approached the hollow core. When she was about 10 meters below, the lake stirred. The still water surface was disturbed. It was as though a swarm of locusts had attacked the surface. Yuan raised her head to see countless mermen appearing out of the lake. They were half human and half fish. They held bows and tridents in their hands. The mermen were not as appealing as the mermaids described in legends. They had ferocious faces that could frighten anyone who looked upon them. They looked angry and vicious. A few moments later, a 5-meter-tall creature with a crown on its head appeared out of the lake. The other mermen shifted to make space. It was evident that the one who had just appeared was the leader. As the merman with the crown glanced down at the figure approaching the lake, his face turned red with rage. "Lowly ogres, luring in more prey," he said. "I will hang you in the water and let the piranhas suck your bones clean." The leader spoke in an ancient Murloc language. Su Yuan could understand the language. So, the map Yuan obtained was just bait. From what the merman leader said, the two-headed ogres had fallen prey because of that very bait and ended up here. The dark demon dragon was actually lured here as prey to these creatures? Su Yuan couldn't believe anyone would have wanted to ambush him in this manner. He used the true eye of the demon dragon. Desert Fishman. Level, 59. Rare, A-class. Desert Fishman Lord, Hero Unit. Level, 52. Potential, S-class. Yuan also saw the attribute panel. She felt a bit better. The danger was only of the S level. She wondered how a Desert Fisherman Lord of level 52 had managed to defeat the two-headed ogres of level 54. Nov, L, B / JNN. The Desert Fisherman Lord roared. He waved at his troops to move forward. "Kill them," he said in ancient Murloc. In an instant, a small merman holding a bow and arrow appeared in the water with an evil smile. The bowstring in his hand was pulled to the extreme. He let the arrow loose. The arrow streaked through the water and glowed faintly. Thousands of arrows shot out from the lake above their heads. The translucent shield did nothing to block the arrows raining down. The troops were within the enemy's attack range. At the front were the battle-axe warriors and giant lizards. They couldn't dodge in time. The volley of arrows hit them. The remaining battle-axe warriors formed the porcupine formation with their shields. If it wasn't for Su Yuan, both troops would have been wiped out. "Prepare to fire." The blazing night elf archers pulled their bowstrings taut with flaming arrows notched and ready to fire. Now, the arrows shot out at an impossible speed. Rapid shooting, 30 arrows fired in a row. Cooldown time, 5 minutes. There were around 150 archers. The arrows pierced through the river in the sky. The impact could be decreased because of the water. However, the flaming arrows weren't ordinary arrows. They were imbued with magic. The arrows disrupted the merman's formation. Blood spilled like red ink in clear blue water. When the Desert Fisherman Lord saw this, his anger flared. There was bloodlust in his eyes. "I want them dead," he roared. The mermen gathered again and stared down at the troops in rage. They prepared to fire their arrows once again. Although Yuan tried to come up with another possible way of participating in the fight, she couldn't. It was clear that only the blazing night elf archers could attack because of the massive distance. The rotten cavalry could not even touch the enemy. They couldn't fly up and attack, after all. "Su Yuan, do something," said Yuan. She really couldn't think of a solution. Su Yuan didn't refuse to help her this time. He flew up toward the lake. A pitch-black light gathered in his throat as he spewed out dark flames. Dragon's breath? The water in the lake vaporized. However, in the next moment, the water was magically replenished. Although the dragon's breath was potent and hot enough, it didn't work against the magical lake. Within the barrier, the Merman had the absolute advantage. Su Yuan didn't want to help out too much. Yuan and the troops still needed to level up, after all. This could be their opportunity to train more. Arrows whistled through the air. 295, the lake in the sky. Su Yuan was indifferent. He cast a black shield like a dome above Yuan's head. The sharp arrows couldn't pierce through the shield. It was clear that only the blazing night elf archers were of use in this fight. Others couldn't fight at all. Yuan turned to the hollow core, which was protected by the 12 huge blue crystals. Su Yuan's shield withstood all attacks and kept her safe, allowing her to approach the hollow core. The Mermen were terrified. They shot arrow after arrow to stop her, but the shield repelled them all. No matter how sharp the arrows were, they couldn't pierce through the shield of dark energy. When the shield almost broke, Su Yuan condensed more energy to add to it. It held fast. Thankfully, Su Yuan is strong. Yuan was very grateful for his help. As she moved close to the 12 huge crystals, she felt the overwhelming force of the power of the hollow core. It felt like standing at the mouth of a volcano that was about to erupt. The closer she got, the more excited she became. She wanted to grab the hollow core as soon as possible. When she finally reached the crystal, something shocking happened. The crystal began to glow. The 12 crystals were enveloped by the dark light and melted like ice. The magical liquid then flowed and merged into the crystal of gloom. Yuan sensed the power in the liquid. Part of it was absorbed by the magic crystal she held, and the rest was seeping into the hollow core. Yuan didn't know the value of such a treasure because she couldn't see its attributes. She was a little confused. However, from the way it absorbed the magical liquid, the hollow core must be something divine. The desert fisherman lord was shocked. How was this possible? The hollow core was left behind by a god at the time of the ancient battle. Even a demigod couldn't touch it. However, a human had done something to it. He was gripped by fear. He pointed at Yuan. Kill her. The Merman charged to attack. Arrows rained down from the sky. Su Yuan looked almost bored. Hiding in the floating lake gave the Merman protection. However, this very place was also their weakness. The Merman depended on their arrows. However, the tables had turned. The human and the dragon were unaffected by their arrows. The desert fisherman lord lifted the conch shell that was tied to his waist. A deep sound reverberated in the air as he blew on it. A moment later, the Merman retreated with fear in their eyes. A huge shadow covered the sky. Yuan raised her head to see a pair of cold eyes, devoid of any emotions, stare down at her. Every cell in her body warned her of danger. She took a deep breath to calm herself. The thing that appeared in front of her was a huge centaur with 2 curved horns. It was a female centaur holding a great axe. She wore simple leather armor. Her eyes were cold, without a sign of life in them. Yuan felt uneasy. How are the Mermen related to a centaur? When she thought about it, everything was strange here. A lake shouldn't be able to float in the air, to begin with. So, the relationship between Mermen and centaurs was the last thing on her mind. The giant centaur waved her great axe. The axe blade pierced through the shield easily. 4 iron hooves landed on the ground before Yuan. Yuan froze where she stood. The centaur was even bigger when up close. She was almost 10 meters tall. The great axe was huge. If it swung freely, it could take down everything in sight. The 2 curved horns on the centaur's head glowed faintly. The centaur looked beautiful, but her lifeless eyes and emotionless expression sent a chill down their backs. Yuan finally understood how the desert fisherman lord and his underlings had won against the 2-headed ogres. Yuan used the true eye of the demon dragon to open the centaur's attribute panel. Ancient Guardian. Boss Unit. Level, 65. Potential, SS Class. Note, Guardian of the Land of Broken Laws. Due to the passage of time, her power has degraded from a demigod level to level 65. Yuan took a deep breath. She was unable to calm her racing heart. The Guardian once was a demigod. Even if the centaur's level had decreased with time, she was still a boss type. N/O/vel/B/in.C//OM. The desert fisherman lord looked at the crystal ball that was still devouring the magical liquid from the 12 crystals. He was enraged. Those were left behind by the gods? This is sacrilege. Stop it. Kneel in penance and beg for forgiveness, and I might let you live. Yuan didn't even look at him. Her gaze was focused on the centaur. She had a dark demon dragon beside her. What was a mere demigod when compared to him? She had full faith in Su Yuan. He could even fight a god, let alone a demigod. The desert fisherman lord was enraged at being ignored. Kill them. The centaur stared at Su Yuan and Yuan and charged. 296 The demigod. The huge hooves hitting the ground as the centaur charged made a dull thud. Yuan thought that Su Yuan wouldn't help her in the future if she asked him to fight right now. She needed to at least try first before seeking his help. Yuan summoned the heavy blade warriors. She ordered them to attack the centaur. The desert fisherman lord looked shocked. How could a human have such powerful mechanical puppets? Yuan, who was controlling the heavy blade warriors with her will, felt immense pressure. Her face turned solemn. She knew how terrifyingly strong the centaur was. The soulless centaur stomped on the ground and attacked fiercely. Su Yuan watched the show from midair. Since Yuan wanted to prove herself, he was happy to let her try. If she was in any danger, he would step in. The earth shook. The great axe whizzed through the air. Its alarming force could even split mountains. The heavy blade warriors extended their blades and met the attack head-on. The sound of metal clanging rang through the air. Sparks flew from the impact. The heavy blade warrior's feet sank into the ground. The centaur possessed unimaginable strength. The fight reached a peak. The direct combat between the two forces was an intense blur. Yuan felt the pressure of the fight as she willed the heavy blade warrior to block and parry. The heavy blade warriors fought fiercely with the centaur. No one interfered in the fight from both sides. The shockwave of the battle was great enough to injure them if they got close. The desert fisherman lord got angrier as he watched the fight. D************. Humans. The melted crystals were still flowing rapidly into the crystal ball. He could feel the world around him getting unstable by the second. If the magic was consumed, it might destroy the whole world of the merman. The desert fisherman lord couldn't let that happen. Merman, attack, he shouted. No matter the cost, we must stop that damned human. The merman archers made way for the melee fighters. The burly mermen with tridents in their hands jumped down to join the fight. The lake was so high that jumping down would be suicidal. However, the mermen still went ahead without hesitation. Yuan sort of had an idea about the mermen and their madness now. The crystal ball she held seemed to be transforming as it devoured the magical liquid. She could feel the power changing within it. If she gave it more time till it devoured all 12 crystals, then she could get a lot of benefits out of it. Even if the heavens should intervene, she would make sure the flow wasn't interrupted. Moreover, with Yuan around, nothing could go wrong. The mermen jumped down from the sky with their tridents at the ready. The mermen tried to attack Yuan to break the crystal ball. However, they couldn't move. They couldn't descend to the ground. The special power of the place prevented that from happening. Numerous mermen gathered in one area and charged. The remaining heavy blade warriors formed a defensive line with the blazing night elf archers and the rotten cavalry at the rear. The mermen suffered heavy losses. They became easier targets as they floated in the air. The battle was intense. Both sides were unwilling to give in. Yuan was also at a stalemate. The centaur fought fiercely and didn't reveal her abilities yet. She only used brute force. Yuan felt a drain in her energy while controlling the heavy blade warriors. The centaur, in contrast, seemed light of foot and didn't even break a sweat. The centaur's great axe occasionally slashed at the nearby rocks and shattered them to pieces. Two mermen were close to the rock and the impact killed them. Yuan took advantage of the opening and approached the centaur from the side with a knife. She then flung the knife, which slashed at the centaur's back. However, even as the knife hit and lodged into the skin, there was no blood. In a span of few breaths, the knife fell free, and the wound healed by itself. N/O/vel/B/C/in.C//OM. Yuan's face darkened. The centaur healed fast, so any damage they could inflict on her had no bearing. It didn't even slow the centaur down. For some reason, the centaur seemed soulless. She couldn't even use her abilities. However, the centaur had some power that nobody could fathom. It was far beyond anyone's imagination and locked deep within. As the battle raged on, the aura of the crystal soared. A dim light enveloped the remaining crystals. They were being devoured rapidly. Smash that ball and stop them, shouted the desert fisherman lord. He could feel the lake becoming unstable. The fear in his heart grew. The merman launched a frenzied attack. The defense line was on the verge of collapse. Yuan spat out a potent dragon's breath. The mermen who were still jumping down from the sky bore the brunt of the flames. 297 The collapse. The dead mermen suddenly exploded and harmed their own companions. The red-eyed black dragon, the white dragon saint, Eliza, and Scarlin attacked at the same time. Although the desert fishermen were ferocious, Yuan's troops were able to launch a counterattack. Someone blew into a horn and a dull sound rang out from the water. Yuan suddenly discovered that the centaur's power was surging. Blue runes appeared on her body. The great axe in her hands glowed faintly blue. It was as though the sharpness of the axe could cut through space. The pressure was immense. Yuan, help me. Yuan's aura radiated further. The centaur slowed down. Yuan took advantage of this and pressed forward as she controlled the heavy blade warrior and made it swing its blade. The centaur raised her great axe to block the attack. Yuan didn't back down. Yuan's aura suppressed the centaur's power and restricted her movement. The battle between the two sides raged on. Even if the mermen had the home ground advantage, they were losing. The desert fisherman lord saw more and more crystals melting before his eyes. He couldn't sit still and do nothing. A dark blue magic staff appeared in his hand. He jumped down from the lake and landed on the ground. Hundreds of fist-sized holes appeared in the translucent shield, and the lake water flowed down. When the lake water fell, they turned into sharp icicles in midair and descended on the troops at great speed. The troops who were hit by these icicles were severely injured. The mermen took this opportunity to charge forward. Their defensive line was weak. Yuan activated the blessing of the demonic dragons and applied it to the troops. An afterimage flashed past, and a merman felt a sharp pain in his neck. Eliza had transformed into the night succubus queen. She held a sword in her hands and flitted through the crowd as she slashed and hacked. Even the strongest shield couldn't withstand her attack. When the desert fisherman lord saw Eliza, he smiled. The lake water suddenly fell in a deluge and enveloped him. Numerous icicles broke apart and shot forward like knives. The water turned into an ice cuff around the ankles of Eliza's feet. However, before anyone could even react, the cuffs broke apart. A shadow flitted past. The night succubus queen moved at an impossible speed and rushed toward the icicles. Her sword waved in the air. In the blink of an eye, the icicles were cut through. The mermen were terrified. They didn't even get the time to dodge. Eliza rushed at them in a blur. A cold light flashed and tried to break through the water shield. Eliza wanted to break through the shield, but the sword in her hand felt heavier. It was as though she was trying to cut through mercury. The potency of her attacks decreased. She was unable to break through. She charged at the mermen who were nearby. She gave up on the desert fisherman lord for now. The other mermen were just feeling relieved when their companions dropped dead. The desert fisherman lord continued to use his power to condense more icicles and throw them at Eliza. N/O/vel/B/C/in.C//OM. However, the night succubus queen's power was beyond anything he had seen before. No matter the kind of attacks he launched at her, she always had a way to block and parry. He watched helplessly as she slaughtered dozens of mermen. Their corpses piled up like a small hill. The corpse in front of the water shield exploded as though they were filled with gunpowder. The terrifying shockwave caused the shield to break. The desert fisherman saw the night succubus queen before him. He was shocked. With a wave of his hand, he made the water curtain rise around his body again. However, before he could make the water rise high enough, he felt a sharp pain. His head flew free of his body. Eliza appeared behind him. The night succubus queen didn't hesitate. She flitted around and killed the surrounding mermen. However, the desert fisherman lord did something that shocked everyone. The headless body stood up and lunged for its head. The headless body fumbled for its head, found it, and rose back up to the lake in the sky. Eliza was too stunned to follow. How is he alive? After returning to the lake, the headless body placed the head back in its place. Energy surged around the neck and the desert fisherman lord was healed. Kill them, he shouted. The mermen had been standing around in a daze. After the order was issued, they roared and charged. The centaur was still engaged in a fight with the heavy blade warrior, but the powerful aura greatly restricted her movement. She could neither fight properly nor escape. The remaining mermen didn't dare to leave the lake. Although the mermen fighting on the ground were fierce, they couldn't break through the enemy's defense line. The crystal ball continued devouring the endless magic liquid from the melted crystals. Suwon's eyes lit up. She wanted to upgrade the crystal. It was a huge surprise for her that the crystal was capable of so much. After devouring all the liquid, the crystal ball glowed with a dazzling light. The hollow core disappeared from its perch and appeared on Suwon's hand. Suwon sensed a familiar aura. Just then, cracks appeared on the ground like spider webs. The lake in the sky began to shake. The water in the lake surged violently. The place was about to collapse. The desert fisherman lord screamed in terror. The mermen were petrified. They felt the horror of the inevitable disaster. It felt as though the Grim Reaper was on their heads, ready to reap out their souls. The lake crashed to the ground. The earth shook because of the impact. The incident seemed to have triggered a flood. Water surged out with force. A huge wave crashed and swept along rocks and gravel with it. The water enveloped everyone. The mermen were caught in the momentum. Suwon continued to will the heavy blade warrior to fight against the centaur. The runes on the centaur's body glowed dazzlingly. Suddenly, the lake shattered with great force. The sound was loud and terrifying. Yuan flew towards Suwon. The 100-meter-tall wave crashed down and swept everything away. Suwon was surprised. She had never seen something like this before. 298 The female centaur. If it hadn't been for Yuan's help, Suwon would have failed utterly. It looks like you are still not strong enough, said Yuan. He wasn't satisfied with her strength. You need to work harder. You can't even deal with a creature of this level. Nov, L, B //JNN. Suwon nodded and turned her attention to the two items in her hands. The crystal ball was glowing faintly with power. The hollow core was the most striking. It was an object left behind by the gods. She wondered what it exactly was. Just as she was about to check its attributes, she heard a splash. She looked in the direction where the sound came from. 200 meters below, a figure was splashing in the water. They could sink at any moment. Her eyes widened when she realized who it was. It was the centaur. She looked carefully to confirm that her guess was correct. The centaur didn't look so terrifying now. She was frail, and trying to stay afloat. Even the centaur's body had shrunk. She was only a little bit taller than an average human now. She wasn't a giant creature anymore. Even her aura was weaker than before. Yuan, we need to fly down. Quickly. Yuan let Suwon ride on his back and flew down in a hurry. Suwon maintained enough sense to not get too close. She opened the attribute panel of the centaur. Ancient Guardian. Boss Unit. Level, 30. Status, power is rapidly depleting. Suwon was amused. Even the Guardian felt the brunt of the lake's collapse. She wondered if she could subdue the centaur now. Suwon waited. The centaur's level decreased rapidly until she was only at level 1 in the end. There was no longer any danger from the centaur. Suwon heaved a sigh of relief. She was definitely going to kill the centaur this time. At this moment, the centaur stopped struggling and started sinking. Yuan used his magic. The water became clear, and the body of the centaur resurfaced. The centaur continued to rise. The water continued to flow down. The centaur was still in a daze. Her vision was blurry. She opened her mouth as though to say something. Her body could no longer take it and she crashed on the sand. Suwon looked at the unconscious centaur. She hadn't expected such a strong creature to be at her mercy. The world was unpredictable. Her heavy blade warrior was almost killed in the fight against this same centaur. Yuan got closer and looked at the centaur. She was unconscious. The centaur looked very frail. Her wet black hair covered half her face, making her pale face stand out even more. The two curled horns on her head looked as though they were too heavy for her to carry. She didn't look as ruthless and murderous as before. Her upper body was human with pale skin. She wore simple leather armor that covered her chest. Su Yuan looked away and opened the creature's attribute panel. He knew that this creature had the potential to be the strongest if given the chance. Ancient Guardian. Boss Unit. Level 1, Basic Boss, Strength plus 30%, Defense plus 30%. Potential, SSS. Status, Severely Injured. Class, Heavy Battleaxe Knight, Strength increased by 100%. Vitality, 200 points, recovers 5 points per second. Skill, Immortal Body, a body that contains a weak divine power. Strength increases by 500%, defense increases by 500%, magic resistance increases by 300%, immune to instant death skills, poison, curses, and can quickly recover from any injuries. Abilities. Battle Axe / S grade. Blood and energy will surround the battle axe, increasing its sharpness and sturdiness by 100%. There is a 30% chance of directly killing the enemy. Unparalleled Combat Technique, S grade. Combat Technique solidified to Master rank. Blood Energy Burst, S grade. Burns 50 HP per second, and all attributes increase by 100%. The more HP is burned, the more attributes will increase. If maximum consumption is 200 HP per second, all attributes will increase by 300%. Boss Characteristic, can transform into a 10-meter tall heavy soldier. All attributes will be increased by 100%. Lasts for 6 hours. Can be used once a day. Race Talent, able to run all over the terrain, immune to the negative effects of the terrain. Vitality, for every 10% decrease in vitality, all attributes will increase by 10%, and recovery speed will increase by 20%. Note, a warrior bestowed with great power by the gods. Although most of her power has faded with the passage of time, she still has unlimited potential. This was good. Su Yuan was satisfied by the attributes that he saw. The centaur could indeed become very powerful if given the chance. These attributes were for level 1. If the centaur was at her peak, she could probably arm wrestle with him. The next step was to wait for the centaur to wake up so that she could be subdued and recruited. Su Yuan didn't know if using Lost in the Night or Lord of Darkness would be effective against the centaur. She wasn't a dark type, to begin with. After making sure she wasn't in danger anymore, Su Yuan walked further away. Yuan took out the Crystal of Gloom in anticipation. There was a change in its characteristics. When the crystal was summoned, it would appear in the hands of the person with whom it was bound. At the same time, the person can teleport directly to the crystal's location. The second characteristic made Yuan even more excited. If she placed the crystal in her territory, then she could teleport there from anywhere in an instant. 299 Father and Mother. It was like obtaining a free, magical ticket to take her home whenever she wanted. If that ability was used properly, it could turn out to be very useful. Yuan happily picked up the crystal ball and rubbed it clean. She projected her mind forward, and it entered the crystal. There was a sleeping divine soul in the crystal. The power it emitted was overwhelming. Yuan wondered what would happen when the divine soul woke up. She was really looking forward to it. She looked at the hollow core she had obtained from the lake. The treasure looked unremarkable at a glance, but the energy fluctuation surrounding it was shocking. It was clear that this wasn't an ordinary item. Broken Lake. Characteristic, can summon a lake that will never dry up and will float in the sky. Note, a treasure with magical power. Yuan was in disbelief. This could be useful. Yuan imagined her territory floating in the air where no one could reach it to attack. It would be something extraordinary to build a villa on a lake in the sky. Yuan put away the two treasures. She was in a good mood. She was satisfied with what she had gained from this encounter. She obtained many priceless treasures this time, especially the centaur. Yuan had experienced her combat skills firsthand. She was invaluable. Yuan searched the area to see if she had missed something. However, she didn't find anything else. She didn't continue to search for treasures. What she had gained was already good enough. She wanted to subdue the centaur for now. The weak centaur raised her head. Father, she said weakly as she looked at Su Yuan. Yuan was speechless. Why was she calling Su Yuan her father? Even Su Yuan was dumbfounded. He was a dragon. From what angle do I look like her father? Stop shouting, said Yuan. She was annoyed. Eliza was deep in thought. Why didn't I call him father when he first summoned me? Tisk. I missed my chance. Yuan approached the centaur. Do you remember your name? Farila? My name is Farila, said the centaur. Did father forget my name? Her eyes welled up. She looked absolutely heartbroken. Yuan looked at the aggrieved centaur. She wondered whether Su Yuan had committed the heinous crime of abandoning this creature. After all, did Su Yuan have a relationship with a centaur in the past? Farila, do you remember anything else? Yuan's voice was gentle. Something was definitely wrong with the centaur. Farila looked puzzled. No, I can't remember. Yuan frowned. Had the collapse of the lake damaged her memory and her soul? n/o/vel/b/in.c//om. She sighed. Yuan didn't have the heart to leave such a pitiful centaur behind. Farila, it seems like your job here is done. Would you like to come with us? The tearful centaur raised her head. Her wet hair covered part of her face. Her eyes lit up. Yes, mother. Bah, It's alright to call Su Yuan father, but do I look old enough to be her mother? Yuan was stunned. However, Yuan couldn't really do anything since the centaur's mental state was already fragile. She reached out to pat the centaur on her head. Come then, she said gently. We'll go home now. To be able to recruit a centaur was in itself a great feat. Perhaps it isn't that bad to be called a mother, thought Yuan. Yuan glanced at the attribute panel of the centaur. Farla was still severely injured. She took out some dragon drool grass that she kept with her at all times and extended it to Farla. The centaur's nose twitched. She slowly opened her mouth and ate the grass. Yuan watched her. Mother, this is the first time you have given me a gift, said the centaur happily. The centaur swallowed the chewed grass. She felt as though her taste buds were exploding. Her eyes became clearer. Yuan looked at Farla. She looked so happy. Maybe it wasn't bad raising a daughter like her. Farla's aura stabilized. She slowly stood up. Her aura was still a little weak, but she wasn't going to collapse like before. Her condition greatly improved. The young centaur rubbed her head against Yuan's shoulder. Farla trusted Yuan. Yuan didn't know what to do. She didn't know how long Farla would remain in this state. If she regained her memories, she might just kill Yuan on the spot. Yuan ordered the troops to return to the territory. Farla was especially eager. She was talkative all through the journey. Father, why is the sky blue? Mother, look, there's a fish. Can we catch some fish? Yuan felt calm and relaxed when listening to Farla's endless chatter. Su Yuan, on the other hand, was getting a headache from all the noise. He couldn't begin to think how he had ended up with a daughter from the recent expedition. However, despite his complaints, his lips curled into a gentle smile as he watched Farla jump around in carefree abandon. In the end, even he was affected by the childlike centaur as though she was really his daughter. 20 minutes later, the sand platform flew away from the wide lake and returned to its original place. Yuan turned around to look. The place of broken laws was now one huge lake. Without flowing water to fuel it, perhaps it would slowly dry up. 300 knowledge is everything. It was already fall. It rained continuously, and the day was a bit chilly. The residents had gathered in front of the dark castle to welcome them home. They wanted to know about everything that had come to pass. Whenever Yuan and Su Yuan got back from their expedition, they would have some words for the residents. The residents treated this as valuable knowledge. The residents respected Su Yuan and Yuan so much that they made statues of them to grace the square in front of the dark castle. Yuan dismissed the troops and quietly led Farla into the dark castle through the back door. The maids and servants were surprised to see them. Yuan assigned 2 people to take care of Farla. Su Yuan took a nap. He needed to level up. After a sumptuous dinner, Farla could barely keep her eyes open. She kept yawning. However, the young centaur held on to Yuan's arm and was unwilling to let go. Mother, you won't leave me, right? Asked Farla. Yuan was conflicted. She was uneasy because the young centaur depended too much on her, but it felt good to be a mother, too. When Farla looked at Yuan with a gaze of affection and faith, it tugged at Yuan's heart. Yuan stroked her hair. Of course not, said Yuan. But you need to be good and go to sleep, all right? I will take you to the plantation area tomorrow to show you around. Farla's eyes lit up. She pursed her lips and nodded. She then reluctantly followed a maid upstairs to find her room. The dark enchanter, who was summoned by Su Yuan, felt that this was very strange. Lord Yuan, how did Farla become your daughter so suddenly? Yuan shrugged and leaned back on her chair. I'm not sure. The collapse of the lake must have done something to her. Farla has lost her power, and it must have also damaged her mental state and her memories. The dark enchanter, Eve, nodded thoughtfully. What do you want to do about that? I don't know, said Yuan. There must be a way to restore her memories, but we shouldn't rush. Farla is in a very fragile mental state right now. I don't think she can handle it. Yuan felt that it wouldn't be such a bad thing even if Farla didn't regain her memories. She could always start over. Farla had been a demigod, and she was controlled by the desert fisherman lord. She was at least free now. It must not have been a very pleasant experience being controlled like that. Farla looked happy like she was reliving her childhood. How many people got the chance to be a child again? Eve nodded. She didn't say anything further. Clearly, Yuan knew more about the current situation than she did. Lord Yuan, the dwarves are already requesting to build an alchemy workshop to create alchemy bombs and other weapons. There are no blueprints right now, but Timo said he doesn't need them. What did you say? Said Yuan. They needed your approval, said Eve. She didn't look too happy about that. We need to prepare and obtain more resources as soon as possible. The threat of the light types is imminent. The 6-winged seraphim that the dark demon dragon encountered is powerful, but others are even more powerful than him. To name a few, they have the 12-winged angels, demigods, and even gods on their side. There is also that supreme entity that forced the dark demon dragon to descend to the overlord plane. He is now restricted from reaching his peak until he levels up. It is important to build higher walls for defense as well, said Eve. We need more defensive fortifications, especially after introducing alchemical cannons. Those cannons will be extremely useful in defending the territory. They can deal huge damage to enemies if used properly. The artillery needs to be placed in all 4 directions of the territory, not only on the front. Right now, the territory's defenses still have room for improvements. Nov. L. B //JNN. Eve's words pointed at their biggest weakness. She was right. The defense of the territory still wasn't perfect. Dealing with powerful enemies required strong and efficient military techniques. The core problem was that they didn't have high and sturdy walls. With that weakness, other arrangements found no proper footing. Yuan nodded. She felt a headache incoming. I am aware of the problem. I will figure out a way to solve it as soon as possible. Building fortified city walls required blueprints, and the only ones Yuan found at the marketplace were for ordinary city walls. The kind of blueprints she was looking for would cost around 300,000 units of resources. Yuan had spent all her resources on troops recently. She had no choice but to wait and accumulate more resources. They moved on to other topics. What about the winery and the food workshop? How has that been going on? The two young men who had been converted to heroes had taken over the two departments. Yuan hadn't heard any news after that. The research and development will take a long time, especially since it's fairly new. I'm afraid we'll need to wait a while longer. Others couldn't interfere with the progress. Only professionals could research and develop their fields further with the help of their expertise. Trying to rush the work wouldn't help anyone. Yuan knew that she couldn't expect those two projects to reap any benefits in a short time. She nodded. However, she was still afraid that it might take too long. After Eve left, Shi Linglong arrived at the territory to meet her best friend. I heard you are now a mother to a centaur daughter, she said. I didn't know Su Yuan and you could make babies of entirely different species. Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She knew that her friend was only teasing her, but it still felt so embarrassing. Farla has gone to bed, said Yuan hurriedly.